A shadowy, powerful man held a pink-haired woman and forbid her to ever try to leave him again, asserting that she could not just walk away after breaking him like this. The woman tried to address him as Your Grace, but he rejected the title, demanding she call him by his name, to which she simply replied, "No." His red gaze flickered intensely under his ebony hair, as if he would devour her, and the sharp, howling wind gradually faded away, making it feel like they were the only ones left in this world. Like a ravenous beast, he captured her lips with a kiss. Suddenly, the scene shifted, and a woman with red hair, Clisia, woke up, realizing she had been reading a novel, marveling that the author's writing was truly amazing, especially noting the man's firm palm on the small of the protagonist's back. She expressed how much she had been waiting to get to this scene, but a maid interrupted her by announcing that someone from the royal palace had come to see her. Clisia lamented the interruption of her important scene. She introduced herself as Klisia Mezerin, the only daughter of the lord of the quiet and peaceful Shumarine, representing the Mezerin Viscountcy. She was also the founder of the Northern Duke Research Society at Shumarine Academy. Clisia revealed that she was a genre novel enthusiast, particularly of those featuring the Northern Duke. Her hobby was reading Northern Duke novels, her special skill was memorizing Northern Duke profiles, and her ultimate dream was to marry the Northern Duke. She spent her days peacefully and abundantly like this, even planning her honeymoon in Floria. The maid announced their arrival, and Clisia was surprised, wondering why someone from the royal palace had come all of a sudden, fearing something might be wrong. She decided it must be a guest of her father's, since she had never even been to the capital, let alone the royal palace. The royal palace envoy confirmed Clisia had heard correctly, informing her that His Majesty the Emperor had demanded a divorce from her. Clisia was in disbelief, telling them to hold on, and questioning the envoy about the divorce. The envoy confirmed it was indeed a divorce, but Clisia protested that she had never even met His Majesty and had not even gotten married, so she could not possibly be divorced. The envoy then explained that there was a clerical error in the marriage records at the Grand Temple. Clisia's father was present and looking anxious. The envoy confirmed that due to the clerical error, Klisia Mezerin of the Mezerin Viscountcy was legally married to His Majesty the Emperor on paper. Clisia fainted in shock on the couch. After she recovered, she questioned how this could happen, and the envoy explained that according to imperial law's divorce procedures, the empress was required to seclude herself for 10 years to diminish her political influence, meaning she would not be able to return to the mainland for the next 10 years. Therefore, a relocation order to Rika Island had been issued for the Mezerin Viscountcy. To compensate for this, His Majesty had promised to provide vast lands, wealth, and territories, but Clisia screamed that this was nonsense, questioning if she had to pay for their mistake and asking if they were kidding her. She angrily threw a cup, expressing her outrage. The envoy offered a meek farewell as he left, while the maid tried to calm Clisia down. Clisia continued her outburst, smashing a table. Lord Ryan, her father, asked the envoy if this was truly okay, and the envoy responded that they had done all they could. Clisia's father then asked if she had calmed down. Clisia, sitting distressed, said the more she thought about it, the less sense it made, a point her father agreed with. She questioned if her father was not angry about being treated like this, arguing that since the emperor's side made the mistake, she should not take the blame. Her father, however, regretfully stated that they could not defy a royal decree. Clisia was left in silent contemplation, recalling that her father was a commoner knight who had distinguished himself in war 10 years ago, earning the title of Viscount and the plains of Shumarine as his territory. He had no interest in noble power struggles, lived and died by the royal family's command, and was truly a loyal soldier. Clisia questioned if that meant she also had to obey this absurd order, which was basically 10 years of exile and a divorce at 21, declaring that she had her own life plans. Her greatest plan was to marry the Northern Duke. Suddenly, a fiery creature, Kukas, appeared, telling Clisia not to worry, but unfortunately she was bound by human rules, explaining that she belonged to a grand cycle that governed the flow of the world. Clisia impatiently told the creature to stop talking about the grand cycle, insisting that was not what was important right now. Clisia determined that this was unacceptable and that she would not be sacrificed for her father's chivalry. She resolved to go to the temple and demand answers, and if that didn't work, she would go to the royal palace. Most importantly, she declared she needed to see the face of the man who was supposedly her husband. Kukas appeared as a fiery figure, stating that finally, the cycle was beginning to move. Later that night, Clisia was seen outside a building, catching her breath, and deciding she just needed to stop by the stables to escape. She thought about how the others must have assumed she would go along quietly. She suddenly saw her father in full armor, who realized she intended to go to the capital. He explained that a royal decree was a knight's honor, warning Clisia that if she truly wished to leave, she must first overcome him, the Red Lion of Shumarine. In her attempt to pass, Clisia struck down her father, the Viscount, using the upper-level fire rune she had already mastered, causing a dark wound on his armor. Guards noted that Miss Clisia had passed through the front gate, asking if they should pursue her, but her father, bleeding, declined the pursuit. He mused that it was about time she started moving on her own and believed that with her bloodline, she couldn't just grow up sheltered and needed to go out and face some hardships. The maid attended to the wounded Viscount as he sat leaning against the building, lamenting his back. Clisia arrived at the gateway city Muta, described as a paradise for travelers and the largest commercial district in the empire. The city was always bustling with people and money from merchants all over the continent, as well as numerous travelers, mercenaries, couriers, errand runners, and problem solvers, thanks to it being the only flat route from the south to the capital. Clisia arrived, despite her current appearance, on her horse, Shoe Cream, having covered a 2-week distance in just 3 days by riding non-stop, all in her desperate attempt to see her husband's face. Clisia tried to maintain a normal traveler image and instructed Shoe Cream, who was a mixed breed, to get a grip so their secret would not be found out. But the horse complained about being abused because Clisia had only given him jerky for 3 straight days. She promised Shoe Cream meat in the capital, insisting that there were too many people around. Inside an inn, Clisia breathed a sigh of relief, thinking she was going to starve to death, and noting that their Shoe Cream seemed to have a bit of separation anxiety. The inn's server asked if she was booking for one person, and told her that meals were served right away. While eating, Clisia overheard people gossiping that a man had turned the corner. Clisia thought about how people had said she would suffer if she left home, and debated whether to share some of her food with Shoe Cream, but ultimately decided against it because the portion was too small, not wanting to share. Shoe Cream was revealed to be a hybrid, a mix of dragon and horse, from a time long ago when dragons ruled the land, essentially a divine beast. He was a carnivorous horse, truly a monstrous creature that could cross the continent in a week, so rare and powerful that they were never seen outside the royal palace. Clisia recounted that she had found him on the road, right in the middle of the battlefield where she grew up, having been carried on her father's back, until the war with the Servant Empire ended when she was about 10. She inwardly lamented facing another 10 years of exile just when she thought she could finally enjoy her youth, and pleaded for His Majesty, the Emperor, to be a reasonable person. In Muta, the largest commercial city in the Furza Empire, there was a reigning power sometimes more powerful than the royal family and more revered than the Genesis Temple, Toma Holdings Corporation. Toma's influence had touched every part of Muta, from children's candy to the lifeblood of the black market, and this giant corporation that dominated the Furza Empire's commerce was astonishingly run by a single young man, Toma Ryukin. Toma Ryukin, the founder of Toma Holdings, was then seen instructing an assistant to investigate the increased price of imported hay. Later, Toma questioned his assistant about a horse that belonged to a guest at Toma Inn, asking where it came from. The assistant, who only managed the horses, was unsure if the guest was a noble, but speculated they were probably a commoner since they were staying at the inn. Toma then ordered his assistant to investigate the horse, explaining to another assistant named Luke that to do business, he needed to sharpen his eye. He revealed that the horse was a hybrid, which startled Luke, as it was not a horse a commoner could own. Toma speculated that it would be fortunate if the owner was a common noble hiding their identity for personal reasons, but the situation would be different if the emperor had noticed us and sent a spy. That night, Clisia was sleeping soundly, and 2 petty thieves, who referred to themselves as the Brothers of the Night, broke into her room, believing there was nothing they could not steal. They noticed that the person in the bed, whom they realized was a woman, was not waking up because they had put enough horn mushroom powder in her meal to knock out 10 elephants. They decided they could just calmly take her stuff, realizing she was a noble on the run, and were delighted by the windfall of gold coins and an antique-looking object they found. One thief picked up the object and wondered if it might be worth something, but Clisia suddenly awoke with a flash of power when the thief messed with her stuff, demanding to know if they were assassins. Clisia, glowing with power, confronted the 2 thieves, demanding they answer properly about whether they were after her creta. The terrified thieves insisted they were just thieves, who only came to steal a little money, and did not even know what a creta was. Clisia was skeptical, accusing them of disguising themselves as petty thieves to avoid suspicion and questioning whether she was supposed to believe they had randomly chosen her room to rob. The thieves desperately insisted it was true, explaining their motto was only to target young, inexperienced travelers, and that they would mix a little sleeping potion into the inn's food and sneak in at night. They proudly claimed they were the legendary Brothers of the Night in Muta, famous around there for their motto that nothing in this world was beyond their grasp. Clisia remarked that their method was sneaky, then pointed out that powdered horn mushroom was known to be a sleeping agent. The thieves were surprised that she knew this, and Clisia revealed that the powder did not work on her, explaining that one of the knights of the Red Lion of Shumarine, a young knight known as the Master of Modern Medicine, also called Aunt Lance, had trained Clisia to be immune to almost all poisons through precise dosage control. The knight had made significant contributions on the battlefield where medical supplies were scarce, but her excessive affection for Clisia was a problem, as she believed feeding Clisia strange things was for nutrition, despite Clisia's tongue feeling numb. Clisia clarified that she was immune to most poisons and had only fallen asleep earlier because she was tired, but the thieves were stunned that she could beat up two men with her small stature and was also immune to poison, questioning if she was even human. The thieves immediately began begging her to let them go, swearing they would never steal again because they were desperately poor and hungry, struggling to pay for their mother's medicine for her dementia. Clisia was left in thought, hearing a noise from outside her room. She quickly told the thieves to take the money and leave within 10 seconds. The stunned thieves asked if she was really letting them go. Clisia replied that it looked like they had done bad things but had not drawn blood, so she was offering this as the price for quitting this life, and told them to use the money for their mother's medicine. The grateful thieves recognized her as the Red Witch as they fled. Clisia, thinking about growing up without a mother, realized she had gotten unnecessarily involved. Suddenly, a cloaked figure appeared at her window, and Clisia, on guard, asked if they were in league with the thieves. Meanwhile, Tomer Jukin's spy reported back, giving him details about a boy named Sasha Lin, who appeared to be around 18 years old. The boy had arrived looking like a homeless person covered in dirt and was immediately served food, but he used gold coins from the Imperial Central Bank and talked down to the staff. He ate hastily, as if starving, but observed basic etiquette thoroughly. The spy suspected he was the young heir of a southern noble family and noted that the mixed-breed warhorse he saw in the stable was exhausted, indicating the horse had run day and night for at least 3 days. He concluded that for a noble boy who rides a mixed-breed warhorse to urgently head to the capital alone, hiding his identity, meant he had urgent business there. The spy also reported that he had just confirmed the brothers of the knight were making their move and had observed the boy easily subduing them, saying he was resistant to most poison. The spy then reported that the boy had noticed his presence, so he had withdrawn quickly. He added that he could not identify the kind of rune the boy used, but the boy appeared to be a rune user. Toma, slightly smiling, asked Luke for the latest on the imperial family and whether the old men of Xenia had said anything. Luke replied that there was nothing special from the imperial family. Xenia had only sent details about their financial expenses. Toma deemed that good, then concluded that they had found the emperor's secret agent. Toma declared they needed to meet that boy in person and instructed his people to make contact as naturally as possible. The story shifted to describe the Servan War, which 20 years ago saw the Ashia continent being consumed by the ambitions of the Servan Empire, whose imperial family, possessing the power to shatter minds, swept across the entire continent, committing massacres and plundering. Just as Servan was on the verge of conquering the continent, the Furja Empire, led by the knight Isaac Mezerin, Clisia's father, succeeded in reclaiming the southern part of the continent, a moment that earned him the title of the Red Lion of the battlefield. This marked the beginning of a fierce battle between the two empires, Furja and Servan, and after 9 years of war, the situation completely reversed at the Carian Plains battle. The individual who personally beheaded all the members of the Servan imperial family unified 70% of the Ashia continent, and ended the war was the 16-year-old crown prince, Yan Furja, the sole ruler of the continent's 5 great dynasties. Yan Furja, the youngest emperor who ascended the throne, had been ruling for 10 years, stabilizing the chaotic situation of the Ashia continent. In the present, the emperor was told by an official that the marriage registration with Clisia was submitted 3 years ago due to what must be a clerical error, so according to the documents, he was currently married. The emperor, in full armor, was shocked, asking if he heard that correctly and if he was married. He then ordered the official to quickly cancel it and make sure no unnecessary traces were left. The official explained that it was impossible because the marriage register was under the jurisdiction of the temple and could not be handled by the imperial palace, a revelation that shocked the emperor, as this was the first time the palace had learned of it. The official explained that documents regarding the royal family were all managed by the temple to prevent any manipulation of the royal lineage by those in power within the palace. For this reason, Even the emperor's will could not change the documents. The emperor pointed out that the temple was claiming the documents were submitted correctly 3 years ago, despite the palace's claim that the documents were messed up in the first place. The official explained that the correction period for marriage registration was 1 year, and after that, the document was blessed and sealed, and no one could alter the blessed records regardless of the reason. The official revealed that the emperor's marriage document was blessed 3 times for special reasons. The emperor, furious and glowing with power, demanded to know how the official planned to prove that the woman was not being oppressed or coerced by the emperor's change of heart, threatening that he needed to meet the head of the temple right now. A guard told the emperor to withdraw his rune because they were in the temple. The head priest, in charge of the creation temple, stepped forward and clearly stated that the emperor's marriage record could not be altered and that the rules must be stricter since the emperor was the highest and noblest person in the land. The emperor, the great Emperor Yan Furja, known as a hero and the one who brought the greatest revival to Furja, was inwardly revealed to be a capricious psychopath, a mad dog, a lunatic, and a scoundrel. The emperor, in a rage, threatened to burn down everything or change the state religion. An official, Count Mirhai, was then seen recalling a conversation with the emperor several years ago, where the emperor had ordered him to handle the delayed paperwork, including documents from the creation temple that, by law, could only be reviewed by the emperor. Mirhai complained that he couldn't handle it alone, even with the genius of the century from the academy, but the emperor, annoyed by the hassle and rebel ambushes, simply told him to stop submitting the documents from the temple in the future, even critical ones, and to use his own discretion for financial donations. The emperor's younger brother told Count Mirhai to stop tormenting the emperor, pointing out that Mirhai should have handled the paperwork to avoid problems. Mirhai, however, insisted he went through all the approvals with the emperor. The emperor stated there was absolutely no way to resolve the marriage, but then declared that as long as they were not a married couple, that was all that mattered. The emperor continued his discussion about the divorce, asking who the woman involved was. The official, Count Mirhai, stated that her record existed in the documents, but not just anyone could view the emperor's documents. Mirhai confirmed she was a noble from the provinces, and the only legal way to handle the divorce was through Baron Mezerin's eldest daughter, Lady Clisia. The mention of Mezerin of Shumarin made the emperor question if she was that daughter, the one associated with Sir Isaac Mezerin. An official informed the emperor that Sir Isaac Mezerin was just a knight who received the baron title for his military exploits, and his daughter was 21 this year with no notable issues. The emperor then immediately ordered them to forget about the divorce. The officials worried that this would give the lady a divorce record and noted that there was a law requiring an ex-empress to live in seclusion for 10 years. The emperor, seemingly concerned about another person, was contemplating the situation. Count Mirhai argued that if they followed the formal divorce process, it would not be unfair to Lady Clisia because she would be officially treated as an ex-empress and would receive a huge amount of wealth and lands as compensation, which would not be a loss for Baron's daughter. The emperor's younger brother, Sir Ryan Bardier de Furja, interrupted, asking if the emperor would rather host a national mourning if he did not like the formal process. The emperor, glowing blue with power, was annoyed by Ryan's suggestions, telling him to stop making jokes, and reminded him he was not a 17-year-old child. The emperor then ordered Sir Ryan Bardier de Furja to personally go and guide Lady Klisia Mezerin through the divorce process, telling him to come to the training grounds. Ryan protested, saying Shumarin was 2 weeks away, and questioned if he, the head of the guard, should go personally. Ryan hurried away, trying to avoid the fallout. The story explained that in the Furja Empire, 2 main types of magic were used. Magic, which used rare minerals called mana stones as a medium to perform spells with intricate rituals and calculations, and rune magic, which directly utilized natural energy by assimilating it into the body. Magic was widely spread and used for daily conveniences, but rune magic could only be learned if one's physical traits and affinity matched, making it a power used by a select few. Those with exceptional martial prowess among rune users were called rune knights. The wind rune, known as the power of flow, was specialized in combat, and most rune knights, including Sir Ryan, chose the wind rune. In contrast, the water rune was the power of stagnation, which was less effective in combat due to its affinity. However, the emperor used all 5 elemental runes, making him the only ruler of the continent's 5 great dynasties. The emperor then attacked his younger brother Ryan during training, stating that Ryan was dead if not for him, causing Ryan to increase his distance from the emperor's powerful rune attacks. The emperor criticized Ryan for neglecting his training too much, stating he should have trained him more frequently to be disciplined. Ryan apologized for his performance. The emperor reiterated that Ryan, his only younger brother, would personally go and guide Lady Klisia Mezerin through the divorce process. 2 weeks later, at the Mezerin estate, Ryan was seen departing, and an observer asked Sir Ryan if he was truly okay with the situation. The observer noted that the emperor's brother was weak against Isaac Mezerin, a commoner who had refused the position of commander, but the emperor had even granted him the baron title and land. He thought it might be an approach using that commoner status, but it did not seem like they were colluding. The observer then realized that Ryan, the emperor's brother who gave up a noble life to become the emperor's sword and commander of the imperial elite special guard, still did not know that the uncultured young woman from the simple country estate was Clisia, and the observer wondered what kind of trouble she would bring to the empire. Luke, the secretary to Tomer Ryukin, was talking about the boy named Sasha Lin, concluding that they needed to take action. Luke reiterated the boss's instructions to create connections as naturally as possible. An employee, surprised by a sudden movement outside, asked if the boy was called Suma Mixed Blood, as his identity might be revealed since Suma Mixed Blood only ate meat. Luke confirmed this, saying that they were currently managing him by only providing him water since he was supposed to leave tomorrow. Luke seemed pleased that the boy's identity might be revealed right away. Sasha Lin, a young man, was shown looking confused and asking where he was, who he was, and what he was doing there after waking up and seeing a large meat carcass. A crowd gathered outside a butcher shop, witnessing a horse, which looked more like a monster, charge into the shop, startling the butcher Hans, the owner of Toma Meat. The horse, Shukrim, was seen devouring the meat. Luke arrived, having heard a crazy horse was causing a scene, and called out to Shukrim. Sasha rushed out, asking who could explain what was going on. Shukrim, speaking to Sasha, apologized that it was a misunderstanding and was not intentional, claiming he was suddenly so hungry he didn't realize what he was doing. Sasha, in shock, asked if Shukrim was even human, then ordered him to drop the meat before he turned into horse meat, reminding him it was common courtesy not to touch food even if he was a dog. Sasha apologized to the crowd, excusing himself and asking Hans if he was the owner of that horse, a question that made Hans even more shocked. Sasha was truly sorry for the big mess Shukrim had made, explaining that he usually did not cause such incidents and must have suddenly gone crazy. Sasha mentioned that he was planning to leave Muta today and was startled by the early morning incident. Luke, the secretary, inwardly noted that the boy was not ordinary and was oddly composed, contrasting his calm demeanor with the chaos he caused. Luke explained that he was a bit taken aback by how effective the appetite stimulant in the water for Suma Mixed Blood was, and that the destruction of 3 buildings was unexpected, which he thought would make it easier to bring the boy in. Sasha then brought up the issue of compensation. Hans revealed that the damaged stables and shop, including Toma Meat, were all subsidiaries of Toma Holdings, whose headquarters were right there, making the compensation procedure easier as it would be handled by them. Sasha acknowledged Toma, finding the situation suspicious because of the large compensation amount and the boy's calmness. Luke told Sasha that since the compensation amount was significant, their boss would handle it personally, and Sasha thanked him. Luke then directed his boss, Toma, toward the customer. A man in a dark and gloomy suit, Tomer Ryukin, was seen walking toward the area where Sasha was. Toma heard that Sasha had caused damage to the company. Sasha, seeing Toma, recognized him as the Northern Duke and apologized for the unexpected revelation. The man, Tomer Ryukin, is revealed to be a genius entrepreneur known as the Golden Hand, Toma Holdings CEO, whose real name was Eugene Weiner de Servan. He was the last prince of the Servan Empire destroyed by Ferja 10 years ago, the leader of the rebel forces aiming for the revival of Servan, and the lord of the northernmost Karian Great Plains, the true Northern Duke. He realized the boy was actually a girl, Clisia, who was hiding her gender, a fact he found quite something. Toma thought that judging by the way she held the teacup, she must be a noble, but what was more important was that she knew who he was. He asked her if he could understand what her knowing meant. Toma then coldly ordered his people to dispose of it on the spot, depending on her answer. Clisia, losing her composure, exclaimed about the Grand Duke of the North, then tried to quickly gloss over it, saying Tomer Ryukin just perfectly resembled the Grand Duke of the North, and she had gotten carried away. Toma, suspicious, asked if she had just called him Grand Duke of the North, and Clisia insisted she misspoke, immediately changing the subject to compensation. Toma noted her blatant attempt to gloss over it and wondered if she was playing mind games with him. Clisia asked how much she should pay, and Toma calculated the damage, which included repair costs for 3 buildings, business loss compensation, compensation for mental distress, damaged goods, waste disposal fees, franchise fees, business loan repayment, and compensation for street tree and 2 street vendors. The total came to 50,000 huel, which was about the price of 10 buildings. But because negligent management of the stables was partly to blame, Toma decided to cover 10% of the costs and settle for 45,000 huel. Clisia realized that the business compensation must have added up to that hefty sum, but inwardly told herself it didn't matter because her father's trust fund would cover it, so she would simply endure some scolding from her father, who would follow her to Muta since he was already furious and looking for his ungrateful daughter. Toma found it strange that she understood the value of 50,000 huel, but accepted the exorbitant price so readily, wondering if she was testing him. Clisia then realized she did not have the cash on her and asked if she could step out to withdraw it from the Imperial Bank. Toma's assistant informed Clisia that there were no banks in Muta, so she would have to go to the capital, and because her identity was unknown, they could not allow her several days without collateral. Clisia, thinking her horse was worth 50,000 huel, offered Shukrim as collateral. Clisia realized that since Shukrim had destroyed buildings and eaten the meat, Toma must have discovered he was a mix of dragon and horse, meaning Toma must also know she was not an ordinary commoner. Clisia inwardly called herself an idiot for not having money and asked Toma how she was supposed to get to the capital. Toma then offered to let her accompany him in his carriage since he also had business in the capital. Toma's assistant, surprised, asked if Toma was going to the capital with that girl, then worried that it could be a trap set by the imperial side. Toma explained that the easiest way to see through a person was to keep talking to them because no matter how skillfully someone fabricated lies, contradictions and gaps would eventually appear, revealing their hidden traits. Since the journey from Muta to the capital was a full day's journey, Toma decided he would leisurely uncover whatever she was hiding. While in the carriage, Clisia thought the situation felt awkward and tried to compliment Toma by saying he looked just like the Grand Duke of the North. Toma suspected she was trying to test him, so he acted natural, saying he had no ties to the North and was just an ordinary businessman. Clisia could not read his expression, so she asked if he did not know what the Grand Duke of the North was, indicating she knew what she was doing. Toma decided to engage in a high-level psychological battle, agreeing to the companionship. Clisia then proceeded to quiz Toma about the Grand Duke of the North, asking what the correct action would be if his beloved woman fell in the hallway, offering 3 choices involving killing innocent people, which Toma repeatedly got wrong by pointing out the options made no sense. She then asked a descriptive question about what he would do if the emperor ordered his fiancée to go to a battlefield where death was certain. Toma said he would have to obey if it was the emperor's command, to which Clisia exclaimed that was incorrect, revealing that the Grand Duke of the North, who was in fact Toma himself, would never say that. Clisia then revealed her idealized image of the Grand Duke of the North, whom she believed was strong, resilient, mysterious, and much more, including unparalleled in bed. Toma tried to change the subject, but Clisia, oblivious, proudly declared that he was lucky, sir, because she happened to be one of the leading experts in the northern anti-aircraft field. Toma thought about the situation in disbelief and realized that this journey would be the longest of his life. Clisia and Toma Dukin arrived in the capital, Sigrid, which Clisia remarked had so many beautiful buildings. Clisia was excited, thinking that she was finally free. She asked Toma if she could now take the money to Muta and exchange it for her horse, thanking him for the ride. Toma, after ordering her to step down and calling her milady, said nothing more. Clisia was stunned by Toma's heavenly face, but remembering her standards for a northern duke, could only give him 60 points, since she only recognized a northern duke if he scored at least 90. Toma was bewildered and asked why she thought he would do such a thing as kidnap and imprison her. Clisia bid farewell to the Grand Duke, walking away. Toma's assistant asked if Toma had revealed his identity and was letting her go, but Toma said no to the identity revelation and simply ordered him to leave her be, as there was no need to worry about her any longer. Toma was internally distracted, thinking that the last royal of Servan, Sir Eugene, who had been driven by a desire for revenge against Ferja after losing his homeland, had fallen in love. Toma's assistant questioned his decision, finding the woman suspicious, but Toma ordered them to head to the capital office. Toma sighed, realizing he thought he would go mad the entire journey because Clisia, who possessed a small body with seemingly endless energy, never stopped talking day and night about the Northern Duke. He was tired and declared that she had bewitched him, but then quickly corrected himself, insisting he was not bewitched. Clisia, walking in the capital, realized that Toma knew she was a woman all along. She regretted talking too much. She approached the great temple, where they had said the mistake in the marriage registry occurred, resolving to stay calm and get the situation resolved. She shouted for anyone to hear her, announcing herself as Klisia Mezerin from Shumarine, requesting an audience with the high priest. The temple, which was supposed to receive worshippers constantly, was suspiciously quiet. A little priest, after confirming that Clisia was not a vagrant, informed the high priest of Clisia's request, identifying her as the heir of the Mezerin Viscount family and Lord of Shumarine. The high priest was pleased with the priest's handling of the situation and confirmed that she had left, saying that she was not allowed into the temple because there was someone she needed to meet before him. Clisia, outside the empty temple, lamented that she was hungry, having missed meals because of all the talking she did about the Northern Duke, but decided she would withdraw money from the bank today and visit the great temple tomorrow, resolving to break down the door if they did not believe her. She decided to stay at a hotel since her identity was already exposed. Clisia then decided to go to the free meal distribution in the plaza, acknowledging it was shameful to take what was meant for vagrants, but that she looked pretty rough herself. She arrived at the plaza, but the distribution had ended, leaving Clisia frustrated that she had to survive in a city she had never been to for 2 whole days with no horse and no money. The only silver lining was that her precious Creta was still safe. Suddenly, the Creta was gone, and Clisia was panicked, asking Toma, who now stood before her, if he was the one who took it. Toma, holding the Creta, thought Clisia might have accidentally left it behind. Clisia was furious, calling him a fake Northern Duke, accusing him of bewitching her with his seductive face and figure. The assistant, Luke, denied that Toma had bewitched her. Emperor rejected Count Mirhai's suggestion to conduct official tours to avoid confusion about his identity, even though Mirhai stressed how recognizable the emperor's blonde hair and constant outings made him, causing trouble for the guards. The emperor found such procedures too bothersome. Mirhai then proposed a potion that would change the emperor's pigmentation for about a day without significant side effects, though its effects would wear off immediately if he used a root. The emperor found this potion quite useful, and confident that his changed appearance would prevent any problems, ordered that even the guards not be told about it this time. Mirhai, recalling his nickname, Master of Modern Medicine, revealed the potion was originally a hair loss treatment that had unexpected side effects. The scene then shifted to 10 years after the war, showing Ferja having revived to the point where traces of the war were hard to find. But new problems had arisen. The emperor, now in disguise, observed a free meal distribution center and questioned if there were truly so many starving people for such a thing to operate, especially since it had been a long time since the relief decree was issued. He wondered what his court officials were doing and decided to call Mirhai immediately upon his return. He then saw that the free meal distribution was over, lamenting that today was a bust, but luckily they distributed on weekends. Suddenly, he noticed a woman disguised as a man, Clisia, whom he recognized as a high-level fire rune user due to her energy. He questioned who this person was, as there were less than 10 such users in the entire empire, and one was pretending to be a vagrant. He decided to find out directly and approached Clisia, asking if she would be interested in employment for a while. Clisia, surprised, stated she was not a vagrant and was very handsome, but then firmly rejected the offer, declaring that her type was the black-haired, red-eyed Grand Duke of the North, and blonde hair and green eyes were merely side character traits. The emperor, acting as Detective Ray Vaughn, offered to provide meals if she wanted, and Clisia eagerly accepted, saying she would do anything as long as the menu was meat, acting like a pig. Clisia introduced herself as Sasha Lin, and the emperor as Ray Vaughn. She then pointed out a man, accusing him of adultery and cheating on his wife, urging the emperor to follow him and catch him in the act. Clisia enthusiastically yelled at Sasha to go, watching as the adulterous man noticed them. She told Sasha to stop him, but the man used a wind rune to escape. Clisia, frustrated, called it unfair, but the emperor used his own rune magic, impressing Clisia as he chased the man. He realized the man was not just a petty criminal and continued the pursuit, entering a building he identified as a meeting place, with a bronze plaque engraved with 4 sevens. Clisia wondered what kind of adultery happened in such a shabby place, and the emperor called it a lucky box. The dark auction house lucky box, identified by the numbers 7777, was introduced as a place where the client requested something, and they would get it, whatever it may be. Since all items were put up for auction, clients had to wait until their item was successfully auctioned off, which could be troublesome. However, with a 96% completion rate, the Lucky Box had become the largest intermediary guild in the empire. The auction manager expressed concern about a tail being attached to the best expert in Lucky Box and wondered how that could have happened. The expert confidently stated he had shaken them off. He revealed the contents of the lucky box to be an assassination plan against His Majesty the Emperor, which he considered a jackpot. Clisia, disguised as Sasha, arrived and was told by Toma to go back because the situation was dangerous, and to not mention what she had seen that day. Clisia argued that if it was dangerous, Toma should not go either. Clisia asserted that she would rather go herself, questioning how someone as delicate as Toma, a detective, could wander around alone. Toma ignored her, simply telling Sasha that he would definitely buy her meat next time, and for today, she should not worry and go back. Inside the auction house, the masked auctioneer thanked the ladies and gentlemen for visiting Lucky Box again, while guards confirmed that they could not find any traces of a tail. The auction for runs like the wind concluded, selling for 650,000 Yule. Clisia, who had managed to get inside, was shocked by the scale of the operation, realizing that serious crimes like slave trading were happening. She believed that given the scale of the situation, it would be better to call the imperial guards rather than try to solve it alone. Suddenly, the disguised emperor, who was following her, found her. Clisia had worried about the detective and followed him, but Toma noted her suspicious appearance and asked how she got in. Sasha explained that the guards were pretty useless. The auction for the Suma mixed blood, the slave boy, began with a starting bid of 100,000 Yule, which the auctioneer found beautiful and mysterious. Clisia was distraught, questioning what they had fought for 10 years, seemingly forgetting about the current adultery investigation. She exclaimed that slave trading was illegal and called the people involved trash. Toma, holding the creta, intervened, telling the boy, the slave, to stay close to him. The boy, startled, asked what Toma was doing, but Toma, glowing with power, ordered him not to interfere, asserting that he would save him. Toma explained that the people thought they had several rune users under their command, but they should know that rune magic had its limits, especially for advanced fire rune users, most of whom had never seen one in their lifetime. Toma then unleashed a massive fire rune, engulfing the area in flames. The building was destroyed, but Toma thought he had not meant to go that far and that it had been a while, so he could not control his strength. He apologized to the now freed slave boy for interfering, but the boy, who had blue hair and black skin, expressed his anger, threatening to remember Toma's face and never forgive him. Toma, maintaining his composure, gently touched the boy's head, telling him they had saved him, not interfered, and that he should not point fingers at adults like that. Toma, realizing the boy was a mer, a type of magic similar to a rune, then let two cloaked figures take him away. Toma's assistant, Luke, arrived and asked what was going on, surprised to see the disguised emperor. Toma instructed Luke to sort out the situation first, and for now, to lay low and be careful, as the auction house people would be snooping around. Clisia, seeing Toma, complained that he had left without saying goodbye and that she was hungry, reminding him of his promise to treat her to meat. Toma explained that he couldn't control his strength due to not having used his rune in a while, and the mission had been too risky. Toma's assistant, Mr. Seta, expressed concern that if the Sultan found out, he would be furious. Seta asked who the brown-haired man next to the emperor, the redhead, was, but Toma's assistant replied that the person was unfamiliar, only knowing that the rune user was female. Toma, still disguised, confirmed that mer magic had stabilized, and he and Seta had to hurry back to their homeland now that the emperor was aware of the situation. Toma recalled how the mer boy's aura felt familiar and wondered if he would meet Sasha again. Meanwhile, Ryan, the emperor's brother, was shocked to discover that the emperor, who had ordered him to let the woman go, had left the slave auction, which was connected to the Servan Empire and the assassination plot. Ryan, the captain of the guards, arrived at the scene of the fire, where the cleanup was almost done, and civilian casualties were thankfully minimal. He muttered about the emperor making a mess again, but acknowledged that he had at least managed to control his strength. Ryan found a bronze plaque with 4 sevens at the scene. He also received a report about the crisis of the Empire item, confirming that all the thugs involved had been caught, and the item had not been sold. He realized the Servan Empire, which had been destroyed by Ferja, had remnants that survived, and were now going to attack the Emperor after 10 years. Ryan was curious to see what expression his brother, the Emperor, would make. Tomer, now in his ancestral home, Eugene's hideout in the capital, was informed by his assistant that Zhenya's movements were suspicious, as they planned to attack the Emperor directly. Toma was shocked, calling it nonsense that they made this decision without reporting to him, the head. The assistant explained that the elders were discontent with Toma's plan because of the long preparation and were in a frenzy to capture the emperor as soon as possible. Toma, dismissing them as impatient old men, ordered his assistant to discard Genya, stating there was no need for obstacles that hindered revenge, and that his plan was perfect. The nobles and retainers of Servan, who survived the war with Ferge, had formed a secret group called Genya and hid in various parts of Ferge, concealing its teeth and claws to someday restore the glory of Servan. Toma acknowledged that the elders' impatience was understandable, given that 10 years had passed since the war ended. However, he knew that surviving the war meant they had never met Jan Ferge in person and did not know who he truly was. Toma mused that he would have to check out the secret weapon Genya prepared. His assistant, concerned, asked if he was going to the scene himself, calling it too dangerous and suggesting he send a support team instead. Toma refused, stating he would not help the emperor, even if he was stupid and must have found a way to infiltrate the palace. Toma, still disguised, decided to sightsee in the imperial city while they were there. Clisia, wandering in the capital, was distressed because her luggage had suddenly vanished while she looked away, leaving her with no assigned seat and no place to sleep. She cursed her unknown husband, the emperor, and the swindling detective, vowing never to forgive them for making the capital so cold and harsh. A young boy, who was new to the capital, offered Clisia a sandwich, which he got for free from the dining hall and intended to give to someone hungrier than him. Clisia was touched by his kindness, finding the capital surprisingly warm. She asked why there were so many homeless people in the capital, remarking that she heard it was the richest city. The boy explained that the poor gathered in Sigrid, the capital, and that the emperor directly oversaw the capital, providing abundant relief and even jobs if one was lucky. Clisia revealed she was originally from a rural village called Shumarine and barely made it to the capital after a long carriage ride, to which the boy responded that poor people existed in Shumarine too. He talked like a noble, and Clisia, annoyed by his naivete, told him his majesty would not end all poverty. Clisia, who was wasting a sandwich, was told by the boy to give it to a beggar. Clisia's appetite was ruined by the rotten smell, and she wondered where these rats were coming from. She then became enraged, yelling at the boy and daring him to know who she was, asserting that her father would not let this slide. Guards arrived, called by the victim, the youngest son of a judicial official, whom Clisia had slightly hit. Clisia was surprised by the strictness of the capital, noting that back home, they would just shake hands and be done with it. She realized she could easily escape using a rune but was too hungry to care. The guard's captain demanded Clisia's name, age, hometown, and purpose in the capital. Clisia, staying calm, claimed to be Lady Clisia of the Shumarin's Viscount family, there to see the high priest and the empress. When asked for an identity card, she stated it was stolen. The guards then concluded that Clisia's name, age, and occupation were unknown, raising the possibility of illegal entry. They noted that she exhibited severe logorrhea or delusions, significant violence, and antisocial behavior, thus requiring ongoing behavioral observation, and ultimately 3 months imprisonment. Tomar Yukin, in his ancestral home and hideout in the capital, discussed Genya's suspicious movements with his assistant, who reported their direct plan to attack the emperor. Toma was angered by their decision, made without his knowledge, and by their discontent with his long preparation plan. He learned they had a trump card to capture the emperor and were eager for revenge. Toma, dismissing them as impatient old men, ordered his assistant to discard Genya, stating that obstacles hindering revenge were unnecessary, and his plan was perfect. He recognized that while 10 years had passed since the war, Genya's members had never met Jan Ferge in person and did not truly know the emperor. Toma mused he would check out Genya's secret weapon. His assistant, concerned, warned him against going to the scene himself, suggesting a support team instead due to the danger. Toma refused, stating he would not help the emperor, whom he believed must have found a way to infiltrate the palace himself. Toma, still disguised as Sasha, continued sightseeing in the imperial city. Clisia, disguised as Sasha, was distressed after her luggage vanished, leaving her with no place to sleep in the cold and harsh capital. She cursed her unknown husband, the emperor, and the detective, vowing never to forgive them. A young boy offered Clisia a free sandwich, explaining that the capital was warm because the emperor provided abundant relief and even jobs. Clisia revealed her origin from Shumarine, and the boy acknowledged poverty there too, but she corrected his noble-like talk, stating that the emperor would not end all poverty. Clisia became enraged when the boy suggested she feed her sandwich to a beggar, yelling at him and daring him to know who she was, asserting her father's influence. Guards intervened, arresting Clisia for assaulting the youngest son of a judicial official. Clisia, frustrated by the capital's strictness and her hunger, realized her identity card was stolen, and she was imprisoned for 3 months, suspected of illegal entry, delusions, violence, and antisocial behavior. In prison, Clisia found the situation unfair, lamenting that she was not innocent and shouldn't be there, despite everyone else claiming innocence too. She realized that the horn mushroom's sleeping scent was effective and that the antidote was working. While in prison, she overheard Genius serve an assassination squad preparing for Operation Eliminate the Furja Emperor, scheduled for tomorrow night. Clisia pretended to be asleep, but realized she couldn't ignore the assassination plot, especially since it was taking place inside the imperial palace with seemingly no guards present. She decided she had no choice but to report this to the authorities. She ran to the palace, desperately calling for her brother, Ryan, the emperor's guard. Ryan was surprised to see her, noting that she had dodged him well until now. He confronted her about the auction house incident and her potential involvement in slave trade. The emperor in disguise told Ryan that was not the issue right now and ordered him to the inner garden immediately, where he had prepared a gift. Ryan was suspicious, but the emperor insisted he trust him. Tomardukin's assistant observed that the imperial palace seemed too easy to infiltrate and that no guards had been seen. Toma then deduced that Genia's secret weapon was involved and that their helpers had taken care of the guards in advance, confirming his suspicions. Toma ordered his forces to scatter. Ryan, upon seeing the true nature of the trap, yelled at Toma for using him as bait. Toma, surrounded by magical restraint tools, explained that Genya had nearly emptied their budget on these tools, believing Freja's rune magic to be strong, but also assuming they couldn't counter basic magic. He clarified that Freja did not use magic in combat because it was weak and inefficient, and that the restraint magic could be broken with brute force. Toma, revealing his true strength, declared that everyone was in range. Tomardukin, still disguised, entered the imperial palace, noting that Genya, the secret society continuing Servan's legacy, had not remained idle during Ferja's triumph. He realized they resorted to bribes, black markets, and gambling dens to amass funds and train assassins, all to someday restore Servan's glory. Toma, having waited 10 years, was impatient with their poor judgment, especially since they had never met Yan Ferja in person and did not truly know who he was. He discovered that Genya believed the emperor's younger brother had betrayed him, which Toma considered a ridiculous story, certain that Ryan would never betray his brother. Meanwhile, Ryan, the emperor's brother, was furious, realizing Toma had used him as bait in Genya's trap. Toma, surrounded by magical restraint tools, explained that Genya had spent nearly their entire budget on them, believing Freja's rune magic to be strong, but also assuming they couldn't counter basic magic. He clarified that Freja did not use magic in combat because it was weak and inefficient, and that the restraint magic could be broken with brute force. Toma, revealing his true strength, declared that everyone was in range. The building was destroyed, but Toma thought he had not meant to go that far and that it had been a while, so he could not control his strength. He apologized to the now freed Mer slave boy for interfering, but the boy, who had blue hair and black skin, expressed his anger, threatening to remember Toma's face and never forgive him. Toma, maintaining his composure, gently touched the boy's head, telling him they had saved him, not interfered, and that he should not point fingers at adults like that. Toma, realizing the boy was a Mer, a type of magic similar to a rune, then let two cloaked figures take him away. Toma's assistant, Luke, arrived and asked what was going on, surprised to see the disguised emperor. Toma instructed Luke to sort out the situation first, and for now to lay low and be careful, as the auction house people would be snooping around. Clisia, seeing Toma, complained that he had left without saying goodbye and that she was hungry, reminding him of his promise to treat her to meat. Toma's assistant, Mr. Seta, expressed concern that if the Sultan found out, he would be furious. Seta asked who the brown-haired man next to the emperor, the redhead, was, but Toma's assistant replied that the person was unfamiliar, only knowing that the rune user was female. Toma, still disguised, confirmed that Mer magic had stabilized, and he and Seta had to hurry back to their homeland now that the emperor was aware of the situation. Toma recalled how the Mer boy's aura felt familiar and wondered if he would meet Sasha again. Meanwhile, Ryan, the emperor's brother, was shocked to discover that the emperor, who had ordered him to let the woman go, had left the slave auction, which was connected to the Servan Empire and the assassination plot. Ryan, the captain of the guards, arrived at the scene of the fire, where the cleanup was almost done, and civilian casualties were thankfully minimal. He muttered about the emperor making a mess again, but acknowledged that he had at least managed to control his strength. Ryan found a bronze plaque with 4 sevens at the scene. He also received a report about the crisis of the Empire item, confirming that all the thugs involved had been caught, and the item had not been sold. He realized the Servan Empire, which had been destroyed by Ferja, had remnants that survived, and were now going to attack the emperor after 10 years. Ryan was curious to see what expression his brother, the emperor, would make. The emperor in his true form found Clisia, who was still wearing her prison uniform in the imperial palace gardens, where she was asking Ryan about the auction house incident and if she was involved in slave trade. Clisia, upon seeing the emperor, questioned why he was there and if he was unaffected by the situation. The emperor, recognizing her as Lady Mezerin, expressed surprise, asking what she was doing there. Clisia, determined to meet with the emperor directly, demanded a proper explanation and the lifting of her exile. She vowed to confront her husband today and declared she would not let a single rat escape from the premises. Clisia, as she tried to escape, asked the emperor how she could catch Lord Ryan, to which the emperor found her curiosity unbelievable. She then changed her target, declaring she would go find her dear husband. Ryan, now standing with the emperor, questioned if the emperor could control his strength, pointing out that the floor of the imperial garden was cracked. The emperor, surprised, saw Toma Ryukin appear in front of him, holding Clisia, who was still in her prison uniform. Toma questioned what was going on, asking Clisia about her outfit and if she was escaping from prison. Clisia, still in shock, asked Toma why he was dressed like that, and if he was going to cover her title with a false identity. Toma, admitting he initially thought she was mentally unstable, realized she was no ordinary person, as she possessed martial arts skills and carried a demonic creature, admitting he had been duped by her. Clisia then rated Toma as a Northern Duke with 95 points, since he had earned her respect. Toma, who had been trying to catch Clisia for some time, offered a truce, suggesting they call it even since they both seemed to have their reasons for their actions. Clisia, still in her prison uniform, readily accepted, telling Toma that he was letting this slide too easily. Toma, in turn, told her that he had safely kept the important sword that she had given him. He then suggested they do something about her attire. The capital was in chaos, just as Toma Ryukin, Eugene's godfather, had expected. Luke, Eugene's secretary, confirmed that Ryan's defection was a ruse and Genia's secret base had been completely subdued. The Ryukin family, publicly known as Toma Ryukin, was actually a vassal clan that had managed Servan's slush funds for years, backing Toma Holdings. Toma believed that being swayed by trivial matters would prevent them from achieving great things. Toma acknowledged that he had been fully supporting Genya until now, even allowing them to take the slush funds after Servan's downfall without question, all because of his investment in Prince Eugene himself, not the Servan Empire. Toma's true goal was to claim the throne of Servan, revive the empire, and reclaim the lands taken by Ferja, especially from Yan Ferja, whom he vowed to tear apart with his own hands. Toma's assistant, surprised by his intensity, noted that Toma was neither a politician nor a soldier, but a businessman who prioritized recognizing a person's value. From that day forward, the Ryukin family would serve him, the sole heir to Servan. Toma's assistant also reported that Toma had gone out earlier and returned with a woman whom the staff had cleaned up. The assistant, Master Hammer, wondered if he had misjudged Toma, as he was in his prime, and a romantic relationship was not out of the question. Toma explained that he couldn't let Clisia into the room looking like she did, and the staff seemed to have gotten the wrong idea, but it couldn't be helped. Clisia, now in a proper dress, entered, relieved to have had a bath. She confirmed that the sword she had left with Toma was returned safely. Toma offered her a guest room for the night, but Clisia, emboldened, asked if he would make time for her tomorrow. She revealed that she had found her identity, implying the identity card, and apologized for underestimating him, but then she attacked Toma, saying he could have avoided the beating if he hadn't underestimated her, because she was a woman. Clisia then revealed her plan to go to the bank to pay back her debt from Muta, using it as an excuse to secure an identity. Eugene had no idea that what he thought was the end of their connection would lead to an enormous truth. An official informed Toma that there was no record of anyone named Klisia Mezerin in the Ferja Empire's registry, a revelation that shocked Toma. Toma, now back in the palace, told his assistant that the entire capital was in chaos, but that Ryan's defection had been a ruse and Genia's secret base had been completely subdued. Toma, who was holding the Creta, then turned to Clisia and, calling her lady, suggested they do something about her attire. Clisia was now dressed in a new outfit. Toma returned the important sword he had kept safe for her, and she thanked him. Toma offered her a guest room, but Clisia asked if he could make time for her tomorrow, as she now felt confident enough to tell him that she had found her identity. Clisia confessed she completely forgot about the debt from Muta, but would pay it back immediately at the bank, admitting she only used the debt as an excuse to secure an identity, and that she had no choice but to take the money and end this. Eugene had no idea that what he thought was the end of their connection would lead to an enormous truth. An official informed Toma that there was no record of anyone named Klisia Mezerin in the Furja Empire's registry. Clisia, having changed out of her prison uniform and now wearing a fine dress, ran toward the palace, still intent on finding her husband. She believed she had found her identity by recovering her ID badge. Clisia arrived at the bank, planning to pay back her debt from Muta, but then realized that the debt served as an excuse to secure an identity, and if she paid it back, it would be suspicious. Eugene, unaware of the impending truth, thought this was the end of their connection. An official informed Toma that there was no record of anyone named Klisia Mezerin in the Furja Empire's registry, a revelation that shocked Toma. Toma, now in his true form, arrived at the imperial palace. He received reports from his secretary, Luke, and his godfather, Hammer Vukin, confirming that Ryan's defection was a ruse and Zhenya's secret base had been subdued. The Vukin family, publicly known as Tomar Vukin, was actually a vassal clan that had managed Servan's slush funds for years, backing Toma Holdings. Toma reiterated his goal: to claim the throne of Servan, revive the empire, and reclaim the lands taken by Furja, especially from Yan Furja, whom he vowed to tear apart with his own hands. Toma's assistant noted that Toma was not supporting Zhenya for the sake of Servan, but was rather betting on Prince Eugene's potential. Toma's assistant reported that Toma had gone out earlier and returned with a woman whom the staff had cleaned up. The assistant, Master Hammer, initially questioned Toma's judgment, as a romantic relationship seemed out of character, but Toma explained he couldn't let Clisia into the room looking like she did, and the staff seemed to have got the wrong idea, but it couldn't be helped. Clisia, now in a proper dress, entered, relieved to have had a bath. She confirmed that the sword she had left with Toma was returned safely. Toma offered her a guest room for the night, but Clisia, emboldened, asked if he would make time for her tomorrow. She revealed that she had found her identity, implying the identity card, and apologized for underestimating him, but then she attacked Toma, saying he could have avoided the beating if he hadn't underestimated her because she was a woman. Clisia then revealed her plan to go to the bank to pay back her debt from Muta, using it as an excuse to secure an identity. An official informed Toma that there was no record of anyone named Klisia Mezerin in the Furja Empire's registry. Toma then saw Clisia running in the palace, still intent on confronting her husband. He watched as Clisia complained about her name not being in the Empire's registry and insisted that she was Klisia Mezerin, even showing her ID badge. The official, after checking multiple times, confirmed that the Mezerin Viscounty family currently only listed Isaac Mezerin. Clisia was shocked, exclaiming that it was impossible. The official then found a record for Lady Klisia Mezerin de Furza, which startled him. The official, astonished, asked if she was saying this lady was a Furza, implying a member of the royal family. He dismissed it as nonsense, stating that only 2 people currently held the Furza name, and it would be impossible unless she was the empress herself. The official wondered if there had been a clerical error. Clisia, hearing this, then asked why they weren't correcting it if it was true. The official quickly escorted her inside, into a VIP room at Ziggurat Bank. The Ziggurat Bank president greeted Clisia, honored to have her there, and explained that the royal family's records were managed separately from ordinary citizens. He apologized for her surprise earlier and acknowledged that they were unaware of an empress. Clisia, realizing she was indeed the empress, questioned how this could be and wondered why the divorce was still pending. The president, misunderstanding her, explained that the trust fund withdrawal she requested was not possible because the product had a 20-year maturity and a special clause preventing early termination, unless Isaac Mezerin, the trustee, personally terminated it. Clisia was dismayed, realizing her father did not trust her. The president then offered her an alternative: to use her spouse's account, since the emperor had immense personal wealth separate from the imperial budget. Clisia was surprised, but reasoned that since it was the emperor's fault for the paperwork error and delayed divorce, and she was going to be paid massive alimony anyway, using a tiny bit of his money now would be like an advance. Toma, watching Clisia, was intrigued by her unpredictable nature. His assistant, Luke, confirmed that Clisia was carrying a black card, an ultra-rare premium VIP card with unlimited use across all regions, rumored to have fewer than 10 in the entire Furza Empire. Toma decided they had things to do and left with Clisia. Toma's assistant recognized Toma as the tycoon whose assets rival the Empire's entire budget, Tomar Vukin. The Emperor, seeing Clisia with Toma, was shocked, realizing who she had run into. The Emperor was frustrated that the divorce process was so complicated, requiring the imperial couple to declare their consent in person and have it recorded magically. Received a letter from the Mezerin Viscounty stating that Lady Clisia had run away and was missing. The Emperor, furious, ordered his guards to find her themselves. He muttered that he was losing patience with her, despite her being that person's daughter, and decided he would find the 21-year-old woman with red hair himself. He realized that Isaac, Klisia's father, was using the fire rune. The emperor, recalling what they had been fighting for 10 years, became enraged, realizing slave trading was against the law, and that Tomer Yukin was involved. He looked at his own medal on his chest. Clisia, dressed in a beautiful gown, expressed her confusion and disbelief that her name was not in the empire's registry, despite identifying herself as Klisia Mezerin and showing her ID badge. An official repeatedly checked the records, confirming that the Mezerin Viscountcy only listed Isaac Mezerin. Clisia was shocked, exclaiming it was impossible, but then the official found a record for Lady Clisia Mezerin de Furza, which astonished him. The official, bewildered, asked if she was truly a Furza, dismissing it as nonsense since only 2 people held that name, and it would be impossible unless she was the empress herself. He wondered if a clerical error was to blame. Clisia, hearing this, demanded why they weren't correcting it if it was true. The official, now convinced, quickly escorted her to a VIP room at Ziggurat Bank. The Ziggurat Bank president greeted her, honored to have her, and explained that the royal family's records were managed separately. He apologized for her earlier surprise, admitting they were unaware of an empress. Clisia, realizing she was indeed the empress, found herself questioning the entire situation, particularly the divorce. The president, mistaking her musings for concern about a trust fund, informed her that a requested withdrawal was impossible due to a 20-year maturity and a special clause preventing early termination unless Isaac Mezerin, the trustee, personally terminated it. Clisia was dismayed, recognizing this as a sign that her father did not trust her. As she urgently needed cash, the president suggested using her spouse's, the emperor's, personal account, which held vast wealth separate from the imperial budget. Clisia considered this, reasoning that since the bureaucratic error and delayed divorce were the emperor's fault, and she was entitled to massive alimony, taking a small advance on his wealth now seemed justified. Meanwhile, Tomer Jukin, concealed, observed Clisia, finding her increasingly unpredictable. His assistant, Luke, presented him with a black card, an ultra-rare VIP card with unlimited use, and Toma decided it was time to move, leaving with Clisia. As they departed, Luke acknowledged Toma as the tycoon whose assets rivaled the empire's entire budget. The Emperor Ryan witnessed Clisia's departure with Toma, realizing the gravity of whom she had encountered. Ryan reflected on the complex divorce process, requiring mutual consent and magical recording, noting that imperial divorces were virtually unheard of for generations. He was frustrated by this bureaucratic entanglement. He then received a letter from the Mezerin Viscountcy reporting Clisia as missing. Enraged by her disappearance to avoid confinement, Ryan cursed his guards for their uselessness and vowed to find her himself, despite her being that person's daughter. He remembered Clisia's red hair, her age of 21, and that her father, Isaac, used the fire rune. Ryan, looking at his military medal, became furious at the revelation of illegal slave trading, realizing that his adversary was involved, and this reignited his decade-long fight against the Servan remnants. In his full military regalia, Ryan appeared before Lord Mirhai, questioning him about Lady Mesrin's appearance for missing person flyer. He described her red, long hair and almond-colored eyes, noting her gentle and youthful impression. Mirhai added that she was wearing a prisoner's uniform with the number 3358, was barefoot, and extremely dirty. Ryan, having been to the Mezerin estate, told Mirhai not to joke, as this was a direct order from His Majesty. Ryan insisted he wasn't joking and stated that if what he said was correct, Mirhai should take responsibility. Mirhai was bewildered, asking why Ryan hadn't left for the Viscount's estate yet, reminding him of the Emperor's order. Ryan, empowered by a glowing rune, defiantly declared he was going now. Mirhai, while acknowledging Ryan's personal business in Shumarin, instructed him to handle it urgently, as Clisia was a very important person, and the missing person notice needed to be distributed without fail today. Ryan, in turn, ordered Lord Hans to urgently approve payment for replacing the training ground floor, emphasizing it was a direct imperial order that needed immediate resolution. A young boy in the city discovered an urgent wanted notice for prisoner number 3358, with a reward of 500,000 fuel, recognizing it as Clisia's prison number. The young boy then found Clisia, who, after beating up a young master who called her a red-haired punk, had regained her ID badge, now seeing him as a noble. Clisia, identifying herself as Big Sis, gave him a letter of introduction and some money, telling him it wasn't much but should cover his travel expenses to Shumarin. She expressed regret for making him return to Shumarin, a place that probably held bad memories for him, and asked him to wait for her until she returned. Clisia, now in her fine dress, ran back to the palace, reminiscing about how she grew up without paying attention to rank on the battlefield, learning to act based on necessity. She acknowledged that this made her quite different from a typical noble lady. She was now determined to pay back her loan. Toma, observing Clisia, pondered her complex identity: a hidden empress, a rune user with serve and war experience, a criminal record including imprisonment and escape, a local noble, and a black card holder. He wondered how he could keep her around longer. Clisia, having earned 95 points from Toma in their Northern Duke game, reminded him of his earlier promise to submit to kidnapping or imprisonment if she scored above 90. Toma, surprised, recalled her earlier statement, but questioned if that permission was still valid. A red-haired woman shouted at our man, asking how there could be a divorce when they were not even married. She insisted that she had told him she did not want to go. The man asked who would say yes to being kidnapped, but the woman countered by asking if she had not clearly given her permission. He wondered why this was happening all of a sudden, so the woman stated that she became interested in the lady right after she received a black card. The man claimed that was not his intention, and then asked if they would become strangers once she paid off her debts. He explained that he wanted to get to know her better, but the barrier of social status was too high, so he concluded there was no other way. The red-haired woman stared at him with a determined look and then turned to walk away. The man asked where she was going, and she replied that she was going to the bank. The man then began to follow her, so the woman started running away from him down the street. A panel identified her as Klisia Mezerin, a 21-year-old woman. After 10 years of military life, she was supposed to be enjoying a peaceful existence in the Mezerin Viscounty, but her life was not working out that way. Clisia was a graduate of Schumann Academy's Civil Engineering Department, who had also read over 100 Northern Duke novels, yet she had zero dating experience. She thought the man was insane for trying to charm her with just words. Clisia then wondered if his personality was her type, and considered following him since his looks were a pass. She briefly contemplated how to catch him, but then told herself to snap out of it because she did not come to the capital to find love. The man called out to the lady, so Clisia turned and told the president to listen well. She declared that she knew he had fallen for her stunning beauty, but she was actually married. As she spoke, the man grabbed her, pulling her close, and he tried to hold back his laughter. Clisia asked what was going on, so the man asked what the matter was, and then showed her a wanted poster. She was shocked by what she saw on it. The poster was for Klisia Mezerin, 21 years old, with a bounty of 500,000 kr. It described a young woman with long red hair and almond-shaped eyes, who was listed as prisoner number 3358. The notice stated she had escaped, was on the run, and was under investigation for multiple serious crimes. A special note warned citizens that she was highly dangerous, and they should be cautious. The Imperial Emergency Wanted Notice offered a 500,000 fuel bounty, and strangely noted she must be around 100 years old. Clisia stood trembling, asking why this was happening. A text box repeated her earlier words, questioning a divorce without a marriage. A clear blue sky was visible, which had a few white clouds. Horses were running fast, and riders galloped through a forest clearing as they continued their journey. A blond man named Sir Mirhai sat in a room before he was startled, and sighed with resignation. Outside, Sir Mirhai was leaning against his carriage, looking very unwell. He wondered aloud how an important man like the Emperor's advisor could get such severe motion sickness. A white-haired man, Sir Ryan, retorted that they had been traveling at full speed for a week, so he should not be expected to feel fine. Sir Mirhai suggested it was because Sir Ryan stayed inside the carriage and would feel better if he got some fresh air on horseback. Sir Ryan replied that riding a horse for 7 days straight was abnormal, which is why nights were different. Sir Mirhai then announced that this was where they would part ways. Sir Ryan recalled that Sir Mirhai had mentioned having business in Schumann from the beginning, so Sir Mirhai asked what brought Sir Ryan to such a rural place. Sir Ryan paused for a moment before explaining that there was something he needed to confirm. He thought about how Sir Mirhai always complained about leaving the capital, yet here he was. Sir Mirhai sighed and decided he should just focus on his mission. Elsewhere, a red-haired man coughed in bed as he greeted Count Mirhai, saying he had heard of his reputation. The white-haired Count Mirhai, also known as Sir Ryan, bowed, and said it was an honor to meet him. Man in bed apologized for not being able to greet him properly because of his poor health, but Count Mirhai clarified he was just there to find the missing Lady Mezerin. The man in bed claimed that the wicked girl had attacked him in the night and left him in his current state. Count Mirhai observed the man's healthy appearance, an out-of-place water bag, poorly wrapped bandages, and casual clothes, concluding he was faking his illness. The man clutched his chest dramatically. Count Mirhai was frustrated, knowing the man was aware of the situation but still acting this way. He asked the man how he was supposed to help with her running away, and if there were any clues to her whereabouts, or at least a direction. The man claimed he did not know because it was late at night, and mused that a parent cannot fully understand their child's heart. Count Mirhai stated that if that was his stance, there was nothing more he could do, and then he placed a document on a table. The document cited an imperial law, stating that relatives of the royal family were obligated to use all means to protect the royals. Count Mirhai explained this meant the Mezerin family had to personally search for Lady Klisia Mezerin. The man in bed laughed, calling it a joke because the Mezerin family consisted of only himself and Clisia, and they had few servants to help search. Count Mirhai corrected him, saying there were others who could help, reminding him of the Red Lion Knights under his command. The man, Viscount Mezerin, yelled back that the knights had been disbanded right after the war. Count Mirhai calmly stated that the Viscount still had the right to reassemble the knights, which made a servant wonder if this was going too far. Count Mirhai insisted it was not going too far. He explained that due to a clerical error, the lady was now the Empress of Phrygia, so her disappearance had to be taken seriously. He asked for Viscount Mezerin's cooperation, assuring him they were doing their best to search from the capital. The Viscount promised that once he felt better, he would do whatever they wanted. Later, the Viscount was alone and lamented being told to mobilize the knights. He then theatrically cried out that Clisia had broken his ribs again. Suddenly, a magical grid appeared in the room, and Sir Mirhai appeared in a flash of magic, creating a mess and asking what was going on. A servant rushed to Sir Mirhai's side, asking if he was all right, while Viscount Mezerin looked shocked. Sir Mirhai announced that he was suffering from travel fatigue, which confused the Viscount. Sir Mirhai claimed he could not move because of his travel and motion sickness. He then clutched his chest, saying his wound had opened, which made Viscount Mezerin realize he was also faking an illness to respond to the Emperor's order. A servant called out to Sir Mirhai, who was now on the floor. He claimed to be dizzy and unable to hear anything, while the servant kept trying to get his attention. Indeed, the two men were engaged in a pathetic fight. Outside the estate, a servant called for his lord, as the narrator wondered who would win this pathetic fight. A town crier announced to all citizens of the empire that from that moment on, if they saw Klisia Mezerin, they should report her to the capital guard. The crier held up a wanted poster for Clisia, describing her as a criminal with red hair and almond-shaped eyes, and instructed the public to report her immediately. In the crowd, Clisia noted to herself that she actually had green eyes, as the people around her began to murmur. The city was filled with whispers about the wanted woman, and later that evening, the streets were quiet. That night, the city seemed still. The man with Clisia observed that the place they were in seemed pretty deserted, so Clisia fell to the ground in shock while holding her own wanted poster. She became enraged, vowing to kill the blonde knight who she believed was responsible. The man asked if the knight was her husband's younger brother, but she cryptically replied that it was more than that. Now wearing a black hooded cloak for disguise, the man commented that the situation had become tricky and asked if she had a way out. Clisia looked up at him with a thoughtful expression, then touched her chin, and asked if his earlier offer of kidnapping was still on the table. They then traveled to the capital's Ziggurat Temerica port at night, where many ships were docked. A man told Clisia to mind her step as she got out of a carriage, and she stood with the man and his secretary, who announced their arrival. Clisia realized they were at the capital's largest port. Looking out at the water, she wondered how things had ended up this way. She was already frustrated about being framed, imprisoned, and breaking out, and now there was a bounty on her head. She noticed the man's secretary glaring at her intensely, but the man simply called her Milady and led her forward. He told her that he had prepared a ship for her. Feeling she had no choice but to trust him, Clisia asked if smuggling was really necessary, as she had imagined just hiding in a small villa or basement for a while. She reasoned that as the president of Toma Holdings, he must own some buildings in the capital, but he replied that it would be difficult. He explained that the bounty on her head was astronomical, so a simple slip-up could expose her, and that he never fully trusted people. He then stated that they would be crossing the ocean on one of his personal ships, which made Clisia question if the situation was really that serious. As she looked around, her eyes fell on a small rowboat. She asked in disbelief if that was the ship they were taking to cross the ocean, but the man grabbed her and said it was not that one, leading her in a different direction. Before them was a massive, luxurious sail ship, leaving Clisia speechless. It was the Tabasonic, the largest ship in the empire, equipped with a magical engine and capacity for over 1,000 people, featuring hundreds of rooms and numerous amenities. Clisia stammered, asking if they were really taking that ship, and the man confirmed they were. He took her hand and told her that the entire voyage was for her alone. Until that moment, Clisia had been in a state of denial. Despite her strong mentality from her time on battlefields, the recent string of incidents, losing her belongings, theft, homelessness, and imprisonment, had finally led her to smuggling, which felt like too much for one person to handle. But now she had resigned herself to her fate. Standing on the deck of the ship with her arms outstretched, she felt a sense of freedom. The secretary approached and asked what she was doing, and she replied that it was every girl's dream. She then turned to the man and admitted that while it was odd to ask after he had helped her, she was worried. She asked if he was sure that helping a wanted criminal wouldn't cause him trouble, pointing out that the Empire would immediately notice if such a large ship suddenly set sail. After a moment of thought, the man suggested they sit and talk it over, and he picked her up as she agreed. With a snap of his fingers, a table with food and a map appeared. He assured her that everything was perfectly fine because the Tabasonic was officially authorized to operate on an exclusive route, so no one could make an issue of it. He explained that their destination was one of Toma tourism's most popular courses, pointing to the Floria dukedom on the map. Clisia was stunned, recognizing the name. The man confirmed it was the only nearby territory with permanent sovereignty granted by the Empire. Clisia exclaimed in excitement, realizing it was the famous Floria, ranked #1 as a place to visit, a retirement spot, and a honeymoon destination. The man calmly confirmed it was that very same Floria. As he sipped his wine, he said it was about time she told him her true identity. He explained that if he had recklessly kidnapped the Empress, he could be in danger too. The man thought to himself that since he had helped her so much, she had no reason to hide the truth any longer. Clisia hesitated for a moment before beginning to speak, saying, "The truth is..." As the ship sailed into the night, the story opened in the Duchy of Floria, an island located at the southernmost part of the Asia continent. The island was described as a beautiful retreat for nobles, with a mild year-round climate, emerald seas, and vibrant coral reefs. A red-haired woman thought the place was a true paradise on earth. She joyfully ran through the flowers toward the water. She felt that this was Floria itself. A man with dark hair approached the lady, holding her shoes for her. She delightedly commented on how soft the sand was and pointed out the coral and seashells. The man reminded her that his title had changed to Northern Lord. He then warned her that walking on the sand barefoot could be dangerous. The lady insisted she was fine because the soles of her feet were quite tough. She suddenly wondered why there was a rock on the sandy beach. It turned out she had stepped on a man's chest, so she apologized. The blonde man asked if the young lady was all right. He was then introduced as the 12th Grand Duke of Floria, Andrew Famir La Floria. The dark-haired man told the lady that this was the Grand Duke of Floria. The lady greeted the Grand Duke, but he told her there was no need for formalities because Floria was not a stiff country. The lady remarked that it was a very open place, and the Grand Duke seemed very open-minded. The dark-haired man called out to Andrew. Andrew greeted the dark-haired man as his brother and asked how long it had been. The lady asked the Northern Lord if he knew the Grand Duke, and he confirmed they knew each other for business. Andrew assumed the young lady was his brother's companion. Since that was the case, he placed a golden hibiscus, a flower native only to Floria, in her hair. He said the flower perfectly matched her sunlit hair, as if by fate. Andrew welcomed the young lady to Floria and told her she would be treated as the most honored guest. The Northern Lord thought to himself that Andrew couldn't help himself around beautiful women. He then noted that, unfortunately, this particular woman had very specific tastes. She only liked men with black hair and red eyes. The lady then flirtatiously asked Andrew what being an honored guest meant. She asked if he would personally guide her through one of Floria's attractions, the night market. As she was about to continue, the Northern Lord interrupted, calling her lady. He told her it was time to head to their lodging. She seemed disappointed that they were leaving already. The Northern Lord told her that her current clothes were too warm and that he would prepare new ones for her. Andrew asked if she really wanted to go, and she excitedly said yes, right away. She told the Northern Lord she wanted to wear something that matched the flowers. Andrew commented that this was an unexpected side of her. The group then went to the Hukin family's villa in Floria. Andrew returned and cheerfully greeted his brother. The Northern Lord, who was now alone, noted that it had only been 30 minutes. Andrew jokingly said it was disappointing to be treated with such suspicion and asked if the Grand Duke was not busy. The Northern Lord asked where the lady who came with him was, so Andrew told him he had sent her to the shopping district. Andrew explained that she seemed to enjoy shopping more than he expected and that it might take her a few hours. He then said he was just curious to see her transformation, but the Northern Lord asked if that was the only reason he came. Andrew told his brother to calm down. He said that no matter how daring he was, he wouldn't dare touch Prince Servan's woman. The Northern Lord clarified that she was not his lover. Andrew replied that he didn't need to know how far their relationship had progressed. He then changed the subject, addressing the Northern Lord as Eugene and mentioning he had heard interesting news. He brought up a recent commotion at the imperial palace in Fergia. He then asked if his brother was involved. Eugene stated that what happened in the empire was not his concern. Andrew reminded him not to forget that he was neither anyone's ally nor their enemy. He declared that Floria was a conflict-free zone, and he would not forgive anyone who caused trouble in his land. Meanwhile, at Viscount Mezerin's estate, the Viscount was speaking to Count Mirhai. He slowly told the Count to quit. The Count, who was lying in bed, pretended not to understand, saying his illness was too severe. The Viscount called him a despicable wretch, pointing out that he had been lying in bed for weeks. The Count thought to himself how comfortable it was and that he never wanted to go to work again. A servant burst in, calling for his master. The servant reported that their guest had left through a private gate and that he had just received a letter from the capital. He announced that there was an urgent order for the young lady's arrest with a bounty of 500,000 jewels. The Count was shocked to hear about the bounty. The servant added that the young lady was seen boarding a ship at the harbor with a mysterious man the previous night. The Count demanded to know who the man was and where they went. The servant explained all they knew was that the ship was owned by Tomo Shipping. The Count declared this was his failure. He decided things had gone awry and that he would return to the capital immediately to take responsibility. The Viscount told him to wait. He mused that he believed wandering was a necessary part of growth and had wanted to leave his daughter alone for a while. However, if flies had started to gather around his daughter, that was a different story. He ordered his servant to prepare Alice, as they were heading to the capital. On a particular day, Midhai departed for Mezerin, completely unaware of the difficult journey that lay ahead. The Imperial Guard captain, Ryan Bardier de Ferja, set out on horseback, his destination being the Shumarin Academy. His investigations centered on Klisia Mezerin, who had become the Empress through a simple clerical mistake. Initially, Ryan believed she wouldn't be a significant concern. However, he grew suspicious of her relationships, particularly her connection with Eugene, the Prince of Servan, and her close ties to her brother, Isaac Mezerin. Ryan sat and thought, convinced there was more to their relationships than met the eye. He decided that when faced with uncertainty, his best course of action was to investigate directly. He knocked on a door, where he met a woman, and asked if she was associated with Bukdion. She introduced herself as Amber Korn, a mathematics professor and the head of the Bukdion Society, expressing her pleasure in meeting him. Ryan confirmed her position as the head of the society, recalling that Klisia Mezerin's official file contained only 2 pieces of information about her. The first was that she had graduated from the civil engineering department at Shumarin Academy, and the second was that she had founded the academic society known as Bukdion. Bukdion was known to be a mysterious organization, with its activities and even the meaning of its name remaining unknown. Ryan suspected it was a front for something else, and introduced himself as the Imperial Guard captain. Amber Korn calmly explained that Bukdion valued academic passion above all else, regardless of a person's status. She firmly stated that academic freedom was a fundamental right that not even the imperial family could suppress. Ryan was taken aback by her bold words, thinking she was quite daring for someone he had just requested member lists and activity details from. Amber reminded him that access was prohibited for non-research purposes and demanded to know his true intentions. Ryan realized that she was not intimidated by his rank and that her group was not ordinary. Deciding to play along, he insisted his purpose was purely for research. He claimed a deep, long-standing interest in the topics Bukdion studied and questioned if any other institution in the empire conducted more in-depth research. After a brief pause, Amber agreed to consider his request, but informed him he would first need to pass an entrance test. She explained it was to verify he met their group's basic standards, and Ryan consented. He found the situation amusing, musing that he, a man considered a genius by imperial professors, was being tested by a relatively unknown mathematician from a rural academy. Amber presented him with the first question, to choose the most appropriate combination from a list. The options were various color pairings. Ryan was completely baffled by the strange question. He stared at the paper, trying to make sense of it, then looked at Amber, still confused. It dawned on him that it must be a code. He wondered if the color combinations held a secret meaning or if they were a metaphor for something else entirely. He had never encountered such a cipher before and decided his only option was to guess. Just as he was about to answer, he had a sudden insight and asked her to wait. But Amber declared that his time was up and he had failed the test. She instructed him to leave and started to walk away. Ryan stood up, protesting that he had asked for another moment. He challenged her, suggesting there was an error in the question itself. Amber stopped in her tracks. The narrative noted Amber Corn's background as a prodigy who had made significant academic contributions from a young age, even refusing a prestigious position as chairman of the Empire's Academic Society. She had chosen to stay at the modest Schumann Academy out of her love for a particular academic society. Amber turned back to Ryan, asking him to explain his claim about an error. Ryan stated that the question was incomplete. He argued that it was impossible to choose the most appropriate combination without knowing the context or what the items were being combined for. He added that a proper explanation of each item's meaning should have been provided first. Amber then patronizingly called him escort guard and questioned if he had tried to join their society without understanding such basic principles. She said she disliked students who lacked skill and perseverance, but because of his apparent enthusiasm, she would give him one more chance after he mastered the basics. She handed him a piece of paper with a series of codes written on it. Amber told him that the door to truth only opens for those who knock, and then she departed, leaving Ryan alone. He soon found himself in the Schumann Academy library, standing amongst the tall bookshelves. As he examined the classification numbers on the spines of the books, he had a moment of epiphany. He realized the codes Amber had given him corresponded to the library's book classification system. He thought about Bukdion's secrecy and its encrypted entrance process, wondering how such a society could exist hidden within a simple rural academy. His curiosity was now greater than ever. He decided to start with the first code on the list and pulled the corresponding book from the shelf. The book, with the code BCA 113, was titled The Northern Duke's Bedchamber is Eternally Cold. This resonated with Ryan, as he himself was the lord of the northernmost territories and the only duke in the empire, making him the true Northern Duke. He continued his search, finding a series of books all related to the Northern Duke, 2125, 2126, 2127. Overwhelmed, he sank to his knees, realizing how ignorant he had been. He felt humbled by the depth of pure scholarship around him and how small it made him feel, which made him chuckle. This discovery made him reconsider a past event involving Eugene, wondering if Eugene's actions were motivated by him also being a Northern Duke. Inspired, Ryan resolved to try harder to become a true Northern Duke himself, momentarily forgetting his actual duties. Elsewhere, two unidentified men discussed Mirhai's departure, one asking why he had gone, and the other admitting he did not know. One Northern Duke was realizing his new identity. Meanwhile, another Northern Duke was enjoying a flamboyant night out. People in a crowded night market wondered about the emperor discussing divorce for a couple that was not yet married. The scene showed the lively Floria night market. A red-haired woman and a man in a dark suit walked through the crowd. The man looked on with a serious expression. He asked the lady to slow down a bit. The red-haired woman ran ahead cheerfully. He turned back, urging the northern boss to hurry up. The man asked if she was that excited, and she enthusiastically said she was. The woman exclaimed that a night market felt like a dream summer vacation. She told him how much she loved her new dress because it was light, comfortable, and pretty. The woman then asked the northern boss if he felt stuffy and suggested he change, but he told her he was fine. She suddenly got distracted, pointing and asking what was over there. Anne thought to himself that she was chaotic. She called out to her boss, telling him to come on because something was about to start. He smiled slightly, deciding it was fine as long as it wasn't bothersome. He asked what was starting as they approached a small stage. It was a puppet show about to begin, telling the legend of Asha, the great dragon. The story began long ago when the world was full of evil monsters. A dragon named Asha wanted to protect the weak humans. So, Asha and her friend Kukas created land for the humans. They also gave humans a token of covenant to grant wishes. This token symbolized that Asha and Kukas were on the side of humans. The woman remarked that the story was very similar to the founding legend of Fredja. The man explained that because Floria Island is part of the Ashia continent, the legend of Asha, the dragon, is shared by all its nations. The woman added that it was the same where she was from too. The man was taken aback and asked if she wasn't from Fredja. He fell silent, looking thoughtful after his question. He recovered by saying he grew up in a secluded area as a child, and then suggested they head back as the show was ending. As they walked, the woman noted it was interesting that the token of the covenant in the story was a flower, because for them, it's a sword. The man continued walking with a troubled expression. He wondered to himself if he had just made a slip of the tongue. He reminded himself that he was Tomer Ryukin, not Eugene Weiner. He had always used a strict spell to prevent himself from revealing his identity, even while sleeping, so he couldn't understand why this had happened now. The scene returned to the town square at night. The woman asked what was happening. She saw a crowd gathered and asked if there was a fight. The man explained that it was a martial arts tournament, a local tradition. She asked for clarification, and he explained it was a purely hand-to-hand tournament with no runes or weapons allowed. The objective was to either make the opponent surrender or push them out of the ring. He added that this was the only kind of combat the pacifist king permitted. In the ring, a large man named Reuben, the martial arts king, challenged anyone in the crowd. He confidently called for any challenger to step forward. A man in the crowd commented that it wasn't an event a lady would be interested in. The crowd murmured in surprise as the red-haired woman appeared in the ring. The man in the suit watched as she entered the fighting circle. She asked Reuben directly if she would win if she beat him. Reuben addressed her condescendingly as Little Miss. He told her to go to a playground if she wanted to play house and warned her not to cry if she got hurt. The woman simply called him Mister and asked if he was scared. The man in the suit looked on from the side. The crowd buzzed, calling the woman a tough lady and questioning her noble status, while the man thought the show would be fun to watch. The fight began with a flurry of motion. The woman moved with incredible agility. She gracefully dodged Reuben's punch. He continued to attack, but she evaded every move. Reuben struggled, unable to land a single blow. The crowd was amazed that Reuben couldn't touch her, with some heckling him not to make the pretty lady cry. Frustrated, Reuben called the crowd idiots. He realized that she was intentionally holding back. He wondered how she wasn't tired and if she was some kind of monster. The woman, however, was having fun. She thought that since it was just a game, there was no risk of serious injury, and it would be rude to the audience to end it too quickly. She felt happy because it had been a long time since she could fight to her heart's content. The crowd jeered at Reuben for losing to a skinny woman and fretted over their bets. Reuben grit his teeth in disbelief. He roared that he was Reuben, the martial arts king. The woman thought this was fun and that it was a safe game, so ending it quickly would be rude to the audience. She recalled it had been a while since she could fight freely, as the crowd booed Reuben for losing to a thin woman and worried about their bets. Reuben was in disbelief, thinking she had to be kidding him. He proudly declared himself Reuben, the martial arts king, once more. Then he unleashed a powerful attack against her. She braced herself as the attack flew toward her. Her companion watched in shock from the sidelines. Reuben had illegally used the Rune of Wind. Her companion was stunned, wondering how she managed to dodge a rune-imbued attack. Reuben cursed in frustration and prepared for another move. Suddenly, the woman was struck by an unseen force. She looked down and saw that she was bound by chains. The man with black hair looked on, his expression turning to anger. There was a large splash in the water surrounding the ring. The crowd stared in confusion. Reuben was now floating in the water, having been knocked out of the ring. The man now stood in the ring, holding the woman safely in his arms. A spectator commented on how impressive it was that the man had appeared out of nowhere. The referee scolded Reuben for using a rune. He confirmed that using runes was grounds for disqualification, so Reuben had lost. The referee then declared the lady the winner. However, he then remembered that according to the rules, anyone who enters the ring is considered a challenger. Therefore, he proposed that the man and the woman should have a match against each other. The man looked surprised by this turn of events. The woman, however, was delighted and exclaimed, "Wow!" The two of them now faced each other in the center of the ring. The title of the story was displayed. A warning message from Violet Scans was displayed, asking readers to read the series on their official website to support the team. A notice from Violet Scans was shown. The exterior of the Shumarine Academy was depicted. Inside the Bukdion conference room, students were talking among themselves. A male student with dark hair commented that something was remarkable. He then explained that no student had ever achieved a perfect score on the entrance exam since the society was founded. A blonde student stood holding a paper with his scores. The text below read, "We're not even married, so what's with the divorce, Your Majesty?" The title of the series was displayed again. It was explained that the Bukdion entrance exam was not actually that difficult. The reason was that one could pass by simply memorizing all the related books. The blonde student Ryan was congratulated, and he told the president he looked forward to working together. The professor began to guide Ryan through the society's activities, explaining that the Northern Duke Research Society, or Bukdion, aimed to understand the Northern Duke. Ryan smiled at the explanation. After clearing his throat, Ryan told the professor he had a question. The professor asked Ryan if he knew about the Duke's disappearance incident. The professor assumed he knew such basic information and pointed to another student, asking her to explain, which made the girl gasp. The female student stood up and explained that the duke's disappearance happened in the third year of Emperor Jan Furja's reign. She continued, saying the current emperor had taken the throne at age 16, just after the Servian War. Because of this, high-ranking nobles were dissatisfied. As a result, they continuously attempted assassinations and rebellions. Emperor Kim Gukbi then stripped 6 duke families and 11 marquis families of their titles, which became known as the duke's disappearance. The student added that after this event, no titles higher than count existed in Furja, but Ryan asked if there were exceptions. The student confirmed that only 2 families kept their ducal titles. She identified these families as the emperor's maternal family, the Rakinuis, and the founding family of Furja, the Bardier. The professor then asked who was the head of the Bardier family, and the student answered that it was His Imperial Highness, Duke Ryan Bardier, the emperor's younger brother. The professor praised the student for being well-informed, and then asked about the location of the Bardier Duke's estate. The student replied that it was on the northeastern border of the empire, including the Sarai Mountains. The professor confirmed that her answer was correct. Ryan smiled confidently. He then announced that he was the northern duke they had been searching for. The students in the room fell silent. The female student declared that what he said was not true. She stated that student Ryan was His Highness the Grand Duke. Ryan smiled. The female student shouted that he couldn't be the duke because he did not have black hair. Ryan was shocked and asked if that mattered, even though he was the northern duke. The students began to murmur. One said his eyes were blue, and another said the northern duke could not be so lax, leaving Ryan confused. The professor slammed her hand on the table. She shouted for them to stop talking. The students immediately quieted down and sat properly. The professor announced that because they had a new student, she would go over the annual seminar schedule for Bukdiyon. She pointed to a calendar on a display board. She warned that all members, especially new students, must attend or their membership could be revoked. Ryan raised his hand to ask the professor a question. He asked if the seminar was on the same day as the founding day, and the professor confirmed it was a long-standing tradition. Ryan was shocked, remembering the Imperial Guard captain. As the professor explained the location was the Grand Hall on the 4th floor, Ryan worried that it would be problematic for the palace to be empty on founding day. He wondered if this situation was a big deal. He raised his hand again to get the professor's attention. Ryan asked if he could make a suggestion. The scene shifted to a view of the gateway city, Muta. A brown horse was shown eating meat. A stable hand remarked that a horse that only eats meat was a terrifying sight. A white horse named Shukrim thought that its current situation was the best, as it had been left as collateral and could eat 3 meals a day without working. A woman named Clisia approached a man, telling him the light was growing. The man stood up. Clisia asked if there was a new customer, and the man confirmed that a group of travelers had just arrived. He noted that their horse was also a Suma hybrid that only ate meat and wondered how common they had become. He began to say something about the people. Shukrim recognized the brown horse and called out to Alexandro. Alexandro asked Shukrim why it wasn't with Clisia, so Shukrim explained it ended up staying there and asked Alexandro what was going on. Alexandro suddenly became alert. It told Shukrim to wait a moment. Alexandro realized that if Shukrim was there, it meant something important had happened. A man with red hair appeared and called out Shukrim's name. A caption announced that Isaac and Mirhai's group had entered Muta. A white-haired man noted that Mirhai went straight to their accommodation and wondered why everyone was rushing a 2-week journey into one. The red-haired man, Isaac, saw Shukrim and asked why it was there, so the stable owner explained the horse was collateral. Isaac expressed his shock that the horse was collateral. A document was shown. A flashback showed a red-haired woman. Isaac despaired because his daughter had borrowed 50,000 jewel in loans. The stable owner confirmed the loan and explained that a separate management fee for the collateral would be charged, thinking to himself that this meant 25 portions of beef daily. In a flashback, Isaac's daughter had told him she trusted only him, while he thought she was wandering aimlessly. Back in the present, Isaac stated that he had to solve his own problems and that the lady would handle the loan repayment. The stable owner refused this arrangement. He pointed to Shukrim and asked if that creature hadn't caused the loss in the first place. Isaac was speechless, so the stable owner asked if words could pay off debts. The stable owner explained that Shukrim was a Suma hybrid that could run like the wind and pull several wagons. He suggested that sending the horse to a mine would make it worth the work of dozens of adults. Isaac shouted at Alexandro to talk to Shukrim. Alexandro wondered how it was supposed to do that. Alexandro explained that only their master, who possessed a Shaz bloodline, could communicate with Suma hybrids. A red-haired woman was shown standing in the middle of a crowd. People were gathered in the city square. A dark-haired man was shown with a startled expression. The red-haired woman placed her hand on the dark-haired man's chest. The man addressed her as Northern Boss. The woman asked if they were finally going to have a proper face-off. The woman was pictured in a vibrant field of flowers. The man told her he could match her pace. He then asked if she was really okay with this. The dark-haired man was shown standing in a garden at night. He stated that this time he would take things seriously. The man and woman faced each other at a formal event. The title of the series was displayed again. The chapter's credits listed the staff from C-Route, Next Level Studio, and Dream Tune, followed by a message from Violet Chan of the translation team. A final page from the scanlation team provided a link to their Discord server and announced paid hiring positions for Korean translators and editors. The man asked the lady if she was really okay with this. Held in his arms, she replied that this time she would take it seriously. The man resolved that he wouldn't let his guard down. He internally acknowledged that this woman was strong. He concluded that taking her on carelessly would only lead to embarrassment. While stretching, he clarified that while he wasn't trying to be completely serious, he wouldn't let his guard down easily. He then got into a ready stance. He announced they were ready and then gave the signal to start. They rushed towards one another to begin their match. As he went to kick her, he thought about the target area. He aimed for her legs. He fell to the ground, defeated. She had dodged his attack and now stood over him. Lying on the ground, he simply stared up at her. She asked him what he was doing. He called out to the lady. He then informed her that her legs were exposed. The man looked flustered. In response, she kicked him in the face. He was sent flying backwards into the water. A crowd cheered, noting that he didn't last longer than someone named Ruben. A Korean text bubble was shown. The story then shifted to a scene at Floria Harbor. The man and woman walked together along the docks. The man, now identified as the Northern Lord, was approached by the lady. She asked if he was still out of it because of their match the day before. She admitted she felt a bit sorry for attacking when he let his guard down, but she considered it a clean knockout, so the man said that being careless is also a skill and it was a fair match. The man changed the subject, saying more importantly, he wanted to know what the lady would do now. He recalled that when she went to the capital to report a clerical error that made her a wanted person, she somehow ended up as a fugitive. He had heard it wouldn't be resolved by just staying there for a few days. She replied that for now, she would write to her family, but was interrupted when the Lord pointed towards something in the distance. She was shocked to see a pirate ship. He explained that they occasionally dock there with the king's special permission. He assured her not to worry, because Floria is a no-conflict zone. The lady became excited at the thought of pirates. She romantically imagined them as sea thieves who rule the ocean and steal girls' hearts. She excitedly asked the Lord if she could take a look, promising not to cause any trouble, which made him question if she knew she was prone to causing trouble. The Lord agreed, but cautioned that those people might be a certain way. The lady wondered why he was being cautious. She looked on with curiosity. A crowd of haggard-looking people were disembarking, with one man begging for bread and another asking not to be pushed. The lady asked if they were really pirates, but the Lord clarified that they were not. He informed her that they were refugees. He explained that during the Servan War, the small countries around Ferja and Servan were annexed. Those who couldn't settle in Ferja ended up staying on the ship. He added that no country accepts refugees. A man from the ship explained that because they have no nationality, they must fly the pirate flag to avoid being disturbed by real pirates. He added that, thankfully, the king of Floria understood their situation and occasionally allowed them to receive supplies. The lady couldn't understand. She recalled that the Emperor of Ferja had accepted even the defeated servants as citizens. She questioned why there were refugees if the emperor had said he wouldn't drive out the residents. The refugee man asked if she was a noble. He asked rhetorically how everyone could live well when a war breaks out. He stated that some people take, and others have things taken from them, questioning if the emperor could truly care for every single citizen. The lady listened intently. The man continued, wondering what could be done when the Fergians had already filled the lands that once belonged to the refugees, even if they cried out for injustice later. Two men behind him scoffed at the idea of there being no poor people, calling it a noble-sounding statement. The main refugee told the lady he had gone on for too long, and that she should leave if she was finished looking around. The Northern Lord looked on grimly, stating that this was reality. He thought about Yan Ferja. He reflected that on the surface, Yan Ferja pretends to be a war hero and a wise ruler, but the truth is different. The lady recalled how His Majesty Emperor Yan Ferja had made his declaration. He had declared that all people of the conquered lands were citizens of Ferja. He also proclaimed that all citizens must be guaranteed a safe life. The refugee finished his story, telling the lady that no matter what the emperor said, there was no land for them to return to. The lady then had an idea. she turned to the Northern Lord. She asked him to sell a particular ship to her. The ship in question was the Tabasonic. The Lord was taken aback by her request. He agreed it would be a good place for the refugees, but he knew the Tabasonic was one of the finest ships from Toma Shipping. He informed her that it cost at least 20 million jewel, the price of about 4,000 buildings. The lady presented a card, ready to pay in one payment. The transfer was completed from Tomer Dukin to Klisia Mezerin. Clisia stood at the ship's railing and addressed the refugees. She announced that the ship, which would be their new home, was a gift. She declared it was a gift from His Majesty, Emperor Yan Furja. The ship's name was officially changed from Tabasonic to Yan Furja's ship, and the refugees cheered. The Northern Lord, whose name was Eugene, watched with a complex expression. Eugene had a lot to ask. He was bewildered by the fact that she had so casually used the Emperor's personal account. He also questioned the fact that she copied the pirate flag without hesitation. And most importantly, she had named such a ship the Yan Furja ship. The refugees were now chanting dangerous titles like the Great Yan Furja, Pirate King Yan Furja, and Long Live Yan Furja. Eugene was concerned about the dangerous titles being thrown around. The refugees waved goodbye from their new ship. Clisia waved back, but Eugene looked thoughtful. As the ship sailed away into the sunset, he realized her true intention. He understood that she could now legally screw over Yan Furja. He concluded that he couldn't let this opportunity slip away. A man stumbled through the palace corridors. He called out for Lord Mirhai. Another man stopped him and recognized him as Lord Robes, the Minister of Finance. The minister asked where Lord Mirhai was, so the other man informed him that Mirhai had been on a business trip to Shumarin for a few weeks. The minister despaired at the news. Another official, Lord Robert, ran up to see what the commotion was about. Lord Robes revealed that 25 million jewels had been withdrawn from His Majesty's personal account. Another man overheard and was shocked, wondering who would dare touch the Emperor's account. Lord Robes explained it was withdrawn using a black card issued jointly to the imperial couple. This meant the fugitive Lady Mezerin was using the Emperor's personal assets. The Emperor sat on his throne, looking furious. Two men observed that the Emperor's expression alone could kill someone. The Minister of Finance was terrified to report the news, imagining the Emperor would have him executed. He wondered what His Majesty had to say. A green-haired man named Lord Clarence walked toward him. Clarence noted that the minister seemed to be in trouble. The minister confirmed it was a serious incident. Clarence, however, seemed to be in a good mood because a welcomed guest had arrived. A royal announcer declared the entrance of Viscount Isaac Mezerin. Isaac Mezerin and another man with white hair walked through the palace doors. A young aide was shocked to hear the news that the Emperor's personal account had been robbed and that Lady Mezerin had opened a black card. The aide then recalled what he knew about Isaac Mezerin. He was a former imperial knight who was recognized for leading the Red Lion Knights in the war against Servan. After the war, he was granted the title of Viscount and the lands of Shumarin, and his family consisted only of himself and his daughter. The aide put the pieces together, realizing the woman must be the Mezerin from Shumarin, Lord Isaac's daughter. He sensed there was more to the story based on the Emperor's reaction. Count Mirhai Owen and Viscount Isaac Mezerin were then announced in the throne room. The Emperor suddenly drew his sword on Isaac. Isaac parried the blow. The Emperor said he thought Isaac would completely ignore him as always, but acknowledged that he had come a long way. Isaac, straining against the blade, called it a misunderstanding. He commented that while he was gone, the Emperor's sword had become quite heavy. The white-haired man, Lord Mirhai, watched in shock, so Lord Clarence quietly told him that he must not know the history between the two men. He explained that Lord Isaac was the Emperor's fencing master. A flashback began 20 years ago, just before the war, when Isaac refused the position of Supreme Commander of Furja. The younger emperor, then a prince, was shocked and remembered his father saying the war would truly begin now. The prince knew the ceasefire agreement would soon expire and the real war was about to begin. He asked Isaac why he would leave his post when Furja needed him. Isaac explained he was not leaving, but handing his post over, promising he would always be Furja's sword and protect the empire wherever he was. The prince desperately asked why he was leaving, reminding Isaac that he had been by his side since he was a baby. Isaac knelt and explained that the woman he loved was pregnant with his child. He begged the prince to forgive his unfaithful servant. Back in the present, the emperor reflected on how unpredictable human affairs were, musing that the child Isaac spoke of had become his wife, and wondering how such a clerical error happened. Lord Mirhai asked the emperor about an arrest warrant he was holding. The emperor and Lord Clarence looked at each other. The emperor recalled that 20 years ago, he thought he would kill Clarence if they met again, while Clarence remembered how tough his life was when he was 7. The emperor held up a wanted poster for a woman. Mirhai asked the emperor how he could let things get this way. The emperor found the drawing on the poster to be a shabby likeness of the real person. He said this was why his wife had suddenly gone to Toma's place in Floria. He decided it shouldn't be too hard to bring her back, and told his men to inform Clarence. Mirhai offered to go with the emperor to Floria, but the emperor asked what he was talking about. He stated that the royal family couldn't be compromised, so Mirhai must stay and guard the palace. Several lords protested the emperor's decision to appoint Viscount Mezerin as the emperor's representative, calling it absurd. The emperor silenced them, explaining that he couldn't trust another man to keep his mouth shut, and that with the direct royal line gone, Lord Isaac was the closest thing to royalty. He then addressed Isaac directly, calling him father-in-law. The emperor smiled warmly. Lord Isaac was left utterly speechless. A blond man spoke of the renowned pirate king, Jan Ferja. He mentioned that there was no one in Floria who didn't know the name. This was because Emperor Jan Ferja was seen as a hero for giving luxury warships and enough provisions to last for years to the pirates. Nearby, a man with dark hair complained that his brother, who had been trying to avoid the emperor, caused a big incident because of a woman. He did, however, admit that it wasn't entirely her fault. He explained that they were a little short of funds for their plan, which was the purchase of the Liart Mountains land. He was having a hard time because the unexpected discovery of a gold mine caused land prices to soar. The blond man asked if there was only one place left. The dark-haired man confirmed that the Karian side of their plan would proceed without a problem. As a small character announced, they were nearly at their destination. The blond man asked when the groundbreaking ceremony was scheduled. His companion replied that it would be after the founding day. Meanwhile, a woman with red hair stood on a beach in Floria, thinking about how a few weeks had passed since her arrival. She remembered the Northern Lord telling her she could relax as much as she wanted, joking that he had kidnapped her so she had nothing to worry about. She found Floria to be a paradise, just as its reputation suggested. But as she gazed at the ocean, she began to worry that she had been there too long and wondered why the reply to her letter had not yet arrived. She worried that her father had not left their territory. As she walked with her parasol, she called out to someone. She looked up in surprise at a blond man who commented that the sunlight was rather strong. He sheltered her with his own parasol and asked if her eyes were uncomfortable. She was startled and flustered by his sudden appearance and kind gesture. He then asked if they had met before, telling her she looked familiar. She said she wasn't sure, but agreed that he also looked familiar to her. As he smiled, he also mentioned that she looked familiar to him. She was struck by how handsome he was and continued to wonder about his familiar appearance. They walked along the beach together under his parasol. In her mind, she compared the Northern Lord, with his dark hair and red eyes, to this man, who was a typical blonde, blue-eyed emperor type. She firmly told herself that she still preferred the Northern Duke and would not waver in her feelings. After they chatted for a bit, she reaffirmed to herself that she was head over heels for men with dark hair and red eyes. They said their goodbyes, but not before agreeing to meet again the next day. The woman was thrilled, thinking how sweet it was that he offered to come pick her up himself. Later, the Northern Lord found her and commented that she seemed to be quite enjoying a romance with a man she had just met. She was surprised and asked what he was talking about. She insisted that she was only spending time with the other man because the Northern Lord was too busy to hang out, then playfully asked if he was jealous. He laughed, remarking that a love rivalry between a dark-haired, red-eyed man and a blonde, blue-eyed man was an interesting development. She was left wondering what she had just said. She expressed a desire to hang out more, but he excused himself, saying he had work to do. The Northern Lord reflected that he had been the one making excuses to send her away because it felt awkward for them to be alone together lately. But this realization bothered him. The fact that he felt awkward with her bothered him deeply. He tried to dismiss it as an irrational judgment, but there was something else. 2603, 2604, the woman continued talking about romance story clichés, where the Northern Duke realizes his feelings late, and how the current trend was a tyrant emperor facing off against him. The Northern Lord wondered if it was all about being handsome, thinking how completely different a blonde, blue-eyed man was from himself. He then asked her if she knew the exact purpose of the gentleman's visit. After a moment of thought, she explained that the man told her he was a duke who wasn't feeling well and had come to Floria for a rest. The Northern Lord was shocked and asked if there was even a duke in the empire, reminding her of the extinction of the dukes, and concluding the man must be a foreigner. A feeling of suspicion began to creep over him as he considered the situation. 2611, 2612, 2613 that night, 2614, 2615, 2616, the Northern Lord was sleeping uneasily in his bed. He tossed and turned, trapped in a nightmare from his past. 2618, 2619, 2620, 2621. In the dream, he knew he was the last member of the Servin royal family. He saw a vision of blonde boy named Eugene Weiner de Servin. A younger version of himself, with dark hair, confronted Eugene. Eugene asked the boy if he knew who he was, and the name Yan Ferja was spoken. Eugene told the young Yan Ferja that his mother was Aries Ricinois. 2628, 2629, he then revealed that his own mother was Aries' half-sister, which made them cousins. The young Yan Ferja reacted with fury and stabbed Eugene with his sword. As Eugene was dying, he weakly questioned their family connection. The young Yan Ferja coldly told him not to joke around. With his final breaths, Eugene screamed, vowing that he would kill Yan Ferja. Looking down at the dying boy, the young Yan Ferja noted that it was difficult for him to talk right now. As Eugene cried out in pain, Yan Ferja told him he would give him time to cool his head. He then told Eugene to come find him before a certain scar disappeared, because they still had things to discuss. The adult Northern Lord's eyes shot open, and he woke with a gasp. 2644, 2645, 2646. He sat up, breathing heavily and clearly in distress from the nightmare. He muttered "damn" under his breath. He clutched his leg in pain, still tormented by the memory. 2651, 2652. He then whispered the name that haunted him. Yan Ferja. Hammerreichen, vassal to Eugene's godfather Sirkin, asked his guest for understanding regarding any inadequate preparations. The guest was Klisia's father, acting Emperor Isaac Mezerin, and his host Hammer remarked that he hadn't expected such an early morning visit from a royal. A sign confirmed that Isaac Mezerin was visiting the Dukan house. Accompanying the emperor was the white-haired Count Mirhai Owen, who was known as the Imperial Academy's youngest top scholar, the genius of the century, and the emperor's right hand. Hammer noted Count Owen's presence and concluded that his guest must be very important. Isaac Mezerin thought about how they had simply barged in by citing an imperial order. He looked down pensively, surrounded by an icy aura. He worried about what was happening and wondered if they had discovered something from a previous incident. However, he felt confident that he had managed everything without leaving any evidence behind. Isaac then began to explain the reason for his visit to Hammer. He stated that because Hammer's son had run off with his daughter, he thought it was time for the two fathers to have a talk, causing Hammer to spit out his drink in shock. Isaac clarified he was indeed talking about his daughter, as an image of the young couple appeared. The scene then blurred for transition. Hammer slammed his hands on the table, angrily insisting that it was Isaac's daughter who had seduced his son. He grew emotional as he described how much he cherished and carefully raised his son. Hammer then complained that a ragged girl had come out of nowhere and stolen his son away. Isaac calmly countered that it was merely healthy vigor, and that his child was not the type to seduce anyone. His demeanor changed as he angrily recounted waking up to find his child had been taken by a most wanted criminal, asking if Hammer could possibly understand his distress. Isaac slammed the table and insisted that Hammer's son took his daughter, but Hammer immediately shot back that it was Isaac's daughter who took his son. The two fathers then sat in a tense standoff, glaring at each other. They broke the silence only to drink from their cups in unison. Hammer then changed the subject, mentioning he had heard that Tomer Dukan cancelled all of Tabasonic's scheduled trips. He added that Toma had hastily set sail with only a handful of crew members. Isaac laughed at this news, remarking that Hammer's son was quite the playboy, which made Hammer furious. The scene shifted to a sprawling city as someone thought of Eugene. A whimsical scoreboard depicted a battle between Mezerin and Dukan, Isaac Mezerin in the lead with 1 win. Meanwhile, in a place called Floria, a red-haired woman was happily twirling in a sunlit room. A blonde man carrying flowers arrived, and she greeted him as Duke. The Duke presented the beautiful bouquet to her. He told the lady he was there to escort her as promised, and she was thrilled with the flowers, calling them very pretty. In another room, a young man with dark hair sat by himself. As the lady and the Duke walked through a doorway, it led to an unexpected meeting between two men named Eugene and Yan. The dark-haired man, Eugene, was visibly shocked, thinking that he never expected to see Yan Ferja. The blonde man, Yan Ferja, simply smiled back at him. Yan sarcastically asked Eugene if it was nice to see him, while the lady offered a cheerful greeting. Yan then invited the lady to his villa, noting that she had traveled a long way and had already seen the local sights. She excitedly asked if she really could go with him. Yan took her hand and told her that of course she could. He explained that he could not refuse a request from one of his guests to bring a companion along to his villa. A potted plant rested on a small table. The three were later shown sitting together for what was described as a three-way conversation. Yan addressed the dark-haired man as Tomer Yukin, mentioning he had heard a lot about him and that the Northern Lord had been very helpful. Toma replied that he had also heard about the Duke being on vacation for his health. The red-haired lady noticed a strange tension that had existed between the two men since they first met. She felt this tension was very significant. In her vivid imagination, she pictured a dramatic love rivalry between a tyrant emperor and a northern duke. With herself as an excited observer, the lady was lost in her daydream. A close-up showed her face as her fantasy continued. She sat quietly on the couch between the two rivals. Yan asked the lady if she was feeling all right. He then claimed that he was feeling nervous in the unfamiliar surroundings, causing a flare-up of his illness, and apologized in advance in case he collapsed. Yan asked the lady if she would be willing to fetch him a bundle of blue hibiscus, as tea made from them usually helped his condition. She immediately and enthusiastically agreed to get the flowers for him. She told him to wait just a moment and quickly ran out of the room. The door swung shut, leaving the two men alone. With the lady gone, Eugene immediately confronted Yan about running a business in his country. Yan scoffed at Eugene, saying his act about being ill was so unconvincing that even a dog would laugh at it. He casually leaned back and reminded Eugene that 10 years had passed. Yan then commented that he hadn't expected Eugene to grow into a man who would covet another's woman. Eugene did not respond. Eugene internally struggled, telling himself he had to hold back his desire to attack Yan and tear him to pieces. He knew that he would be unable to defeat this man until the founding day. He also reminded himself that he could not use his powers while in Floria. Yan sighed, stating that the situation was a bit disappointing. He leaned in close and reminded Eugene that he had told him to find him before the scar on his ankle faded. Yan then asked if Eugene had forgotten his command. He mused aloud about the deep cut he'd left on Eugene's ankle and wondered if the scar was still there. Yan claimed he had controlled his strength when inflicting the wound and then demanded to see Eugene's leg. Eugene quickly backed away from him, asking if he was insane. Yan insisted he only wanted to check for the scar, promising to let Eugene go peacefully if it remained. Eugene shouted that the scar was still there and warned Yan not to touch him, but Yan dismissed his reaction as dramatic, saying he only asked him to roll up his pants. Realizing Yan wouldn't be reasoned with, Eugene decided he had to fight. He lunged at Yan, vaulting over the furniture between them. Yan dodged the attack, twisting out of the way. He then quickly moved behind Eugene and captured him in a tight hold. Having successfully subdued him, Yan whispered, "Got you." He told Eugene he was the same as he always was, a lunatic. Yan adopted a sad tone, claiming that as Eugene's only cousin, he had always tried to be kind to him. He started to say that while killing Eugene's father and brothers had been unavoidable, he was cut off. With his eyes glowing red with rage, Eugene ordered Yan Furja to stop pretending to be sincere. He snarled that he didn't care about the others, but he could never forgive what Yan and his men had done to his mother. Eugene vowed that he would never, ever forgive it. Yan was about to respond to Eugene's furious declaration. At that moment, the red-haired lady burst back in, announcing that she had searched 82 different places without finding any blue hibiscus. Instead, she presented red hibiscus, explaining she had heard it could also help with a cough when brewed into tea. She then stopped short, taking in the scene of Yan holding Eugene down on the floor. The two men froze in their compromising position as she stared. The lady looked down at the two men tangled together on the floor. Based on what she saw, she concluded that their relationship was not one of conflict but of romance, a fact highlighted by a translator's note on the term for boys in love. In her mind, she pictured Eugene denying the situation, Yan lamenting that she didn't see more, and herself just being surprised. The lady then told the northern boss that it was quite all right, because she was also a fan of that genre. Eugene frantically tried to explain to her that it was a huge misunderstanding and not at all what she was thinking. At the Floria five-star hotel, a blond man asked if what he heard was true. A man in a formal uniform confirmed that Eugene's servant was the one who took Clisia. The man reported that Clisia and Eugene were even living together. The blond man observed that they had seemed quite close. The uniformed man added that Clisia didn't appear to know Eugene's true identity, but he couldn't be sure. When asked if he had just left them alone, the uniformed man confirmed that he had. He then questioned the blond man about why he was keeping up such pretenses. The blond man reminded him that he was supposed to be the sickly duke on recovery. The uniformed man recalled how the blond man came to Floria specifically to find Clisia, abandoning his attendants and bringing only him because the matter was urgent. He then pointed out that as soon as the blonde man found her, he just went on a date with her. The blonde man explained that he was curious about what kind of person his wife was. The uniformed man grew serious and warned the blonde man, whom he called Your Majesty, not to toy with his daughter, explaining that Clisia was the youngest knight of the Red Lion Order and he had practically raised her. His Majesty recalled that the man had also been a member of the Red Lion Order. He mused that he had never seen the man so serious before, as he had always been unflappable. The uniformed man asked if his protectiveness was why His Majesty appointed him as an escort instead of Sir Isaac, but the blonde man dismissed it as a misunderstanding. The uniformed man made a final warning not to treat his daughter harshly, mentioning how much effort he had put into making her immune to poisons. The scene shifted to a memory where a red-haired woman tried to clear up a misunderstanding. She explained to another woman that the Duke had stumbled, and she had only slipped while trying to help him. Her companion teased her, saying she had thought it was something more romantic. The red-haired woman then turned to a dark-haired man, asking him what he had been thinking. He replied that he was debating whether or not to help them. Back in the present, the blonde man was amused by his escort's story. He laughed and decided to stop teasing him. He thought to himself that things were proceeding as he expected. However, his escort asked what was still bothering him. The blonde man stated that before presenting Clisia to the Empress, he needed to confirm one more thing for himself. Later that night, a cloaked figure, revealed to be the blonde man, moved stealthily through the hotel. He reflected on his decision to approach Klisia Mezerin while hiding his true identity. His goal had been to find out what kind of person Isaac's daughter was, and finding Eugene Mezerin there as well had been an unexpected bonus. He felt it was worthwhile coming since he had found both of them. He listened closely at a bedroom door, wondering if they were sharing the same room 2809, 2810, 2811, 2812. Inside, the red-haired woman was offering the dark-haired man a massage, which he was trying to refuse. The man, the Lord of the North, told her he didn't need it, but she playfully retorted that he sounded like an old man for complaining about a lady in his room. She declared that his protests were useless because she had already figured out his feelings. The woman accused the flustered man of sulking after spending the day with someone else. She pointed out that he had even fought with her guest, so his mood could only mean one thing. She teased him, concluding that he had been bored without her. He vehemently denied it. So, she announced she was there to relieve his fatigue and spend time with him. She then tackled him in a rough embrace, claiming it was a battlefield massage, much to his pained surprise and the eavesdropping blonde man's confusion. The man begged her to be gentler as she commented on his stiff shoulders. Their faces were very close before the man finally had enough and grabbed her 2827, 2828, 2829. They ended up lying on the bed, looking into each other's eyes. Later, the man sat alone on the bed, looking thoughtful. Outside the door, the blonde man thought this was the second time something like this had happened, recalling a similar incident at the royal palace. Inside, woman told the Lord of the North he was losing Northern Duke points. The listening blonde man cursed Eugene Mezerin. He decided he had figured out their relationship, but felt it was a waste to just leave 2838, 2839. So, he decided to test the skills of his wife, a choice he would soon realize was wrong. The red-haired woman exited the room, and as the door shut, the blonde man launched a surprise attack. The woman was startled but reacted quickly, earning a compliment on her reflexes from her attacker. She stood stunned, while inside the room, the dark-haired man realized he hadn't sensed the attacker at all, and knew this was no petty thief. The woman, Clisia, immediately recognized the danger she was in. Her battlefield experience told her she couldn't win against this opponent, so to survive, she unleashed her most powerful move 2851, 2852, 2853. The blonde man was shocked to see an advanced fire technique, realizing the situation was bad. He knew he could dodge it, but it would cause a huge commotion and make him a nuisance, which could get his entry into Floria restricted. He decided he had no choice but to use that technique. Clisia watched in confusion as he raised his hand toward her attack, and his fingers touched her fire magic. To her amazement, he began to manipulate the energy, reforming the powerful fire technique into harmless, glowing rings that dissipated completely. The dark-haired man rushed out, calling her name, having felt the intense rune energy. He asked what had happened as he found her on the floor, dazed from the encounter 2870, 2871. He helped her up, asking if an intruder had attacked, and admitted that he had lost the person. Clisia looked at her own hand, wondering what had just occurred, then told the Lord of the North that she could no longer use her rune magic. A woman with red hair asked a dark-haired man how much longer he would keep calling her lady. 2904, 2905, she felt that at this point they could be considered friends. She then suggested he could just call her Sasha. The man then walked away. 2908, 2909, he dropped a paper as he left. Later, he told himself to focus. The important thing for him was to figure out the identity of the assailant. 2912, 2913, he thought about a technique called run moras, which blocks the flow of runes by simultaneously activating 5 elements. This technique could only be cast by 5 rune users working together. However, in Furza, the magic of darkness and earth had become obsolete. Consequently, run moras hadn't been used for hundreds of years and was forgotten, but he knew of one person on the continent who could cast it alone. This person was the ruler of the 5 eternal elements. His name was Yan Furza. The man realized it was no surprise Yan Furza had been there, likely coming to observe and leave a warning after becoming aware of his presence. He wondered if Yan Furza knew about run moras. Looking at a document, he decided to calm down, thinking that the new information didn't change anything. He was certain that Yan Furza would die before the year's end. A smiling blond man appeared, and the dark-haired man seemed surprised to see him. 2925, 2926, the blond man commented that the dark-haired man had no shame for showing up again. He pointed out that since the dark-haired man also came yesterday, he must have a lot of free time. The dark-haired man claimed the blonde was mistaken because his previous visit was during the day for an appointment with the lady. He then suggested the blonde man leave, explaining that the lady was not feeling well after an unfortunate incident the previous night. Just then, Sasha appeared and greeted the dark-haired man, calling him Duke. The Duke was surprised to see that she had already recovered. Sasha cheerfully confirmed she was fine when she woke up. She twirled in her new dress, insisting she was perfectly fine, and the Duke had to agree she looked healthy. The blond man prepared to leave them alone, but the Duke invited him to join them, addressing him as Northern Boss. The blond man said he had something to discuss with the lady. He added that he thought Toma Ryukin, the Duke, should hear it as well. Toma looked on thoughtfully. The 3 of them sat down at a table together. The blond man looked at Toma, wondering about his plans. He then turned to Sasha and asked if she knew someone named Eugene H. Weiner. Sasha said she did, identifying him as the Prince of Servan. She expressed her frustration that the prince was let go out of mercy when they had almost captured him, mentioning how it had upset her father. The blond man confirmed her father was Baron Mezerin. Sasha went on to blame Servan for starting the war with their talk of unifying the continent and recalled the hardships of the past 10 years. The blond man agreed, remarking that the emperor and his son were 2 of a kind. Sasha declared that they needed to catch Eugene H. Weiner and end his bloodline to prevent more trouble. 2956, 2957, Toma suddenly burst out laughing. The blond man laughed as well, agreeing they should have wiped out the prince's lineage. Sasha was taken aback, wondering if Yan Furza Toma had dropped his frail duke persona. The blond man then asked Toma if he was from Furza, and Toma confirmed it. Sasha was shocked and told him he shouldn't call himself a duke. She explained that the emperor had ordered the eradication of all dukes and marquises. Toma casually replied that he would be fine. The blond man called the emperor a psycho and shared that his own father, who used to serve the emperor, gets terrified whenever the topic is mentioned, which he believed was due to guilt. 2966, 2967, he explained that he couldn't return to the empire because of his majesty and mentioned rumors of how the emperor changes when holding a sword. He recounted a story of the emperor slaughtering nobles in the audience chamber, though he admitted they were traitors. The scariest event of all, he continued, was the Battle of the Carrion Plains. He acknowledged that the war ended because of the emperor's actions there. He then changed the subject, telling Sasha that her father was currently staying in the capital, Zigrid, and asked if she knew. Sasha was surprised and asked how he knew her father. The blond man explained that they were acquainted and that he also had ties to the royal family. He then invited Sasha to return to the capital with him. The sudden offer left Sasha speechless, and Toma looked on with concern. 2976, 2977, Toma began to think of her as his but stopped himself, questioning if he had any right to interfere. 2978, 2979, he reminded himself he was only her companion, not her guardian, and that she had come to the island because of her conflict with him in the first place. 2980, 2981, he then remembered her words about them being friends. Sasha asked the blond man if he was her father's friend. Toma announced that it was probably time for him to return to the capital as well. He decided to stay behind in Floria for a bit to handle business. Sasha reasoned that since she had to go back eventually, she should accept the offer. The blonde man urged her to leave right away. Sasha was shocked by the rush, protesting that she hadn't even eaten, but the man saw no reason to delay. 2989, 2990, when Sasha mentioned her belongings were still at Toma's villa, the blonde man assured her they could send someone to get them. He took her hand, telling her it was time to go home. He led her away as she walked barefoot. 2994, 2995, Toma watched them go, thinking that while he expected her to leave someday, he hadn't thought it would be so sudden. Sasha looked back, sad that he was leaving without a proper goodbye. She stopped the blonde man and turned around. She called out to Toma, the northern boss. She thanked him for all his help and promised to repay him when she saw him in Muta. Toma simply said yes. He then wished her farewell, calling her Sasha. Sasha blushed at him using her name. She then departed with the blonde man, leaving Toma to watch them go. The high-speed ship, Queen Hermes, sailed on the water. It was equipped with a state-of-the-art magical engine using the continent's finest technology. The ship boasted monstrous performance, capable of completing a week-long route in just 3 hours. It was known as the fastest ship in the Empire, where a red-haired woman stood on its deck. The woman looked out at the sea from the ship's railing. She continued to watch the water speed by. The woman was amazed by the view. The water splashed around the ship. A blonde man asked the woman if she liked it, and she responded that it was amazing. The two of them were together on the deck. She told him she had never seen such a fast ship before and asked if it really belonged to him, addressing him as Your Grace. The woman thought he was handsome, rich, and powerful, and the man affirmed her unspoken thoughts. He elaborated that he was quite wealthy, good-looking, and possessed considerable power. He maintained a confident expression. The woman looked at him with a slight blush. The woman found his confident statement to be cool rather than annoying. The man stood alone on the deck. He approached her, offering to smoothly resolve any issues she might have with the imperial family. He leaned in closer as he made his offer. Meanwhile, a dark-haired man named Eugene stood on a shore. He stood looking out at the water, decided that what he did was the right move and that he had only been distracting himself with useless thoughts. He resolved to focus on his own tasks. An older man with white hair was sitting nearby. The older man called out to Lord Eugene. Eugene turned, acknowledging their unexpected meeting. Dark energy began to swirl. The energy surrounded the older man. Eugene asked who gave the man permission to call his name so freely. The dark energy choked the older. As Eugene belittled him for being a mere survivor of Xenia who dared to speak to him, the older man addressed Eugene as Your Majesty. He accused His Majesty of abandoning Xenia. The emperor called this a delusion. He rhetorically asked who had disobeyed his command, carried out a foolish operation, and arrogantly handed his life over to Yan Perza. He noted that the man still clung to an absurd plan, believing it would work. The emperor leaned closer. He revealed that Yan Perza had left Floria just moments ago, shocking the older man. The older man declared that it was over. He proclaimed that everyone would now see who truly acted for Servan's sake. He activated a magic circle, vowing that Yan Perza would never consume the continent's land again. The magic circle glowed intensely. A massive magical explosion erupted. Back on the ship, the blonde man suddenly reacted, and the woman asked what was wrong, thinking he looked like he might explode. He clutched his head in discomfort. He brushed it off, saying he got carried away with the holiday spirit. He reflected on his status as the powerful emperor, which meant he also had the most enemies. He knew he must never forget that people were always targeting him. He realized someone had tampered with the magical engine's activation array to force an overload. He concluded the ship was about to explode. He chided himself for letting his guard down and not checking the vulnerable parts of the ship beforehand. He wondered about the culprit. The woman called his title and offered to protect him, but he told her not to move. He found it pathetic that someone would try to eliminate him with such a method. He declared that he could simply blow away such an attack and prepared to do so. He held the confused red-haired woman. They both expressed their confusion. It was explained that an activated rune cannot be undone. A powerful explosion was imminent because advanced rune magic of different attributes were about to collide. The explosion occurred. The ship was obliterated in the middle of the ocean. Someone nearby noticed the event. The bright light of the explosion faded. The sea was calm again. A person on another ship saw the aftermath. The person, a green-haired naval officer, wondered what it was. The officer wondered if it was Clisia and His Majesty, revealing that someone named Clarence had been secretly guarding them. The scene shifted to a beach at sunset. Someone's feet walked on the wet sand. The blonde man carried the unconscious red-haired woman ashore, flashing back to a few hours earlier. During the explosion, Yan had twisted the blast with a wind rune to create a shield. At that moment, The woman, Clisia, had a realization. She knew that the only person who could cast advanced rune magic of two different attributes at the same time, a man with blonde hair and blue eyes who called himself the Duke of Persia, was, in fact, the Emperor. Back in the present, in the water, the Emperor surfaced, realizing things were getting complicated. His first priority was to save the woman. He then saw her swimming away from him. He called out to her, asking why she was running away. Clisia panicked, thinking that if she was caught, she could be charged with insulting the Emperor or even attempted regicide, both punishable by death. The Emperor continued to call for her. He swam quickly to catch up to her. He warned her that if she kept running, her punishment would be death. He caught up to her in the water. He yelled at her to stay still. Gulls flew overhead. They finally made it to the shore, exhausted. The woman timidly addressed him as Your Majesty. He simply said fire, and used magic to create one for them. The Emperor sat by the newly created fire. He told her not to just stand there frozen, but to think about what to do next. In another location, a search was being ordered to start immediately, though it was deemed difficult. The Emperor informed Clisia that the island they were on seemed to be uninhabited. She was shocked by this news. Looking at the vast, empty oceans surrounding their small island, she was left speechless. The title is, How Can There Be a Divorce When We Haven't Even Married, Your Majesty? After successfully completing a business trip to Shumarin, a blonde man named Ryan returned. He came back to the royal capital after a few weeks. He wondered why the atmosphere in the capital was so chaotic. A man named Mirhai welcomed Ryan back. Ryan was surprised to also see Isaac in the royal capital. He recalled that Isaac had acted as if he would never return. Mirhai let out a sigh before explaining the situation. He started to say something about someone. Mirhai then explained that His Majesty had gone directly to Floria to search for Lady. Yes, His Majesty had gone, and Mirhai and Mezerin were handling all the remaining tasks. Mirhai was exhausted, but said things would be a bit easier now that Ryan was here. Isaac suddenly turned to face Ryan. Isaac warned Ryan not to even think about running away. A crowd shouted that the captain had returned and that they needed to catch him. Ryan looked shocked as the wind blew around him. The series title is shown in Korean. The scene changes to waves lapping on a shore. A man stood on the beach of a deserted island, marking his first day stranded. More waves are shown. The man had run at full speed, but hadn't found any other island or land nearby. He knew there was no way to tell how far he had drifted from his route. He also realized there was no way to contact the royal capital. He knew he had to quickly think of a way to return. Suddenly, a red-haired woman appeared behind him, calling him Your Majesty. She was trembling. The woman cheerfully offered him breakfast, which was 2 lizards on a stick. The man just stared blankly. He asked if she had managed to find any fruits, plants, or the coconut tree. She insisted he needed to eat meat to have energy in the morning. She offered to roast the lizards, but the man told her to forget it. She agreed and he walked away. He suggested she think about their next steps instead of just the meal menu. She groaned in frustration. The woman then asked if he agreed that they were on a deserted island. She also confirmed that there was no way to return or contact anyone. She then asked what would happen if they couldn't leave. The man just grunted in response. She chuckled and suggested that maybe the two of them would have to live together forever. An image of her in a beautiful white dress appeared. She asked if he didn't like the idea of them being together forever. She then said if that was the case, then this would happen. The man was shocked and wondered if this was a captivity situation. He looked at her suspiciously. The woman muttered to herself that it wasn't captivity because there was no captor. She continued muttering that captivity was usually in a prison or basement bedroom. The man thought to himself that the girl was indeed a bit strange, but he still observed her. He noted her skills in creating shelters were the same. Looking at her hunting ability, he was quite satisfied with her survival skills. Above all, he saw the rescue signal she had made. The smoke signal rose into the sky, meant to alert others. A voice commented that Isaac knew all the signals. The voice wondered if this was a rescue tool or survival. The man thought that this was different from what he had expected. A loud horn sound echoed. The man recognized the sound. It was a ship. The woman realized the ship must have seen their rescue signal. A ship appeared on the horizon. The woman jumped and waved excitedly, yelling for the ship to come over. The man placed his hand on her shoulder as she said that luck was on their side. The ship's horn blew loudly as it approached. Flag unfurled from the ship's mast. The ship sailed closer to the island. A voice from the ship addressed the people in distress. The speaker announced they were acting under the will of the great pirate king, Jan Perja. They were helping those who were underprivileged and discriminated against. The voice declared they would be rescued, so they should be grateful for the grace of the pirate king. Both the man and the woman were shocked by this revelation. The man thought the situation was very strange. He became angry, thinking that even after he sat on the throne, there were still those who wanted to undermine him. He was furious that they dared to impersonate him. He hadn't expected anyone to dare steal his name, and a magical aura erupted from him. The woman frantically tried to stop him, calling out to His Majesty. A man on the ship said they weren't real pirates but kind refugees. Another man on the ship asked how the young lady would know that and saw there were two people to rescue. The woman timidly confessed that this was happening. She admitted that she was the one who used His Majesty's money to buy a pirate ship for those people. The man was shocked to hear she had used his money. The woman explained the whole situation to the man. The man sighed in exasperation. He looked downcast. They stood on the beach as he asked what she was thinking to cause such a mess. She explained that the divorce compensation money belonged to him, and she had intended to use it for charity. She then reasoned that, in the end, the money was still his. He asked why she helped the war refugees. She explained it was because the war had left them with nowhere to go. She recalled images of suffering people. She said that she knew not everyone could live well, but she hoped no one had to wander around starving. She looked at him and said that His Majesty clearly also wanted a world like that. She waited for his response. She pleaded with him to let them escape the death penalty, promising to repay the money no matter what, even though their actions were unjustifiable. The man grunted in response. He then smiled slightly and said, "Let's see." A flashback showed two men, one stating they had been arguing for 10 years already. The other man in the flashback insisted they had to catch her and cut ties so she wouldn't cause more nonsense. Back in the present, the man told the woman she was a truly troublesome woman. He added that there were moments when he wanted it too. The woman saw the rescue boat had arrived. She jumped and waved, yelling for them to come over because two people were there. The man walked up behind her and apologized to Sasa. He then told her it was his turn now. He looked down at her. He then swept her up into his arms. She was startled, wondering when she had ever asked him to call her Sasa. He then mockingly asked if she meant Great Pirate Jan Perja. He used magic to lift them both into the air. They began to fly towards the ship. The woman looked down from above. They gently descended. He flew over the water while carrying her. The wind blew through their hair as they flew. They landed on the deck of the ship. The crew looked on in shock. The man looked at the crew and said, "Let's see." He sarcastically asked again if they meant Great Pirate Jan Perja. The crew stared in disbelief. One of the crew members recognized the blonde, blurry figure and wondered if it could be him. The crew looked on. Still holding the woman, the man smiled and asked if that made him the captain of this pirate ship. A warning from the translation group was shown. A warning page was displayed. A crew member on the ship announced that someone had arrived from the sky. The crew cheered, proclaiming that the pirate king had descended. The blonde man held the red-haired woman as they landed on the deck. The crew marveled that the hero was also with him. The red-haired woman looked surprised, pointing at herself. A crewman with a red bandana ecstatically greeted the pirate king, saying he had always believed he would come for his people. The blonde man began to address the pirate king matter and told the crew to bring him that quickly. The crewman with the red bandana enthusiastically complied. The blonde man looked on, bemused, as the woman rested in his arms. A chest was brought forward and opened. Inside was a complete pirate outfit. The crew presented the full pirate king set, including a coat, belt, and hat, to the man. The crew and the woman looked on admiringly as he was dressed in the pirate attire. The crew cheered, commenting on how dignified their pirate king looked. The man stood fully dressed in the pirate king costume. He thought to himself that they seemed to like it. The woman complimented him, saying his performance was quite impressive. The crewman with the red bandana praised the crew, saying they knew how to properly serve a king. The crew began to entertain the newly crowned pirate king. One man juggled while riding a unicycle, and another balanced plates on his head to entertain the king. A woman with purple hair then stepped forward, offering to read his destiny. The red-haired woman asked in surprise if the fortune-teller could truly read fortunes. The fortune-teller confirmed she could see a person's entire life just by reading their palm. She then took the red-haired woman's hand to read the hero's fortune. The fortune-teller pointed to a line on her palm, explaining that it signified sudden and unexpected wealth coming her way. The red-haired woman was overjoyed, exclaiming that it was already happening and eagerly asked for her love fortune to be read next. The fortune-teller then asked for card to continue. The woman handed her the card. The pirate king watched the fortune-telling with a stoic expression. The fortune-teller examined the woman's palm once more to read her love fortune. She predicted that the woman would meet a wonderful partner. The woman excitedly asked if it would be the Grand Duke of the North. The pirate king looked displeased at the mention of the Grand Duke. The fortune-teller's expression then turned serious as she saw something else in the woman's palm. She foretold that a fleeting moment of happiness would be followed by a long shadow of loss. The fortune teller solemnly declared that the woman had a tragic fate. She then asked the hero why she was fated to be with someone whose life had already ended. The crewman with the red bandana looked on in shock. The woman was horrified by the prediction, questioning if she was going to marry a dead person. The fortune teller offered to read the pirate king's palm next, but the woman begged her to read her own fortune again. The fortune teller refused, stating that fate cannot be changed once it is decided. She explained that all lives and connections are interwoven into a grand cycle. Therefore, she concluded a predetermined future cannot be altered. The woman pondered the phrase, a grand cycle. She thought it sounded familiar, just as the pirate king declined to have his fortune read, calling it sinister sorcery. The fortune teller was offended at having her abilities called sinister. A magical card was shown being sent off. A bird carried the message through the air. A crew member, looking at a map, determined it would take about 2 hours to reach their destination, Bourbon Base. He reported to the Pirate King that the course was adjusted as instructed, and the Pirate King acknowledged his good work. The Pirate King then gave an order for all hands to be on deck. The crew gathered on the deck as commanded. The Pirate King observed them from the helm. A crewman was shown busy at work. He continued with his tasks on the ship. The crewman picked up a barrel. He continued working diligently. The red-haired woman approached the working crewman. She asked him what he was doing. The Pirate King watched them, noting that the crewman did not seem to have any intention of taking the ship back. The woman asked the crewman, whom she called a hero, if he was feeling hot. He assured her that he was fine. She told him he didn't have to go to such lengths, as she hadn't done anything grand enough to be called a hero. He explained that it wasn't like that, as he had always been an outcast who was looked down upon. He told her that, thanks to her, he was able to live a stable life for the first time. The woman clarified that the ship was purchased by the Pirate King, though it wasn't his original intention, and that she had only persuaded him. She credited the crewman, the hero, for being the one who started it all. The crewman declared that both she and the Pirate King were their eternal benefactors. After observing that the crew had finished their sorting, the woman decided to make an announcement. The Pirate King addressed the crew of the Jan Persa, stating that they had enjoyed his protection for free up until now. He said that if it were just that, he could have considered it part of the Empire's humanitarian aid. He then became angry, pointing out that they had been parading around claiming to be pirates. He glared at them menacingly, questioning how they dared to do such a thing. The crew looked on in confusion. A crew member tried to plead with the Pirate King, but he was silenced with a single word. The Pirate King stated that having a pirate ship of its size roaming freely in their territorial waters was a problem. He added that them swearing fealty to him as the Pirate King was even more of an issue. Holding up an official document, announced that there was only one course of action he could take. The document was shown to be an official order. The ship sailed towards the Bourbon Strait Naval Base. An admiral at the base looked at the arriving ship and wondered what was happening. He examined an order he received and had no doubt that it bore the Emperor's personal signature. Admiral Wilson Nile, the commander of the base, confirmed the order was real. He was puzzled as to why His Majesty would issue such an order. Back on the ship, the Pirate King informed the crew that from that moment forward, they would all undergo his training. He stood before them, ready to begin. He declared his intention to turn them all into real pirates. The title of the series was displayed again. A promotional page for the Scanlation Group appeared. A final page with information about the Scanlation Group was shown. A text box introduced Admiral Wilson Nile of Persia, the Black Baron of Bourbon, a respected commander and a loyal confidant to the Emperor. He was on the verge of an honorable retirement after decades of service. The one thing in the world he despised most was pirates. He looked down at a document, his face etched with disbelief. The orders were shocking. A pirate ship was scheduled to dock at the Bourbon base, and the Navy was to supply them with weapons. The admiral stood stiffly, unable to process the command. He grumbled that he wouldn't even give those pirate scum a single potato. A subordinate gently reminded him that the order was a decree, issued directly by the Emperor himself. The admiral refused to believe it, certain His Majesty would never issue such an absurd order, and concluded that someone must have forged his handwriting. If it wasn't a forgery, he reasoned, then the Emperor must have been coerced, forced to write the decree while under threat. He imagined his beloved Emperor in grave danger. Just then, a soldier burst in, shouting for the admiral. The soldier reported that a pirate ship was approaching from the southeast strait, only about 150 meters away. He described the vessel as an enormous 10,000-ton sailing ship powered by a magical engine. Hearing this, the admiral began to fear that the decree might actually be real. He saw the approaching pirates as foolish minnows swimming directly into a shark's mouth. He decisively ordered all forces to prepare for semi-war mode. Their objective was clear: ensure the emperor's safety and rescue him, showing the pirates the true strength of the Persian navy. His men readily acknowledged the command. Elsewhere, a man in a pirate captain's hat laughed at the idea of needing to be rescued. Admiral Nile, now tied up, found the thought of being kidnapped by pirates quite amusing. He mused that thanks to the pirate captain, he had almost been stabbed by his own men. The pirate captain then walked along the dock with a red-haired woman, while the bound Admiral Nile was led behind them. A hat dropped to the ground. The port's heavy machinery operated to allow the ship to dock. Two Navy officers watched, with one remarking that he never thought he would see such a day. The pirates were being armed, all under the emperor's direct orders. Now untied, Admiral Nile confronted the emperor, who was standing with the red-haired woman, and asked what exactly he was thinking. The emperor turned to face the admiral. The admiral addressed the emperor as Your Majesty. The admiral clarified that he wasn't doubting the emperor's wisdom, but he felt he had to question whether arming these people was the right choice. The emperor asked if the admiral was reluctant to follow the order. The admiral respectfully denied this, explaining that he had inspected the ship and found its crew to be mostly untrained. He believed that even with weapons, they probably wouldn't know how to use them properly, let alone fight effectively. The emperor calmly agreed, confirming that the admiral was precisely correct. He then revealed that, as far as he knew, the Navy was currently facing two major problems. The first, he stated, was that the Navy was struggling to deal with pirates with its current strength. The admiral had to agree, adding that since their last victory, their territorial waters had expanded so much that they could barely suppress the encroaching pirates. The emperor continued, saying the second problem was Admiral Wilson's own wish to retire. The admiral admitted he was getting old and felt it was time to give opportunities to the younger generation. The emperor then asked him if he knew of a way to solve both problems at once. The admiral wondered if such a solution even existed. The emperor simply placed a hand on the admiral's shoulder. He then announced that from that day forward, the admiral would become the pirate king. The admiral stared back in shock. He asked the emperor to repeat himself. The red-haired woman and another man also looked on in surprise. The emperor confirmed it was an order for Admiral Wilson. He commanded the admiral to board the ship immediately and train the new crew he had selected. Their new mission was to plunder the other pirates. He called it a strategy of an eye for an eye, using pirates to fight pirates. A pirate flag, emblazoned with a skull and crossed swords, whipped in the wind. It flew high on the mast, positioned just above the Persian naval flag. The massive ship, the Great Yan Persia, was the first privateer vessel in the history of the Asia continent, operating with the emperor's full approval. Its sole purpose was to destroy and plunder other pirate crews. By doing this, they would restore order to the lawless seas. The crew, who were once refugees, were now being transformed into warriors of the sea, led by none other than the pirate king of the seven seas. This was the beginning of the era of one-eyed Captain Nile. However, that story was for a distant future. Back in the present, Admiral Nile was still trying to comprehend the emperor's shocking command. Later, at the Ziggurat Persia Imperial Palace, a red-haired woman named Clisia expressed her excitement at finally being back in the capital. A blond man stood beside her. A bearded man rushed forward, joyfully calling out to Clisia. Clisia recognized her father and ran to him. He pulled her into a tight hug. Her father then asked what on earth she had been up to, but Clisia retorted that none of it would have happened if he hadn't frozen her account. Just then, a group of officials arrived to greet the emperor. One of them reported that they had just received an urgent telegram from Sir Clarence about an explosion. The emperor asked for details. The official explained they had been prepared to issue a search order for the Bourbon base if they hadn't received news by that evening. Another man added that according to Lance, the explosion wasn't big enough to threaten the emperor, but they were still concerned. The emperor decided to leave the complicated explanations for later, nodding to his subordinate. He announced that the most important thing for now was that they had brought back the runaway young lady, gesturing toward Clisia. The emperor brought Clisia to the first conference hall, where the attendees began to whisper amongst themselves. They identified her as the current empress consort and gossiped that after running away, she became a fugitive wanted for violent crimes. They added that she had even forged the emperor's signature to open a joint account and had embezzled tens of millions of lules from it. The emperor silenced the room with a single word. He turned to Clisia, stating that while they had much to discuss, he wanted to cut to the chase. He declared his intention to finalize their divorce right then and there to prevent any further complications. He asked if she understood, and a stunned Clisia could only whisper a soft yes, suddenly at a loss for words. She thought to herself that this long-awaited moment was finally here. Inside the conference hall, the emperor explained they were skipping the usual formalities so she shouldn't overthink things. He laid out the plan. they would both declare their agreement to divorce, and the statement would be recorded in a magic stone. He assured her that as long as she abided by the confidentiality agreement, the terms of her seclusion and compensation would be adjusted to her satisfaction. Clisia took a deep breath. She began to speak to the emperor, her mind flashing back to everything that had happened to her up to that point. A montage of her painful memories flooded her thoughts. She felt the weight of her past experiences. She realized that no one would ever believe her story, even if she told them. Suddenly, a man burst into the hall, shouting for the emperor. He panted for breath as he apologized for the interruption, but insisted that they could not proceed with the divorce. He looked at them with desperate eyes, repeating his plea. A special issue of the Daily Furza newspaper featured an exclusive report on the emperor's hidden woman. The article detailed a scandalous affair from 3 years prior that allegedly transcended social status, involving lavish gifts like a luxury magic vessel, and questioned where the funds had come from. It even included a quote from an anonymous royal insider who claimed ignorance and speculated about the Furza Empire finally getting an empress. The red-haired woman and the emperor looked at the paper, and she recognized what it was about. The white-haired man who had interrupted their divorce proceedings ordered everyone to leave the room immediately. He instructed his subordinate to ensure no one entered the conference room, and the subordinate acknowledged the order, addressing him as Your Grace. The white-haired man rushed into the room. The emperor asked if the identity of the informant or the journalist had been discovered, but the man reported it was still unconfirmed, though security forces were investigating. The red-haired woman suggested they could simply correct the story honestly by claiming a clerical error had wrongly listed her marital status 3 years ago. The man, however, told her that this was far more than an ordinary gossip article. He explained that the timing of the supposed marriage record error coincided exactly with when the article claimed they met, making it a cleverly crafted insinuation. He added that the accusation of using imperial funds for gifts was also written with shrewd intent. He was certain it was written by someone deeply familiar with the royal household, specifically to tarnish the emperor's reputation. He warned that if they rushed into a divorce or issued a correction, the media would twist the narrative, claiming the emperor was hastily dismissing a secret empress, which would only escalate the scandal. He feared that what was currently a mere tabloid rumor could quickly spiral out of control. The woman asked if the matter was truly that serious. The man confirmed that, given the circumstances, she would have to remain in the palace until the issue was resolved. She reacted with shocked disbelief. The red-haired woman had a sinking feeling that this situation would not be resolved easily. Elsewhere, a green-haired man reported to the emperor that the bank did not seem to be the source of the leak. When the emperor asked for confirmation, the man explained that the bank manager was not the type to disclose imperial information and had sworn he would never reveal the royal household secrets. He did speculate, however, that the existence of an empress might have been exposed on the day Lady Mezerin opened her black card account. The bank had firmly stated that transaction records were inaccessible to anyone outside the imperial family. The emperor wondered if Lady Klisia Mezerin de Furza herself could be the source. He ordered an immediate search of the Daily Furza's editorial office, instructing his aide to take only a few trusted individuals. The green-haired aide questioned whether such an aggressive move would only draw more suspicion. He reflected that scandals involving the emperor were common, and the public usually treated them as simple gossip. He remembered a time when the emperor had told him to just ignore false rumors, believing they would eventually fade away on their own. The aide thought that was why they had let things slide until now, but this situation was more complex because the rumor was not entirely false. The emperor disagreed, saying he had a bad feeling about the situation. He listed the recent events: an explosion during a covert mission in Floria, followed by a scandal report waiting for him upon his return. He found it suspicious that all of this was happening just a week before the Foundation Day celebrations, and suspected an organized group was behind it all. He expanded the investigation to include the Ministry of Finance and other administrative officials as potential targets. The green-haired man acknowledged the new orders. In another location, a dark-haired man was reviewing a report. He asked his subordinate, Luke, if the information was credible. Luke confirmed that a trusted informant had verified all the details. The man took a moment to absorb the shocking news. The report detailed the explosion of the ship carrying Lady Mezerin and the Emperor, their survival after swimming to a deserted island, their subsequent rescue by the Yan Furza, and the incredible revelation that the pirates on that ship were actually Navy trainees under Admiral Wilson's command. Luke confirmed the unbelievable story was true. He admitted that he wouldn't blame his master for his skepticism, as he himself had to verify the report multiple times. The dark-haired master said he believed it, remarking that nothing ever unfolded normally when that woman was involved. He found it strange, recalling that the saboteur had confessed the engine overload was only meant to cause injuries, not destroy the ship. He thought it was odd that the Jan Furza couldn't handle the situation, and even stranger that the ship was completely destroyed. He then asked Luke why he thought the saboteur had confessed so easily, as he had expected the man to no longer obey his orders. Luke cryptically replied that the man hadn't confessed of his own free will, implying he had been coerced. The master seemed to understand the implication. Luke then showed his master a handkerchief with an insignia on it, asking if he had seen it before. The master said no and asked what it was. Luke explained that while the saboteur was tampering with the Emperor's ship, a person dressed in red approached and handed him the handkerchief. The master ordered Luke to investigate whether it was connected to the incident. Luke agreed, while his master mused that he felt like he'd seen the insignia somewhere before. As their carriage moved along, the master noted they had spent more time in Floria than expected, and with only a week until Foundation Day, it was time to focus on their business. Luke acknowledged the command. Later, at a social gathering, the dark-haired man reflected on his surprise. A woman introduced him as the head of Thomas Holdings, Furza's largest corporation, and gushed about how young and handsome he was. Another woman was introduced as the largest landowner in Ruert, whose wife was complimented on her grace. The women continued to praise their impeccable manners. The landowner informed the other woman that the land sale would be finalized once she completed her signature. The document was then signed. The lady, Mrs. Eileen, paused for a moment. She told the dark-haired man, Mr. Riken, that while the deal was very profitable for her, she was curious about his plans. She mentioned that the Ruert mountain range was barren and treacherous, a place even travelers avoided. She remembered that when he first mentioned building a resort there, she assumed he was just buying cheap land to develop into a tourist spot. She continued, saying that even after a gold mine was discovered nearby, which tripled the land's price, he had insisted on that exact location, as if it had to be that specific piece of land. Mr. Riken smoothly asked if she had changed her mind about selling. She quickly assured him she hadn't and finished signing the document. She laughed and explained that she was just curious if he had a brilliant business plan she could get in on, given his success. She added that the land had been a headache for her anyway, especially since the newly discovered gold veins didn't even extend to that area. Mr. Riken then noticed an insignia on her handkerchief and asked her about it. She looked down in surprise, then asked if he was also interested in the Church of Happiness. When he asked what that was, she explained that while the state religion was the Church of Creation, freedom of religion was permitted, hinting that the Church of Happiness might be a cult. She added that it had become quite popular recently. She dismissed any connection to the ship explosion, saying the church was simply the latest trend. She revealed that all the big players, who knew how to make money, were joining, including nobles and high-ranking officials. Leaning in, she shared a secret with Mr. Riken. She whispered that the person who had introduced her to the church was a major figure among the elite, none other than Eugene Huener. Mr. Riken was stunned to learn that the last prince of the fallen Servan Empire was a leader in the Church of Happiness. He was left wondering what in the world was going on. The dark-haired man asked the woman if she was certain. She confirmed it, though she had thought Eugene Huener went missing after the Servan War. She insisted she had personally confirmed his identity and had even joined the blissful church through his introduction. She then noticed the man's black hair and red eyes and remarked on his resemblance to Eugene. She offered to connect him with Eugene, mentioning that the descent ritual was approaching soon. A carriage rolled along a path. The dark-haired man held an invitation. His subordinate, Luke, asked if he truly intended to meet Eugene directly and suggested it would be safer to finish their investigation first. The man noted that black hair and red eyes were rare and considered the possibility that Eugene might be a member of the Servan royal family. Luke pointed out that besides his master, the rest of the royal family was supposedly wiped out during the war by Jan Furza. The master acknowledged this, but considered that a hidden bloodline, or a relative from the maternal side, might exist. Luke asked what he would do if Eugene was indeed a blood relative. The master crushed the invitation in his hand and said he wasn't sure, but he would first find out what Eugene wanted. Luke worriedly observed that his master tended to lose his composure when it came to matters concerning his maternal family. He knew his master's true goal wasn't the revival of Servan, but revenge against Jan Furza, specifically for the death of his mother. Later, a man with dyed brown hair introduced himself as Eugene Huener. The dark-haired man greeted him, confirming that he had sought this meeting. Internally, he was shocked, thinking the man looked nothing like Eugene and had obviously dyed his hair. He couldn't believe people were actually falling for the impersonation. He asked aloud if the man was truly Eugene Huener. The impersonator acknowledged his disbelief, saying most people were skeptical at first. He then offered to prove his identity by demonstrating the power that only the Servan royal family could wield. He explained that, as any Furzan would know, rune magic consisted of 5 elements, but the Dark Rune was a power exclusive to the Servan royal bloodline. The impersonator then performed a flashy display of magic, conjuring images of various elements. He asked the dark-haired man how much he knew about the Dark Rune. He went on to explain that while it couldn't summon pillars of fire, it could control and manipulate people's minds, spirits, and memories, calling it the ultimate power against humans. With a flourish, he declared the demonstration over. He confidently asked if that was sufficient proof. The dark-haired man remained silent. He then instructed Luke to ensure they were not disturbed, and Luke complied. The impersonator found the man's reaction concerning. He wondered why the man, who had supposedly experienced the Dark Rune's power, was so composed. The dark-haired man acknowledged that the display was convincing enough to fool most people. He explained that, while it's widely known that only the Servan royal family can use the Dark Rune, there are rare individuals outside the family who can also wield it. He told the impersonator that people like him could only mimic the rune's aura, and since Furzans had never seen the real thing, they were easily deceived by such an imitation. The impersonator was stunned and asked what he was talking about. The dark-haired man's eyes glowed, and a dark energy swirled around him. The impersonator was caught off guard. The dark-haired man asked him how he was feeling, questioning if he was finding it hard to even keep his eyes open, or if his heart felt like it was being torn apart with fear. He declared that what he was wielding was the real Dark Rune. With the impersonator now under his control, he said it was his turn to ask questions. He demanded to know about the blissful church and the descent ritual. He also ordered the man to reveal why he was impersonating Eugene Huener and to tell him everything he knew. Later, a white-haired man reported to the emperor that he had found out all he could for now. He had identified both the journalist who wrote the tabloid article and the royal official suspected of being the informant, but both had disappeared from the capital. The journalist had gone completely off the grid, and a subordinate from the Ministry of Finance had recently taken a long leave. The common link between them was that both had been recently spreading the word about the blissful church. The emperor's advisors discussed the legality of government officials converting to a religion other than the state-sanctioned creation church, but since the emperor had granted freedom of religion, there was little they could do. One of the men mentioned he had asked the official why he was taking leave during the busy founding festival, which was unusual. The official had claimed the blissful church was holding a major event in the north that he absolutely had to attend, which the man found strange, as no organization in Furza would schedule an event to conflict with the national festival. The emperor focused on the location, the north. He asked what exactly the blissful church was. His advisor explained it was a new religious group formed a few years ago with the tacky motto, "Make everyone happy, believe in the power of happiness." They had built temples across the empire and were active in charity work, earning a decent reputation among the citizens. However, the Creation Church viewed them as heretics. The emperor wondered where they were getting all their money. A dark-haired man entered the room and was asked if everything went smoothly. He confirmed that when the impersonator woke up, he wouldn't remember a thing. Luke apologized for only just remembering the blissful church's symbol, explaining he had recently seen it on badges worn by some nobles. The dark-haired man asked if his conversation with the impersonator had yielded anything useful. He revealed his plan. When the impersonator wakes up, he will express a desire to join the church. If he then pretends to be interested in their teachings and offers a large donation, the church leaders will surely approach him without hesitation. He concluded that he needed to take a closer look at this religion. Klisia Mezerin introduced herself, explaining that she used to live in a quiet estate called Shumerin, but was now staying in the imperial capital. She revealed that, out of the blue, she had become the empress of the Persia Empire, which had led to all sorts of hardships. Just as she thought she was about to get a divorce, trouble seemed to be brewing within the imperial family. A document confirmed that an administrative officer from the Ministry of Finance was the only person who had contacted the journalist, but their motive was still unclear. The text stated that the divorce would be postponed until the investigation was complete, and she was advised to stay in the capital with her identity concealed. Clisia sighed, admitting she didn't fully understand the situation, but gathered that she was being told to stay put and not run away. To avoid raising suspicion as a noblewoman wandering the palace, Clisia had to disguise herself as a member of the imperial guard. After 5 long days, she was growing incredibly bored, complaining that she couldn't even walk around freely and that she had been promised a quick return home. The emperor told her to behave, explaining that everyone in the imperial family was busy preparing for the founding festival. He assured her that things, including public opinion, would calm down after the festival. He warned her that if she kept causing a fuss, her disguise would be pointless. He addressed her as Sasha, a nickname she was surprised to hear, as she had never told him about it. She then realized he must have been the detective she had met before, despite his different hair and eye color. The emperor acknowledged that she had figured it out quickly and told her not to talk about what had happened that day. He then reminded her that she had forgotten something. He recalled her promise to buy him meat the next time they met, a promise she still hadn't fulfilled. Later, in the Imperial Guard cafeteria, a decree was announced. By His Majesty's order, all 3 of her meals would now consist only of meat. Clisia sighed, wondering if life in the palace was so bad after all. She then wondered what exactly the founding festival was. Ancient legends said it was the day the great Ashad dragon made a covenant with humans, though she didn't really care if it was true. It was the grandest annual festival in Persia, and since the victory in the Servian War 10 years ago, it also commemorated that victory. The imperial court hosted a royal ball for distinguished guests from across the continent, and the entire capital celebrated for a week. She reflected that this was only in the capital. In quieter places like her hometown of Shumerin, they kept celebrations simple. She had heard that for some noble ladies, receiving an invitation to the ball was a lifelong dream. She considered it a world completely different from her own and would rather stay in her room reading the Northern Duke's new book. Normally, she would be attending the Northern Continental Seminar around this time. She noticed how busy everyone in the imperial court was with festival preparations when she was suddenly surprised by something she saw. 3 women she recognized, Amber, Ponia, and Monray, called out to her, and she was shocked to see the executive team of the Northern Duke Research Society all together. She asked what they were doing in the imperial palace. A young man named Ryan explained that a new member had officially invited their society, and thanks to him, they were holding their seminar in the palace. One of the women mentioned hearing that a Clisia senpai was the founder of their society. Ryan, the captain of the guard, then confronted Clisia, who he had been calling Sasha. He stated that there had been some misunderstanding and that all new members were required to attend the seminar. Since she couldn't leave the palace during the festival, he had invited the society to her instead. He then presented her with an essay-type problem from the seminar about what to do if the emperor ordered her to a battlefield where her fiancé would surely die. Her answer was to lead a coup, eliminate the emperor, win the war, and offer the empress position to her fiancé. Ryan smiled, confirming her answer was exactly right, finally realizing she was truly a member and not there to investigate him. The other women were thrilled to learn that Clisia had joined the Imperial Guard and were impressed that she was even close with the captain. Ryan announced that Lady Clisia was officially an apprentice knight in the Imperial Guard, and not just any apprentice, but a top-tier, elite one. Her friends complimented how great she looked in the uniform, and Clisia, overwhelmed, simply gave up trying to explain. Just then, an official announced that preparations for the banquet hall were complete, and all invited guests had arrived in the country. 2 officials watched Clisia with her friends, one asking who she was with. The other explained it was an academic society Sir Ryan had invited, the Northern Continental Seminar. One of them wondered if she ever smiled like that. The other reasoned that she would naturally feel more comfortable with girls her age than being alone in a strange palace. The group excitedly discussed the rare, uncensored first edition of the Duke of the North's bedroom, Never Cools, that was housed in the Imperial Library. An aide presented the final schedule to the emperor. The emperor remarked that it would be disappointing if the society couldn't participate in the festival after coming all this way. His aide found the comment uncharacteristically random, but another official explained that the emperor had decided against revealing the lady's identity in such an unpredictable situation, deeming it too dangerous. While everyone was busy with their respective duties, the morning of the founding festival finally arrived. Tomer Yukin, head of Persia's largest corporation, Toma Holdings, was welcomed to the founding festival's imperial banquet. The event was a grand affair, inviting only the most influential figures from around the continent. Tomer Yukin had always received an invitation, but had previously sent representatives, citing a busy schedule. Now, however, he no longer needed to hide his identity from the people of Persia. As he looked around the crowded hall, he noted it was filled with prominent figures. He spotted his business partner, Andrew Pamier de Floria, the Prince of Floria, charming noble ladies as usual. He then identified Setanasar bin Zaid al-Fayya, the crown prince of the eastern desert nation, Fayya, and Captain Lion Barthier de Perza of the Royal Guard, accompanied by Commander Isaac Mezerin of the Red Lion Knights. The guest list also included kings, high-ranking nobles, and renowned scholars. Despite being briefed on the attendees, it was clear to him that everyone present was aligned with anti-war ideologies, both within and beyond Persia. He smiled, thinking it was only natural. He then noticed the emperor, Jan Felixirion de Perza, had finally arrived. The emperor ascended a grand staircase to a magnificent throne. As he walked, the guests whispered in awe of his radiant and breathtaking aura. He drew his sacred sword, Bliss, which was blessed by the divine. A dazzling display of water magic filled the air. Water droplets floated around the hall, reflecting the chandelier's light like jewels. Tomar Yukin knew the emperor was skilled with water runes, but was still impressed by the extent of his power. He wondered if this was a demonstration of the Furza Empire's power for both internal and external audiences. The emperor noted the many familiar faces in attendance that year. He began his speech, honoring those who had traveled far, but then abruptly cut it short, saying he couldn't remember the rest and ordered the ceremony to begin. The guests were taken aback by his casual attitude, but some, like the Prince of Faya, found it magnificent and just as expected of Furza. The prince, Lord Seta, instructed his attendant, Mom, to search for a person named Sasha in the banquet hall. Mom looked around, but reported that he couldn't sense anyone with the same presence they had encountered before. Lord Seta told Mom to remember that they must find this person and bring them to Faya. He then approached the emperor, and the emperor greeted him as a distinguished guest. Lord Seta confirmed his father, the Sultan, was in good health, but had been too uncomfortable after the long journey to greet the emperor in person. The emperor noted that Lord Seta seemed to have grown significantly since the previous year. Lord Seta, while observing the emperor's similar aura to that man, decided to leave the search for Shasha to Mom for now. He then officially requested Perza's cooperation, stating they must focus on the purpose of his visit. Meanwhile, at the Royal Lecture Hall, the North Division Academy's annual seminar was underway. They shared the new book list and sales rankings of the Northern Duke publications, presented secondary creative works like sculptures and paintings, and reported on translation and theatrical adaptations. It was a happy and fulfilling time for everyone. After the scheduled proceedings, the final event began, the Newcomers' Short Story Contest, one of the major annual events of the Northern Alliance. All new members were required to participate by writing a short story on the theme of the Northern Duke, with the winning work being serialized by a publishing company. It was known for producing creative and unconventional stories. This year, due to an unprecedented number of new members, a special rule was added: a joint writing contest for seniors and juniors. Graduates from the Shu Marine Academy, the seniors, would team up with current students, the juniors, to co-write and submit a story during the festival. The winning work would be specially displayed in the Northern Alliance's Hall of Fame. The pairings were announced, starting with Olivia and Lily, then Mary and Josephine. A woman named Clisia mused that it had been a while since she had written a short story. She was excited to be paired with a cute junior and thought it would be fun. She was then announced as the senior for Team 3, paired with a junior named Ryan, who arrived late, blaming the festival's opening ceremony. He was surprised to see Clisia, his cute junior, was his partner. They greeted each other, and Ryan decided he had to win to live up to the reputation of the society's founder, his senior, Clisia. He then flirtatiously suggested he could just stay with her like this. Just then, a palace attendant arrived, looking for someone named Shasha. Clisia identified herself as Shasha. The attendant informed her that the emperor had issued a royal order to summon her to the founding festival ball and that she must accompany them. Clisia smiled and agreed. A veteran royal lady's maid named Burnett believed that the true virtue of a servant was to control one's expression and show no agitation in any situation. This applied even when the emperor ordered an unknown guest to attend the National Founding Festival. When a young woman named Shasha was brought in, the servants were confused, asking about her title and family. Shasha, dressed in a guard's uniform, introduced herself and asked how she could assist, but the servants were puzzled by her appearance and her relationship with the captain of the guard. Burnett reminded her fellow servants that their true craft was to hide their curiosity and personal judgments perfectly. With time pressing, she urged everyone to hurry. However, she admitted that sometimes, a servant must express their feelings without hesitation. Suddenly, Shasha was transformed into a beautifully dressed lady. The servants, now seeing her in a stunning gown, were in awe of her beauty. They praised her celestial appearance and apologized for not recognizing her elegance earlier. Shasha, bewildered, asked if the emperor had truly requested her presence at the ball. A servant confirmed it, informing her that the ball would begin shortly with dinner, and that she must hurry. Shasha was still unsure what was happening but knew she couldn't reveal her true identity. The servant reassured her not to worry. She then presented Shasha with a mask, explaining that His Majesty had prepared it for the ball. Shasha was surprised to see it was a masquerade mask. An announcement was made that, in the spirit of the founding day where people of all statuses gathered, the ball would be a masquerade. Everyone was given the same simple white mask to wear, a surprise to all the guests. A dark-haired man mused that this was likely done to prevent differences in mask styles from revealing identities, a typically calculated move by the emperor. Yan Perza. In a flashback, the emperor had made the sudden decision to hold a masquerade ball, instructing his aide to provide masks for all the guests, despite the short notice. Now, wearing his own mask, the man smiled to himself. As the masked ball began, guests admired a woman in a glamorous dress, wondering which noble family she was from. Her red hair was particularly striking. A man who had been instructed by the emperor to keep identities concealed recognized her as the lover of the business partner. Elsewhere, another guest, Sita, also noticed the red-haired woman and identified her as that person. The woman looked around the bustling ballroom. She felt a sense of awe, thinking this was a true sacred pilgrimage. She knew that in romance novels, a ball was a classic and essential event, a progression from debutante balls to royal banquets, where couples hold hands, step on toes, meet eyes, and confirm their love. She thought it was the perfect opportunity to gather ideas and inspiration for the writing contest she was participating in. She then felt gazes upon her. A masked man approached her and asked for the honor of the first dance. Recognizing him as the Northern president, she was surprised. He asked if she recognized him, and she joked that she was kidding, as there was no way she wouldn't know him. She was delighted to meet him again. She felt a sensation of heat where their hands touched, yet at the same time, a chilling coolness ran down her spine. She confessed she had never learned to dance and was afraid of stepping on his feet, but he reassured her that he would lead and she could step on him as much as she liked. She now knew for sure that she liked a woman named Klisia Mezerin. Suddenly, another man interrupted, shamelessly cutting in to steal his partner. He reminded the first man that he was the one who had invited her. The woman was about to address him as Your Majesty when he subtly stopped her. The first man was annoyed that the emperor had requested the same song he had. He called the emperor by his full name, Yan Perza, and asked if it was okay to act familiar. The emperor retorted that if he was upset, he shouldn't have let his partner enter alone, and questioned if he was lecturing him on how to care for a partner. The first man argued that the masks were meant to disregard status, but the emperor called him bold for using informal speech. The two men started bickering, and the emperor challenged the other to follow him to the training hall. The woman watched them go, thinking they would become close friends. Another man commented that men's friendships are often forged through rough play. The woman was relieved, thinking it was just playtime. She was a bit disappointed she couldn't dance with her boss, but was happy to let the two of them enjoy their friendship. She found the situation quite fun and decided to use it as material for her story, picturing a tale about a fake northern duke and the real emperor, maybe even making the tyrant emperor a heroine with a gentle northern duke. She imagined a twisted, cliché plot where the emperor locks the duke in prison, confident that this story would win the contest. A blonde man approached her, asking why she always acted this way when she saw him. He explained that as her northern district partner, he wanted to get closer to his sister-in-law. She was taken aback by the term, but he pointed out that since her divorce wasn't finalized, she was still technically his sister-in-law. The emperor sighed and told him to do as he wished. The blonde man asked if she felt frustrated living in the palace. She admitted it was true, especially since she wasn't allowed to leave until the festival was over, an order given by the emperor himself. The blonde man found it boring to just follow orders and asked if she had ever been to the Capitol Plaza during the festival, describing it as the grandest event on the continent. He then invited her to go material hunting with him, an activity recognized by their imperial-approved society. She was surprised by his proposal, but found herself liking the idea. Whispers filled the grand hall as guests buzzed with the news that the two men who had just passed by were the emperor and Mr. Tomer, and they were headed to the imperial military grounds for a duel. On the grounds, the two men faced each other, swords drawn. The emperor calmly stated the rules. Dropping a sword or a knee touching the ground meant a loss, and runes were forbidden due to the many onlookers. As a handicap, he declared he would fight with only one hand. Tomer, incensed by the emperor's arrogance, vowed to make him regret it. Suddenly, an old man named Hammer appeared, calling out to Yujin. He had been wondering where Yujin had gone during the banquet and was shocked to find him fighting Yan Furza, whom he identified as the enemy of Servan and Yujin's rival. He fervently declared his support for Yujin, urging him to win. Elsewhere in the crowd, a man wondered if this Tomer Ryukin was the one who had seduced his daughter. He then called out to the man, who turned to face him. A woman, meanwhile, dismissed the idea of discussing personal matters at a masquerade ball as inconsiderate and countered that it was his daughter who had done the seducing. Her companion agreed, expressing his shame that his daughter ended up with someone like Tomer Ryukin. Another spectator criticized Tomer Ryukin's swordsmanship and cheered for the emperor to win, declaring that the gods would not let him lose to such a worthless opponent. This enraged Tomer Ryukin's supporter, who demanded to know who was being called worthless. Amidst the chaos of supporters cheering for both sides, the two opponents locked eyes, a new fire in their gazes, as they both knew the winner would earn Sasha's first dance. Elsewhere, a red-haired woman was in distress. She cried out in frustration over her beautiful dress, a gift from the emperor which had been torn. Meanwhile, back at the imperial palace, another red-haired woman was trying on a commoner's dress. She marveled at how light it was and asked her blonde companion if it looked good on her. He confirmed that his visual measurements had been accurate and the dress fit her perfectly. She wondered if he had prepared the clothes in advance, but he simply urged her to go. He then led her away. During the foundation day, extravagant festivals took place outside the palace, timed with the banquet. Citizens gathered in the square to enjoy dances and songs, and nearby inns became crowded. It was said that the true festival began at night, as everyone gathered to watch the midnight fireworks. The woman was sure she remembered this, and her companion led her onward. He suggested they go up to a higher vantage point. Suddenly, he summoned a gust of wind to lift them into the... She was startled by the sudden flight. She asked where he was taking her, as the square was in the opposite direction. He reminded her that she was looking for material for her novel, and that their destination was here. They landed in a secluded, slum-like area, and she wondered how she could find any romantic material in such a place. The man then revealed their goal was over there. She saw a group of people in dark robes and wondered who they were, ruling out the possibility of them being priests from the Genesis Church, who wore white. The man identified them as a religious group called the Happiness Church, who were suspected of spreading rumors about her and his brother. He explained that their financial scale was so unreasonably large that it prompted an investigation, which yielded some very interesting results. The church would approach the poor and needy, offering free support, and once a target converted, they were forced to donate all their assets. Their entire family would then be moved to a church-owned manor where their labor was exploited for life, a typical cult operation. The woman, piecing it all together, realized he had brought her there to help capture the cult members. She questioned why he chose her when the Imperial Guard was available, doubting she would be much help. His plan, however, was interrupted. A young man with blue hair appeared, calling out to Sasha. He was annoyed, asking how much she wandered around. The woman was confused, not recognizing him at first. He reminded her of their encounter at the Persia auction house, where she had dragged him out without permission. She finally remembered him, but was shocked to see it was Prince Nasser who had grown up so fast. She couldn't believe it was him. The prince then told Sasha that he had come to ask for a favor. Her companion tried to intervene, saying they were busy, but the prince ignored him and declared that he wanted her to become his wife. Just as fireworks lit up the night sky, the woman, stunned, asked him to repeat what he had just said. As fireworks lit up the night sky, a young man named Sitha Nasser bin Zaid al-Fayya, the heir to the Fayya Sultanate, introduced himself to a woman named Sasha. He explained that while he was attending the founding festival to establish diplomatic cooperation with Persia, his other reason for coming was to find her and propose that she become the Sultan's wife. Sasha was taken aback, calling his proposal nonsense. Sasha recalled that Fayya was the desert nation at the eastern edge of the Asha continent, whose ruler was called the Sultan, and they had maintained a friendly relationship with Persia. She couldn't understand why the heir of such a place would be proposing to her. Sitha tried to explain, saying he knew it seemed inappropriate, but he had no choice because of myrrh. Sasha remembered the emperor mentioning something similar about myrrh. Sitha clarified that myrrh was a powerful magic similar to Persia's rune magic. It was a dangerous power that manipulated time and was difficult to control without a young and strong body. In Fayya, only the Sultan could wield it freely, and it was passed down to successors to preserve its legacy. The problem was that the accumulated myrrh had become too much for a human body to handle. He was the only heir capable of inheriting it, but the power was so unstable it could go out of control at any moment. He had tried everything to resolve the issue, but nothing had worked. Strangely, he discovered that when he was near Sasha, the myrrh stabilized. He warned that if the myrrh went out of control, it would cause a catastrophe beyond imagination. He pleaded with her to come with him to Fayya. Sasha was still shocked by the sudden marriage proposal and the idea of becoming an empress. Sita reassured her that the sultan's wife was different from a queen. It was a role for skilled women who acted as consorts to assist in governing, and there could be more than one. He added that there was no need for love between them, and she could live a life of luxury with as many men as she wanted by her side. Sasha was stunned by this cultural difference, thinking it was absurd to suddenly leave for another country. She offered him gold and spellbooks instead, but he insisted he needed a wife. She then pointed out that he was just a child. Sita insisted he was not a child. He explained that what she saw was just his body's appearance, frozen in time by Myr's power, and that by next year he would officially be an adult. Sasha was amazed that he could maintain such a youthful appearance. He urged her to seriously consider his proposal, as the fate of Feya depended on her. A blond man, however, found his small appearance cute and playfully suggested he stay in that form, offering to take care of him. Sita was furious at being treated like a pet cat. The blond man then grabbed Sasha's arm, telling her they had to board a wagon heading to the manor of the Blessed Bridge, warning that they might miss the next one if they delayed. Sasha, confused, asked for more explanation as he pulled her away. They jumped onto the moving wagon. Once inside, Sasha caught her breath and asked him to give her a warning next time. They were greeted by other passengers, who introduced themselves as fellow believers of the Blessed Bridge. Sasha and the man exchanged glances, and he confirmed her suspicions about the suspicious-looking people. The other passengers, a group of 3, explained they had hopped on when they heard about the wonderful trip, and commented on what a fine young couple Sasha and the man made. The man then explained to Sasha that the headquarters of the Blessed Bridge was extremely secretive. He had tried to contact them multiple times, but they only allowed family units into their manor, likely because they were aware of their own illicit activities. Therefore, he proposed that they pose as a married couple to infiltrate the manor. Sasha was flabbergasted by the idea, but he shushed her. She seriously questioned his plan, asking why he didn't take his own guards instead. He argued that as the captain of the guard, he couldn't pretend to be married to one of his subordinates, a moment of strange reasonableness from him. He added that she had the skills to protect herself, and most importantly, was deeply dedicated to the empire, making it her solemn duty as a citizen to be concerned about His Majesty's safety. Sasha found herself unable to refuse when he put it that way. She agreed to his plan, but then questioned why Sita was also there. She had only just realized that Sita had come along. The two men started arguing, with Sita blaming the blonde man for dragging him along without a plan, and Sasha wondering how they would explain Sita's presence as their son. As their carriage passed through the Zikrit borders, a fierce battle at the imperial palace was decided. A man named Isaac Mezerin was declared the winner of the duel against Uekin, with a record of 2 wins and 0 losses. The defeated man admitted his loss. The victor mused that the fight had been dangerous. Even with only one hand, he had been briefly pushed back. He wondered why he had gone so far, as he had only needed to assess his opponent's strength, and a draw would have sufficed. He decided it was time to return to the banquet hall. An aide rushed to the emperor, informing him that Lord Ryan had submitted a leave request and disappeared. The emperor was annoyed by the request during the festival, but decided to let him be, assuming he was up to something useless again. He was surprised, however, that Ryan had actually filed paperwork. The aide suggested the emperor review it directly, and the emperor saw the reason listed on the form. The leave request from Ryan Bardier de Ferja, captain of the Imperial Guard, was for an unknown period for an academic activity in the north, likely Kirusan. A note at the bottom stated he would be accompanied by Sasha. The emperor, connecting the dots, realized that Sasha had disappeared after changing into a dress, and their destination was Kirusan. Looking at a map, he pinpointed their current location in Zikrit and their intended destination, wondering what on earth they were up to over there. In the Lurth mountain range, at Mining District 31, a group of miners marveled at a magnificent horse, a warhorse hybrid named Chowkscream, effortlessly pulling a heavy cart. It was the greatest steed on the continent, a rare and astronomically valuable breed. A man commented that this was the horse that had caused the damage. Chowkscream had been sent to the remote coal mine as punishment for causing trouble, following Isaac Mezerin's orders, where its strength could do the work of dozens of men. The horse lamented its fate, feeling it was too much to bear for a single accident. A fiery, bird-like creature appeared, and the horse, Chowkscream, recognized it, asking what it was doing there. The creature replied that it was paying off a loan at 100 Yule per day. It then told Chowkscream that it shouldn't have left Sasha's side. Chowkscream insisted it had no choice due to a complicated situation, and that Sasha was in danger. The creature questioned the danger to its master, musing that perhaps the grand wheel of fate was hastening destiny's flow. It urged Chowkscream to return to them quickly, reminding the horse of that child's true nature. Chowk Scream, who had tried to stop worrying its master, decided it had no other choice. With a powerful burst of energy, Chowk Scream broke free from the cart, startling the nearby miners. The horse then galloped away at incredible speed, sensing that its master was going through a lot and determined to reach them. Meanwhile, at the Happiness Sect headquarters in Kirusan, a woman was questioning a red-haired woman and two men about their relationship. The blonde man Louis cheerfully confirmed they were siblings. The woman was skeptical, pointing out they didn't look alike. Louis introduced himself as the eldest, gestured to his shy younger brother Say, and the woman still expressed her disbelief. The red-haired woman then concocted an elaborate and convoluted story about their secret birth, involving multiple fathers, a heroic death, a tragic accident, and a remarriage, to explain their different appearances. Her story was so convincing that they were immediately accepted, and a man told them to wait while the paperwork was prepared. Louis praised her performance, and she admitted that the cult members were easier to persuade than she had expected. Louis explained that for cults, the number of recruits is a measure of success, and bringing in 3 young people at once was a considerable achievement. Say, however, corrected him, pointing out it was 2 young people and 1 child, which annoyed Louis. Say found the whole situation ridiculous, especially being forced to pretend to be a younger sibling and wear rags. Louis tried to placate him, saying it was only for a few days. Say reminded him of the Lucky Box auction where he was almost sold, but Louis countered that he had also requested cooperation from Furza for their investigation. He recalled his own undercover mission as a slave to track a criminal who had fled from Feya to Furza. His original plan was to use connections within Furza's upper class to trace the criminal, whom he was certain would approach corrupt nobles. However, that mission had failed. As the successor to the Sultan of Feya, he had then officially requested Furza's cooperation directly from the emperor at the founding festival banquet. Since the emperor had agreed, he felt he should return the favor by helping with their current mission. Sasha questioned whether Feyer really sent the Sultan's successor on such dangerous undercover missions. Say, flustered, tried to change the subject, and Sasha accused him of dodging her question. She reminded him that his marriage proposal was still valid, and he told her not to forget it. She pushed back, saying no one had been able to stabilize his myrrh before, and if she helped, she would be revered as Feya's hero and savior. He admitted he didn't care about that. Sasha, seeing no other way, declared that she was already married. Say and Louis were both shocked. She quickly clarified that she wasn't married to Louis, as that would be a terrible misunderstanding. Say, seemingly relieved, accepted that he couldn't take a married woman as his bride. He then asked if he could at least investigate why his myrrh stabilized around her, and she reluctantly agreed. Just then, a man entered and announced that the new believers had waited long enough and should follow him. He led them outside into the snow, explaining that the sanctuary was at the peak of Kirusan, the most sacred place, and they just had to follow the path up. Another believer commented on the cold and how warm the carriage for VIPs must be. The guide explained that the carriage was for external VIPs, but for believers, they had to take a different path. He handed them ropes, warning that people sometimes fell, and showed them a steep, icy path leading up the mountain. Sasha immediately sensed that something was off about the mission. She couldn't see the end of the path and questioned if they were seriously expected to climb all the way to the top. She pleaded with Louis, hoping he had a plan, but he admitted he hadn't expected this either. Frustrated, she called him an idiot. A group of people, roped together, trekked through a snowy landscape. They finally arrived at a large, snow-covered estate. A woman looked around at the strange plants, doubting they could grow in such weather. A man in a dark cloak approached and asked if they were the new believers. The red-haired woman confirmed they were, and asked if he was a priest, as they had been told a guide would meet them. Another in the group asked where to get a fur cloak like the ones the residents were wearing. The priest ignored the question and informed them that this was their lodging, and they were forbidden from going outside the fence without permission. He announced that their duty, starting today, was farming, and failure to meet the harvest quota would result in restrictions on their food and supplies. He then ordered them to clean their lodgings by the evening and left. Inside their new quarters, a blond man grumbled about the no runes rule but discreetly used a small fire rune to warm their room. He warned the red-haired woman to be careful, as many of the priests were skilled rune users, and her own power was particularly strong. She sat by the fire, shivering, and wondered what Sir Ryan's plan was, questioning why they didn't just arrest everyone now that they had infiltrated the manor. The blond man, Louis, explained that it wasn't that simple. All the victims had joined voluntarily and had been brainwashed into believing the blissful church was a good place. As long as they had entered willingly, the authorities couldn't shut down the manor just for its existence. However, He had heard rumors that on the last day of the Foundation Festival, a curse ritual targeting the emperor would be performed at a secret location near the manor. The woman was shocked to hear about a curse on His Majesty and wondered if the blissful church were remnants of the fallen Servan Empire. Louis clarified that Servan wasn't the emperor's only enemy. He explained that the emperor had ascended the throne at a young age and had consolidated power by purging high-ranking nobles, reforming hereditary positions to be merit-based. This had caused many nobles to lose their power and become dissatisfied. The blissful church had apparently approached these disgruntled nobles. Louis summarized that the church exploited commoners for their wealth and labor while recruiting nobles with grievances against the emperor, making them a clear anti-government faction. He revealed their plan was to raid the site of the curse ritual and eradicate the church in one swift move. The woman, having understood the situation, was still puzzled about the concept of a curse, as it wasn't rune magic. Louis reminded her of the church's symbol, which she had thought was just a fraud depicting a smiling lizard. He revealed that it was meant to represent the Eshad dragon, which the church supposedly worshipped. The woman was stunned to hear the name Eshad dragon. Meanwhile, after the duel, an old man asked Lord Eugene if he was truly all right. He believed Eugene had his reasons for dueling Yan Furza but was still concerned. Eugene admitted that his identity had already been exposed to the emperor anyway. He explained that he had attended the banquet to get a look at the imperial family and confirm the face of someone he wanted to see. The old man, catching his drift, asked if he was referring to the red-haired lady. Eugene fell silent, and the old man was shocked to learn she had ties to the imperial family. Eugene quickly apologized for his aide's inappropriate personal remark. The aide then asked about his next plan. Eugene announced he was going to the blissful church's headquarters in Kirusan. He explained that on the last day of the festival, they would hold a ritual to curse Yan Furza using the supposed power of the Eshad dragon. His aide was skeptical, but Eugene confirmed he knew the church was a fraud. What mattered, he said, were the rebellious nobles who would gather there. With Xenia, Servan's successor state, already destroyed, he needed allies to take down Yan Furza, even without a curse, as he already knew how to stop his heart within 10 minutes. A carriage traveled through a snowy landscape, arriving at a grand, white estate. A man greeted him, welcoming him to the estate. He introduced himself as Thomas Vukin. Eugene looked around at the beautiful, snow-covered temple. He commented on the difficulty of building such a grand structure in the harsh land of Kirusan. His host humbly dismissed it as nothing and offered to guide him to the manor, inviting him into a carriage. He then offered to show Lord Vukin the ritual site in advance, as he was the quarter's top contributor. As they rode, he explained that the blissful church was a cult that worshipped the Eshad dragon, the supposed founder of the continent, despite no confirmed dragon sightings in thousands of years. He mentioned their claim that the Eshad dragon was the rightful ruler and Yan Furza was an unjust tyrant, a convenient excuse for resentful nobles. He announced their arrival at the manor, a place where the lay believers lived and served, and praised the magnificent scenery. He invited Eugene to look around before being guided to the ritual site. Eugene observed the bleak conditions of the believers, thinking the place was much worse than he had expected. He had initially thought leaving the hostile group alone would be beneficial to his plans, but now he questioned if turning a blind eye to such atrocities could truly be considered beneficial. He began to doubt his own path, wondering what would happen to him after he killed Yan Furza. He had only ever focused on rebuilding Servan and becoming emperor, but he now questioned if taking the throne for revenge was truly justified and if he could really lead an empire. Lost in thought, he stumbled. A woman caught him, apologizing for the discourtesy. He looked up and was shocked to see a red-haired woman, recognizing her from the ball, though she was now dressed in simple clothes. He stared at her, wondering why she was there. A man and a woman stood face to face in a snowy courtyard. He asked what she was doing there, and she countered by asking what he, her boss, was doing there. He realized he needed to hide his identity, but she suggested they call it even as they both had their own circumstances. He agreed, though he found her unpredictable and worried that at this rate, his identity might be exposed soon. He thought that maybe, just maybe, with this woman, things could be different someday. He started to ask her if she had time later, but was interrupted by a blond man named Ryan, who cheerfully greeted him as Sir. The man, taken aback, asked Ryan what was going on. Ryan playfully called the man author and asked how long he planned to mess with one person, calling his hobby messed up. He then addressed the man by his full name, Eugene Weiner de Servan, revealing him to be a prince of the fallen Servan Empire. The woman was stunned, asking her boss what Ryan meant. Ryan explained to Eugene that he had already figured out he was living under the identity of Tomer Vukin. He said he hadn't caught him because he was respecting his own older brother's wish for a reunion, but now that Eugene was involved with the Happiness Church, it was a different story. Eugene, unfazed, admitted he had always expected his identity to be exposed, and that his plans were not something that could be prepared for just by knowing about them in advance. He hadn't minded being followed, believing it didn't matter if Ryan Ferja knew his identity or not. The woman, however, was devastated by the revelation. She asked her boss if it was true and if he had been lying to her the whole time. She questioned if all the kindness he had shown her was for some other purpose. Eugene, looking distressed, tried to deny it, calling out to her as Sasha. He pleaded for a chance to explain everything, but Ryan stepped in, asking Eugene what he was up to. He reminded Eugene that everyone knew the young lady of Mezerin was his enemy. Eugene looked confused by the term enemy. Ryan accused him of pretending not to know, assuming he was seeking revenge for Servan's defeat. He recalled the legendary Red Lion of the battlefield, Isaac Mezerin, who had stopped the advancing Servan army when they were on a winning streak. Eugene, however, claimed he wasn't interested in that. In the imperial palace, an emperor asked his advisor, Mirhai, if he had misheard something. The advisor confirmed he hadn't. The emperor had instructed him to find out everything about Ares Rikinois. Another advisor noticed the emperor seemed unwell and listless ever since Lord Ryan had taken the young lady Mezerin. He pointed out that the emperor had even been slacking on the founding ceremony duties, but the emperor simply told him to follow the procedures. Mirhai then began to explain about that person, Princess Ares Rikinois. She was the younger sister of the late Empress Athena and was very close to her. Over 20 years ago, she was taken hostage by a Servan prince, who was also an illegitimate child, and she later gave birth to Eugene Weiner. The emperor's advisor called Eugene a stubborn guy, and the emperor revealed that he had recently met him in Floria. He recalled Eugene saying some very strange things. Eugene had claimed that the only thing he resented was that his mother, who had endured shame and humiliation for her country, had ended up dying at their hands. He had said he didn't care if the rest of them lived or died, but he would never forgive what they did to his mother. The emperor's advisor was confused, questioning why that would be their fault, as it was the Servan army that had supposedly decapitated Princess Ares. Back in the snowy courtyard, Eugene was being confronted by one of his followers. The follower urged him to leave, but Eugene stood his ground, demanding to know what the woman had just said. The emperor, back in his study, wondered if what Eugene was saying could be true. His advisor reminded him of what had happened to the late empress because of that incident, but the emperor pointed out that none of them had witnessed the tragedy firsthand, while Eugene had definitely been there. He decided that if their stories conflicted, they needed to verify the facts. He ordered a complete review of all records of the Serban War in Ferja, from beginning to end, including records from neighboring countries and those seized in Serban, instructing them to check for any contradictions in numbers and dates. His advisor seemed to understand the gravity of the situation, realizing the emperor was certain there was a problem with Ferja's records. The emperor then told him to do it himself, and the advisor was shocked at the prospect of reviewing 10 years' worth of records alone. He protested that it was an unbelievable amount of work, but the emperor simply told him to handle it himself. As the advisors scrambled to deal with the overwhelming task, the emperor reflected on the old saying that you never know how things will turn out. He had never thought he would willingly dig into the records of the Servan War, but he now hoped that maybe, this time, he would find some information about the Red Witch. In the imperial year 612, before the Ferja Empire could fully celebrate the birth of their crown prince, the Servan Empire declared war. At the time, Servan was aggressively expanding its territory, and its military power was far beyond what Ferja could handle. The emperor and empress faced a heavy decision. And then, the empress's only sibling, Lady Ares Rikinois, the flower and treasure of Ferja, stepped forward. She volunteered to be a hostage for Servan in the imperial year 613. Thanks to her sacrifice, Ferja secured a 5-year truce with Servan. However, when the truce expired in 618, Servan's invasion began. The empress took command on the battlefield in place of the fallen emperor and resisted until the very end. Due to her determination and the actions of the Red Lion Knights, the war dragged on, and Servan began to feel the pressure. In the year 623, the princess returned to her homeland, Ferja, as a cold corpse. Heartbroken, Empress Athena Rikinois de Ferja passed away after a 2-year battle with illness. 2 years later, in the imperial year 627, Jan Felician de Ferja declared the end of the war and ascended to the throne. A blond man finished his story, explaining that this was all he knew about Eugene's biological mother. The ground was frozen, making it hard to dig. He admitted that he had always thought Eugene was acting out of loyalty to the Servan Empire, but now he saw that Eugene likely resented the Furger royal family for failing to protect Lady Ares. A red-haired woman pointed out that Eugene had clearly said, "She died by your hands," and questioned if the Furger army had harmed the lady. The man dismissed this as ridiculous, probably just a figure of speech. He confessed his memory of that time was fuzzy because he was so young, but he knew for sure that his mother had cared for Lady Ares more than any of her other siblings. He remembered that after confirming her body, his mother was tormented by the memory until the day she died. The woman reflected that she was only now learning how important Lady Ares was, but she still felt there were many strange parts to the story. The man agreed it wasn't just about the lady. He asked the woman if she had ever come across any books or materials about the Servan War, or if she had learned about it at the academy. She was taken aback by the question. He explained that the Servan War was his brother's Achilles' heel. All information and records were controlled by the royal family, and everyone involved had been ordered to stay silent, meaning even the young ministers probably knew nothing about it. The woman wondered why. Since His Majesty had saved the continent at such a young age, it wasn't something to be proud of. The man shrugged, saying he didn't know what his brother was thinking and that he was hiding plenty of other things too. He then commented on her terrible farming skills. He tried to reassure her, saying Eugene was being watched and would be caught soon, so they should head inside. She refused, insisting they had to meet the harvest quota. She criticized him for getting too into his role and reminded him they weren't there to farm. As she worked, she noticed a familiar scent from a plant and wondered where she had smelled it before. She was so engrossed in her thoughts that she didn't notice a young man with blue hair watching her until he spoke. She found him inside, diligently writing. He explained he was recording the Mer stabilization phenomenon, noting that when he touched her, the Mer energy calmed down. He elaborated that Mer was a power from an ancient divine beast that controlled time, something a human body couldn't normally handle. The reason his Feya clan could use it was because they had a faint trace of the divine beast's bloodline. He then asked her if it was possible that she also had divine beast blood in her ancestry, perhaps even a dragon. She dismissed the idea, saying her father was just a commoner. When he asked about her mother, she explained that her mother was no longer in this world. She reassured him it was okay, as her mother had passed away almost right after she was born. The blonde man, overhearing, remembered that the reason Isaac Mezerin had turned down the position of commander-in-chief was because of Clisia's biological mother. He realized he had never looked into her mother's past, aside from the fact that she died from postpartum fever. Clisia, trying to be helpful, wondered aloud if her mother was from an ordinary bloodline or perhaps from the Feya clan, and asked the young man if he knew where she had first met Sir Isaac. The young man was flustered, and Clisia, feeling awkward, decided to go for a walk, even though it was late. Outside, she sighed, admitting it was always awkward when the topic of her mother came up. She had promised herself not to talk about her parents, but what was really bothering her now was the fact that the Northern Duke was actually a prince of Servan. She still couldn't wrap her head around it, as she had always imagined a Servan prince to be a wicked villain, and the person she had met was nothing like that. She recalled the expression he had worn the day before, a look he had never shown her before, and wondered if it was his true face, and if everything he had shown her until now had been an act. She felt she couldn't forgive him for the deception. She was so lost in thought that she didn't see where she was going and ran into someone. She looked up and saw a man she recognized. Inside a grand hall, a man announced that everyone should show proper respect and greet the leaders of the Church of Happiness. Another man, an impersonator of Eugene Weiner, was introduced. A dark-haired man greeted him, and the impersonator, recognizing him, told him to take a seat. The dark-haired man, however, was trying to place where he had seen the impersonator before. He was sure he hadn't, as he would never forget a face like Tomer Yukin's. The impersonator, noticing his stare, asked why he was looking at him that way. He then announced that he had gathered the top believers to offer them VIP seats for the beginning feast of the coming descent ceremony. He called it a rare opportunity to witness the miracle up close and an honor, all thanks to the faith of the believers. As he spoke, he seemed to lose his train of thought. He was called back to attention by his followers and nervously apologized. He then instructed everyone to raise their cups and offer their worship to the true master of the land, who was being unlawfully occupied by Jan Ferja, and to the great dragon, Asha. In the grand library of the royal palace, within the confidential materials section, an advisor named Mirhai searched through records from the second half of the year 626, 4 years after the end of the Servan War. He sighed, realizing they just had 1 more year's worth of records to check. The emperor had personally instructed a complete review of all records of the Servan War in Ferja, from beginning to end. After much pleading, Midhai had managed to get one other person, Robert from the Ministry of Finance, to help him. They had been cooped up in the confidential section for days, with Robert losing track of when his last shift even ended. Midhai encouraged him to endure a little longer, acknowledging how exhausting it was to review 10 years' worth of records, and now having to cross-check them with records seized from Servan. Robert complained that on top of everything, the records had been neglected for 10 years and were a complete mess to organize. Midhai reminded him that it couldn't be helped, as the emperor had prohibited access to the war records until recently. He reflected on the emperor's ruthless actions, such as the Duke extermination and the slaughter of rebellion ringleaders, which became understandable with context. However, the obsessive censorship of the Servan war records remained a mystery to him. He had hoped this review would reveal the reason, but it had only deepened the confusion, as everything matched perfectly with records from Servan and neighboring countries, with no indication of any major mistakes by the empire that would need to be hidden. The records only detailed atrocities like massacres and slave exploitation, all attributed to the Servan Empire. He wondered why a gag order would be necessary for a victorious war. As he flipped through the pages, he found nothing unusual. He then noticed something odd: the information about a Servan platoon being wiped out in Sarai around October 626 was completely missing from the Ferja records. A platoon was about 100 soldiers, and a major battle in a critical location like Sarai would not be omitted. On that same date, there were no reports filed from Ferja at all. He knew this required further investigation. He identified the Ferja forces stationed in the Sarai Mountains at the time as the Red Lion Knights, led by Sir Isaac. He decided to consult with Sir Isaac, who had even served as the emperor's regent. Isaac remembered the Sarai ambush unit incident. He recalled that they had received intelligence about an attack planned against the crown prince, who was marching towards Karian, and the Red Lion Knights had gone to Sarai to prepare for it. When Mirhai asked why the destruction of the ambush unit was never reported, Isaac clarified that his knights were not the ones who had destroyed it. He explained that during a reconnaissance mission, a commotion broke out at their camp, and by the time they returned, the ambush unit had already been wiped out. He was baffled by the scene, as the state of the corpses was not consistent with the fighting style of his knights, and his were the only Ferja forces in the area. He had a young witness at the time, a girl named Sasha, who had seen something. She had told him a super handsome guy had come and fought, but she couldn't remember any other details. With the only witness unable to provide a clear account, and no way to determine if it was internal conflict or a third-party attack, the investigation had simply fizzled out. Mirhai found this understandable, given that the great battle at the Karian Plains had occurred around the same time. His companion mentioned that the emperor was always displeased whenever that battle was mentioned, making it a taboo topic at court. He then pointed to a record of the Battle of Karian Plains, where the 16-year-old Crown Prince Yan Ferja had single-handedly defeated 500 Servan troops in one night. This victory had drastically changed the tide of the war, leading to Servan's surrender. Midhai wondered why such a great achievement would make the emperor so uncomfortable. Suddenly, his companion, looking at records from Servan, cried out in shock. The Servan records stated that their casualties at the Battle of Karian included 3 infantry regiments, 2 Rune Knight divisions, and 1 Royal Cavalry division, totaling 878 soldiers killed in a single day. Mirhai declared it absolute nonsense, finding it impossible for the emperor to have killed 5,000 soldiers alone. However, he knew that if the accounts from both sides were different, they just had to verify them. After cross-referencing Ferja's records after the battle, he confirmed that the Servan records were accurate. They should have lost 5,000 men. This meant there was either an error in Ferja's records, or they had been manipulated. He couldn't understand why anyone would conceal such a great victory. Just then, his companion handed him another document, a record about Princess Aries Rikinois. On the other hand, at the Church of Happiness estate in the Kidu mountain range, a man greeted the believers, noting it had been a while and asking if they had adapted to life at the estate. A red-haired woman enthusiastically confirmed she had, proudly stating she had gotten the hang of breaking the ice that froze the fields every morning. The man was glad to hear she was enjoying the lifestyle. He then congratulated Louis, Shai, and Sei for being selected as outstanding believers, and announced that they would now be able to work in the indoor workshop. The woman, ecstatic, promised to work hard. As they were being led away, other believers congratulated them. Louis, however, was concerned, as he had no information about this indoor workshop. He had assumed the entire labor facility was based in the estate and now wondered where they were being taken. A group of people walked through a dark, narrow passage. A blond man mused that the followers of the Happiness Church called this place a workshop, but he was surprised they had dug such an extensive cave system in Kiru Mountain. A young man with blue hair, say, complained that his legs hurt and asked how much longer they had to walk. The blond man, Louis, reassured him it would be just a little longer. Louis then remarked that the cult members were like moles and wondered how deep they had actually gone. A woman named Shai and her companions arrived at a branching path. A guide informed them that from this point, Lady Shai would go left, while the rest would go right. Louis immediately questioned why Shai was being separated from them. The guide smiled and explained that it was because Lady Shai had been honorably chosen as a sacrificial offering. Louis and Say were shocked, wondering what was going on. Say thought they had stumbled into a place far too dangerous, and Louis agreed, relieved that Say had finally come to his senses after being so immersed in their undercover role. He suggested they wrap up the infiltration, but Say refused. The guide asked if they were really going to reject the glorious role of bringing the great Ashad dragon to their land. Shai, intrigued by the mention of the Ashad dragon, looked on. The guide then addressed her as brother. Say, surprising everyone, declared that he would be the sacrifice instead. Louis tried to dissuade him, but Say insisted, saying he had to see it for himself. Louis, addressing her as sister-in-law, quietly told her that while the operation was important, her safety came first, and if things seemed dangerous, she should make a mess of it. Shai agreed with a determined look. Say, concerned, asked if she would be all right, but Louis reassured him, saying Shai had a unique talent for solving problems, even if she seemed a bit dull at times. He then warned Say that if he was thinking of using and discarding her, he wouldn't let it happen. Say promised he was aware of how precious she was. Louis mused that perhaps his sister was more capable than he thought. He and Say were then led into a large cavern where people were working. The air was thick with the smell of sulfur. Louis realized with a shock that they were in a bomb factory. A supervisor instructed them to stir the contents of a barrel and chided another worker for moving too slowly. Say identified the substance as sulfur and expressed his dismay at the state of the country. He had no words for the situation. He observed that these were no ordinary cult members. The scale of the operation felt more like preparations for war than simple smuggling. Louis, having finished his task, decided it was enough. He declared that this was no longer an infiltration but an arrest operation. Say questioned how he would manage it alone, knowing there were many rune users present. Louis revealed that he had already issued a gathering order to his subordinates, who should be waiting at the base of Kiru Mountain. However, he was concerned that his departure might cause a commotion. He then turned to Prince Nasser, entrusting him to handle the situation in his absence. Say was stunned by the unexpected responsibility. Louis, with a mischievous grin, claimed it was an accident, but that his principle was to make the most of the cards he was dealt. He then referenced our second, Shai, who was taken as a sacrifice, implying it was all part of the plan. Say cursed him as a shameless brat. In another part of the library, Sir Isaac was reviewing a document. He wondered about the truth of its contents. He remembered the emperor's closeness to the late empress and how the deaths of the Rakinoy sisters had deeply impacted him. He thought it would be a cruel tale for both the emperor and the exiled Prince of Servan. Just then, an aide burst in with an urgent report. The emperor, meanwhile, was in his office, looking weary. Isaac entered, and seeing his state, decided to find Ryan himself, finding him utterly unreliable. He then announced he was leaving the duties of acting emperor to his one and only father-in-law, and warned that if he didn't do a good job, he would be punished upon his return. Thus, everyone was gathering at Kiru Mountain, the northernmost point of the Asia continent. A blond man confirmed that all the necessary items were gathered under Kirusan. He noted that climbing up to the manor had taken some time, so it would likely take at least a few days to get everything ready. He wondered how many days they had in total. He then unleashed a powerful surge of green energy, which spread out and enveloped several figures in the snow, seemingly incapacitating them. He confidently stated that 1 hour would be enough. The commotion caused by his rune magic drew the attention of the cult members. A supervisor ordered everyone to stay in their places and remain quiet, assuring them that the disturbance would be dealt with soon. As he tried to calm the workers, a young man with blue hair appeared behind him and asked to borrow some clothes. The supervisor was startled and turned to face him. The young man, using a mimicked power, quickly subdued him. He then addressed the crowd of workers, warning them that the place was about to become dangerous and that they should listen to him if they wanted to survive. They huddled together in fear. A guide led a red-haired woman and her companions down a corridor. She explained that before heading to the altar, she would help the woman with bathing and changing in a nearby room. The woman asked what she should do, and the guide simply told her to stay still. As they walked, a gust of wind swept through the hallway. The guide paused. Sensing something, the woman identified it as an advanced wind rune and wondered if it was Sir Ryan. The guide, however, decided to investigate the noise herself and instructed the others to proceed without her. The remaining attendants led the woman into a room and asked her to start by taking off her clothes. She hesitated, saying she could manage on her own, but they insisted on assisting as per procedure. One of them then asked if she knew much about the Ashad dragon, explaining that the dragon was very jealous and had a particular obsession with offerings. They warned her that if an offering's bare skin was touched by anyone else, they would be cursed. The woman, feigning fear, quickly convinced them to leave her alone, and they promised to return when she called. Alone, she sighed in relief, glad she had narrowly avoided getting caught. She found herself in a small room with only a bathtub and a sarcophagus, clearly meant for preparing the offering. She was supposed to bathe and change into the clothes provided. When she looked at the outfit, however, she was shocked to find it was a scandalously revealing ceremonial garment. The sheer and flimsy fabric left her feeling incredibly awkward. Meanwhile, at the ritual site, a dark-haired man named Mr. Tomer Vukin stood with other cult leaders, observing the preparations for the covenant of the beginning. He was told that when the offering was placed on the altar, great Ashad dragon would descend. Another leader commented on how lucky he was to witness this from the best seats for his first time, adding that attendees always tried to return each year. The worshippers at the ceremony were mostly high-ranking officials from Furja who were dissatisfied with the rule of Jan Furja. The dark-haired man, Eugen, knew he should use this opportunity to build connections with them. However, his thoughts were consumed by the image of a red-haired woman named Sasha. He couldn't get her disappointed expression out of his head, and he wondered if he would ever get to see her again. He knew that as the daughter of a Furja war hero, she would likely oppose him, a thought he simply couldn't bear. Just then, a voice echoed in his mind, asking if he had been so blinded by a woman that he had forgotten his own mother. Startled, he looked around but saw no one. A follower approached and asked if he was okay. Eugen, still shaken, dismissed it, though he was certain someone had been behind him. The follower explained that the altar was sacred and its energy could sometimes affect people. He then directed Eugen's attention to the arriving offering. The offering, a red-haired virgin, was presented, with the cult leader boasting that even the Ashad dragon would be satisfied. Eugen was stunned to see it was Sasha. He couldn't understand why she was there instead of at the manor. More importantly, he was shocked by her revealing outfit. He understood, then, what was happening. Whispers filled the air as the cult members gathered. A leader announced that the sacred covenant ceremony of the primordial beginning was about to take place. He declared that they would offer a pure maiden as a sacrifice to bring forth the great Ashad dragon into their world. He asked if they had prepared their heartfelt wishes to present to the dragon. He then raised a sword, the primordial holy sword Kreta, which was said to be a token of the covenant from the Ashad dragon itself, and declared that he was presenting the offering. The woman on the altar, however, was thinking to herself what a bunch of frauds they were. She recalled that the first thing she had noticed upon entering the ritual site was the ancient inscriptions carved beneath the altar. She initially thought it was a dragon summoning circle, but quickly realized the grammar was all wrong and it was just a jumbled mess of meaningless letters. She was then instructed to lie down on the altar. As she did, the crowd began to stir, with some claiming to see ghosts of their deceased relatives and others insisting they saw a dragon. She then remembered the distinct, familiar scent in the smoke, recognizing it as the ensnaring herb, a rare plant from cold alpine regions that was dried and burned for use. She remembered her training with a man named Lance, who had taught her to memorize the smell. He had warned her that it was far more dangerous than poison, as it weakened the mind and caused vivid hallucinations and auditory delusions. If someone under its influence even mentioned a ghost, a real one would appear before their eyes. To summarize, the plant being cultivated was the ensnaring herb, and its smoke was intoxicating everyone present, making them see illusions of a dragon. She looked at the so-called holy sword, Kreta, and scoffed at the pathetic imitation. She had hoped to meet the real Ashad dragon by following along. Now she was just disgusted. As she coughed from the smoke, a man named Lord Toma asked if she was all right. She felt the effects of the herb lift for a moment. The man advised her to take a deep breath if she felt dizzy, but he thought to himself that it was impossible to overcome the herb's effects with sheer mental strength, unless one was a true dragonborn. Eugen, the man's true identity, recognized the illusion for what it was. He knew that as a master of darkness runes, mental magic shouldn't affect him, but the strange herbal vapor was still having an effect. He hadn't expected such tactics and wondered what to do, as he had to save Sasha without revealing his own powers or identity. He then considered a darker path. If he killed everyone in the space, he wouldn't need to hide anything. As dark energy began to swirl around him, the cult leader was shocked, as the antidote they had taken should have made them immune to the herb. He questioned if what he was feeling was real. The woman, now fully enraged, declared that they had messed with the wrong outlaw and that this was a sanctioned rampage. She unleashed a torrent of fire, engulfing the cavern in flames. The cult members screamed in terror, begging for their lives as the fire spread. When the flames subsided, the crowd was in a state of confusion. They had seen a fire, a dragon, and even a demon, but now their heads felt remarkably clear, as if they had just woken from a trance. The woman, amused, realized she had finally controlled the fire rune to burn only the smoke and scent of the herb. One of the cult members, seeing her power, called her a monster and tried to escape, but she stopped him. She listed their crimes: labor exploitation, illegal crop cultivation, unlicensed construction, and drug abuse, and demanded their peaceful surrender. The cult leader, however, sneered at her, revealing he had planted bombs at over 100 points in anticipation of their interference. He declared that the place would collapse without a trace, and that the filthy subordinates of Yan Furja would all be buried alive. A man woke with a start in a dark room. He was in a cave-like workshop where he and other followers of the Happiness Church had been led. A young man with blue hair complained about his tired legs and asked how much longer they had to walk. A blond man reassured him it wouldn't be much longer. The blond man, Louis, remarked on the mole-like nature of the cult members and wondered how deep into the mountain they had gone. They reached a fork in the path, where a guide instructed a red-haired woman named Shai to go left while the others went right. Louis questioned why Shai was being separated, and the guide explained that she had been honorably chosen as a sacrificial offering. Louis and the young man Say were shocked. Say believed they had stumbled into a very dangerous situation. Louis agreed, glad that Say had finally come to his senses after being so caught up in his role, and suggested they end their infiltration. Say, however, refused. The guide asked if they were truly rejecting the glorious role of bringing the Great Ashad dragon to their land. Intrigued by the mention of the dragon, Shai looked on as the guide addressed her as brother. Say then volunteered to be the sacrifice instead, and despite Louis's protests, he insisted on seeing it for himself. Louis, concerned for Shai's safety, quietly advised her to make a mess of it if things got dangerous. Shai walked ahead with a determined expression. Say worried about her, but Louis reassured him, saying she had a unique talent for solving problems despite seeming a bit dull. He also warned Say not to use and discard her. Say promised he understood how precious she was. Louis and Say were then led into a large cavern, which turned out to be a bomb factory filled with the strong smell of sulfur. They were put to work stirring barrels of chemicals. Say was appalled at the scale of the operation, realizing it was more like preparing for war than mere smuggling. Louis decided it was time to act, declaring the infiltration over and the arrest operation begun. When Say questioned how he would handle the rune users alone, Louis revealed he had already summoned his subordinates, who were waiting at the base of the mountain. He then entrusted Prince Nasser, Say, to handle the situation in his absence. Say was stunned, but Louis, ever the opportunist, cheekily reminded him that his principle was to make the most of the cards he was dealt, referencing Shai being taken as a sacrifice as part of his plan. In another part of the library, Sir Isaac was examining a document, wondering if its contents were true. He reflected on the emperor's closeness to the late empress and the profound impact the Rakinoa sisters' deaths had on him. He knew the story would be a cruel one for both the emperor and the exiled Prince of Servan. Just then, an aide burst in with an urgent report. Meanwhile, the emperor was in his office when Isaac entered. Finding Ryan unreliable, he decided to personally go find his wife, and left his one and only father-in-law in charge as acting emperor. And so, everyone was converging on Kidu Mountain, the northernmost point of the Ashak continent.